A Sunday night we hit the screen. Golden Crush, Gold Thunder, the gaming king. CJ, the DJ spinning like a dream. Brooklyn vibes to the world of themes. Pixel warriors gather round. Controllers clicking, that's the sound. Using games to break it down. From the boroughs to the global town. Welcome to the game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge, where the players hang and the beats pound. Golden Crust and CJ in the mix. Dropping heat hotter than a joystick fix. Used to roll with Ash Ketchum, the OG squad. Now CJ brings the fire, no facade. Word game sharper than a ninja's blade. Every Sunday we got the arcade made. From Twitch to the globe we taking flight. Brooklyn roots, though we shine worldwide. Press start if you're ready to vibe. The Game Lounge crew keeping it live. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, go to the game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge. The game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge. The game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge. The game. A Sunday night we hit the screen. Golden Crush, Gold Thunder, the gaming king. CJ, the DJ spinning like a dream. Brooklyn vibes to the world of themes. Pixel warriors gather round. Controllers clicking, that's the sound. Using games to break it down. From the boroughs to the global town. Welcome to the game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge, where the players hang and the beats pound. Golden Crust and CJ in the mix. Dropping heat hotter than a joystick fix. Used to roll with Ash Ketchum, the OG squad. Now CJ brings the fire, no facade. Word game sharper than a ninja's blade. Every Sunday we got the arcade made. From Twitch to the globe we taking flight. Brooklyn roots, though we shine worldwide. Press start if you're ready to vibe. The Game Lounge crew keeping it live. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, go to the game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge. The game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge. The game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge. The game.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. We got a full crew tonight. The old gang is here.
Yep, the whole
The only
gang.
person we missed is Ash.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
But you know he gonna be in the comments.
Yeah,
He gonna be in chat with everybody.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to the game. Season 3, episode 5.
Nice. He got it this time, y'all. He got it. Give it up for him. He got it.
I'm your host, Golden Plus 200, and as you guys know, aka Mr. 200.
Yes.
Pass it on over to the co-host.
CJ the DJ, everyone's favorite DJ, as y'all know, and with the full panel, our queen is in the middle.
What's going on, Chad? It's Melanie Monet. What's going on?
And
Lion #1, Gold Nation.
And
Lion #2, Freddie Fazbear.
Nice.
We
got everybody.
They dropping bars back here.
Yeah.
They dropping bars.
They ready.
J.J. Styles P over here.
Right. They ready today.
That's what's up. So, damn, we got.
By the way, Chad, don't mind my bright blasting shirt because I feel like I'm just flashbanging everybody on the other side of the camera. Like my bad, y'all, my bad.
It's crazy when I look here and I look there. It's like, damn, that's what they see.
Yeah, right. You see this? It's like, God damn.
Yeah, I think you might need to take that off, nigga. That shit's bad, break.
It is.
Daddy Mac Gaming, what's going on with you?
I gotta
look like a damn highlighter.
I got a black. It does. All right now. All right.
You see YN. You see
All
that?
right.
Easy to help.
Yeah. Be easy.
Just simmer down now.
You want to be bothering people about things? What? Leave
You
me
know what I'm
alone.
saying?
Looking like a piece of corn on the cob.
You ain't always here either. You start your
Oh, you here less than him.
Not too much, they say.
Crazy word.
The yellow man in Curious George.
Damn, they're just not gonna stop. They're just not gonna stop.
I'm supposed to put my jacket on. I'm supposed to put my goddamn jacket on. Anywho, we got people in the chat. K. Cadence is in the building. Retro's in the building. BK Jeff's in the building. Daddy Mac Game is in the building. A lot of people's in the building. Yes, Whole lot of people in the building, y'all. Whole lot of people in the building. So, GK, what you got planned for us for today?
Oh my god.
They still talking about the sweat.
All right. That's it.
Niggas can't do no robberies with that sweater.
Oh, fuck it.
Yo, she went right back to the sweater. He dropped like 7 bombs.
Oh, my God.
That shit mad bright, my
You
boy.
gonna come back to the
Okay, that's it. You're gonna be the next flashbanging card.
You gonna be sweating.
Yo, Koza with the raid. Appreciate you, Koza. Welcome into the game lounge. Kitty's finally here. Oh God, this is hilarious.
We're waiting for him to change now.
Yeah, CJ had to step out to the wardrobe.
Right. He had a high yellow sweater on. Still no emotes.
Yeah. No, the emotes. CJ was trying. Gotta let the CJ come explain it.
You just kept the yellow one.
Leave me alone.
That's all right, kid. This he be all right. He was glowing. He was blinding us back here.
Leave me alone.
He said, oh.
Did that fix the tilt?
Yeah.
It's even now, right?
Yeah.
All right, goddamn it. Here we are. Goddamn it. Oh, my bad. All right, here we go. Black shirt, nice jacket. Goddamn
They
it.
bullied this man out of his shirt.
Out of my sweater.
Now you got
It's
flames
crazy.
on you. Now you fight
Yo, they
with
bullied this grown man out of his fucking hoodie. It's crazy.
See, now
Crazy
you got,
word.
Now you got flames on you. You fight your flame flow now.
And they
Crazy.
still
work.
going. It's crazy. Kitty said still no emotes.
Oh, so Kitty, we were trying, and we have to resize them, or compress the file rather, and then input them. We did see them. They're super dope. Could we show the people? Let's show the people. Let's show the people.
Bigfoot, I see you. Talking shit as usual.
Let us show the people what Kitty has got in store for us really quickly. Let me just snap this here because we were not prepared to show that.
He doing tech stuff.
Yep, tech stuff I am doing. Yep, that's me.
We got a great show planned. We got tons of games we're gonna play today.
Yes,
Cause there's not much of current events.
Yeah.
No,
it's
because it's holiday time.
It's
It's
holiday
holiday time.
time.
We're going into Christmas stuff.
Right. So we just vibing.
Yeah,
Xbox did have a showcase though.
they
And
did.
it was rated very good.
Okay,
There's
Cool.
tons of game that's
Okay.
going straight to Game Pass. It's about to get flooded.
okay, cool.
Top of 2026. It's looking good for games.
That's what's up.
You even know also Marvel Cosmic Invasion
Uh-huh.
that comes out tomorrow.
Okay, okay.
And it's on Game Pass.
Oh,
That was also one of the things they dropped in the showcase.
nice.
That's going to be on Game Pass.
Okay, cool,
So
cool.
there
cool.
you go. And I got Game Pass.
I don't know if I got Game Pass anymore. I had it,
Hmm.
and I did the yearly one.
Right.
I don't know if I'm due for a new year
Right.
or I'm still running in the same year.
Right. Oh, did
The previous one.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But real quick, let me just shift gears over so y'all can see the amazing emote that Kitty has designed for us. This is the Clark Kent with the suitcase.
I got
No, we're gonna do claps. We're gonna do claps for that. We're gonna do claps for that one. We do claps. All right, because it's your guy.
All right.
All right, yeah, for your guy.
nobody. You was a little late.
Right,
I
right,
know.
right.
I'm calling you
I
out.
was.
You were?
I ain't even peep it.
You
For your guy.
appreciate you, Kitty.
Right, and of course we got to get his arch nemesis
Clark
in
Kent
there.
standing on business.
Right. We got to get his arch nemesis.
That's a
in
good
there.
one.
Yeah.
That's Lex Luthor.
See, that's worth the bomb. That's worth the bomb. See,
That's why he CJ. That's why he does
yeah,
that.
this is worth the bomb
You
right
know?
there. See?
That's Lex Luthor though.
Yeah, yes
The
indeed.
little smug ass smile, make you want to slap the shit out of him.
Right.
Kitty made that, y'all.
Yeah, she's dope artist. She
Dope,
made the
yeah.
Street Fighter
Mhm.
ones and even some other ones of her own. The Charmander, the Sonics, the Kozas. like,
She does it all.
yeah, she does it all. Like Gluttony's ones. I think she made up some Gluttony ones too. Like it's really good. Really good. Yeah, there you go. Look, she
There
dropping
you
them in
go.
the chat right
Uh-huh.
there.
Charmander and Superman together.
Yep.
Life is good.
Yeah.
Life is good.
Super dope. And she was straight. Kitty streamed today.
Yes, she did. I was
She
like,
streamed today.
I was in there.
I was in there.
I saw the golden duck.
I didn't see the golden duck.
I saw the golden duck.
Okay.
I saw your duck too.
I had a duck.
You got. I think you got a duck. You don't got a duck.
I got a panda.
No, you got a duck.
I got a duck too.
You got a duck.
As a
It's a
disco duck.
Disco duck.
Disco duck.
Disco duck.
Yes. That was one.
You
Goddamn.
forgot he
disco
had a
duck.
duck. He's not paying attention.
Yes. I
Forgot he
remember.
had a
I had
fucking
the
duck.
duck. I had the duck. I forgot.
See? CJ
It's a
is a
disco
disco duck.
There we go. Disco duck. God damn it. I would love the disco duck. Disco duck for Kitty and the panda. Lion panda for Establish. Yeah. For sure. I appreciate y'all even including me in y'all communities with the ducks and pandas and lions and stuff. The lion, tigers, and bears. Yeah.
Oh my.
Animal Crossing?
Damn, this guy. So Kitty also sent us a dope trailer. It's a trailer, Kitty. We did find out that the trailer that we're gonna show is AI trailer, so it's not real, like Marvel real.
So they say.
So they say it's
Right.
fan based, but it's a dope trailer. We did want to show you guys that, so let's get into that real quick. Lex Luthor. There we go.
BT Gamer, what's up?
Here. What's up, BT Gamer?
Cool as hell fugazi ass trailer.
It don't look real. It's not bad for an AI trailer.
Where is this place?
It's fire though. You know, Doctor Strange is caught in there.
He's put
Professor
in
X is in there.
That is a
Professor X,
genjutsu.
nigga.
You got it. That
Definitely
is a genjutsu. You
They
got
put in
him.
the
He got him.
genjutsu. He is in
He
the
got him.
genjutsu. Yeah.
Professor X with
But you
genjutsu
were-
would be
yeah.
OD.
Long story. I
What you doing with that?
You're from
Why would you want to do that, bro?
universe.
Like, how do you lose? How do you win against
You
that?
don't.
You understand the multiverse. tragedy. And that ignorance is exactly why you lose.
Who are you?
Trust me, you don't want to know.
What do you want?
What do I want? Everything.
I met him in real life.
Yeah.
Professor X.
Oh, okay, okay.
What's the actor's name?
I forget his name too.
Patrick Stewart.
Ah, yeah.
Patrick Stewart, right? I met him in real life.
Yes, indeed. That was a dope trailer.
He said,
So
what you
dope.
watching? I don't know what he's watching.
BT Gamer said, what you guys watching? We are watching a trailer that Kitty has sent us. It's Avengers Doomsday. It's the AI version of it because they haven't.
Yeah,
guess,
I said
released
it. Yeah,
an
Patrick
actual
Stewart.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Clip is in the building. Jay's in the building. Drop a bomb for Clip.
Yo, what up, Jay?
Drop a bomb for Jay. Drop a bomb for BT Gamer.
Yes.
Drop a bomb for Koza with the raid.
Yes, sir.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You got everybody. We got everybody. We got everybody.
Yo, Cliff at the big red dog. We gotta catch up.
Mm-hmm.
YN said y'all gotta catch up.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know what
yeah.
that means.
Yeah.
They might get you.
So, anything else you got for the people, my man?
Hey, listen, I just wanted to really mention those clips that I've been putting out from the last interview with Just Kid.
Yes.
They have been flipping.
Really?
Nice.
What? First of all, the one that when I asked him about the rappers.
Okay.
Oh,
And
yeah,
he said DMX gotta go
yeah,
first.
Yeah, I seen
The
that.
internet hated him.
Yeah,
Oh,
I feel that.
Yeah, they was coming for Kid. They were
Yeah.
Yo, GK, let me hear something. Drop some
So
bars,
we-
bro.
Some bars.
He wants some bars. He want to be fancy, like driving a nice car.
Mm-hmm.
Should I do her? Do I have money? Cab fare, Uber.
Oh.
Ooh.
Come on now.
Man.
Come on.
That was clean.
Man.
That was clean.
Just sent you
That
Uber
was-
outside.
That was clean.
You gotta do that right there.
That was nasty. That was nasty.
You got to do that right there. BT Gamer said for you to drop some bars about Christmas.
In a bit. You just came off a hit cipher. You feel
Right.
me?
That was clean as hell. Look,
YN number one. He not YN number
Clean
one.
it down, you
Hold
feel me?
on, Cliff.
Yeah.
Hold on.
They
That was
fighting for
Blaze.
YN.
Oh, he said, wait, number one? No, what about me?
He's number one. I'm number two, man. Hold on, Cliff.
Right.
He
So-
dodging me. Who dodging you? Not me. I CJ the DJ.
So watch this. I put the thing out, so we hit about 2K with that one. It's still going. Got a nice bunch of people that was tapping in.
Mm-hmm.
I put out one like 1 o'clock last night.
Mm-hmm.
And within half an hour, it
Mm-hmm.
was at 17
Nice.
17K?
and 1.7K
Oh my God.
in half an hour.
Jesus.
We're becoming a big deal, y'all,
Yeah,
because
listen.
of y'all.
So shout out to Kit for that great interview, man. We got good feedback from that.
Right.
The people loved it. People love Kit. Some people hate Kit, you know?
Right. Some people say, who is this guy?
Is this nigga?
DMX.
Did he just move? Nigga, you not from New York. They was coming. They was
Yeah.
Other people had their opinion. Niggas was like,
Yeah.
nah, M gotta go.
Yeah.
Some niggas like Nas gotta go. Other niggas like fuck Jay-Z gotta go.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people feel like Jay-Z's overrated.
It was cold.
Some
It got
people feel
cold.
like
It got
Eminem
cold.
is not the rap god. Some people feel like Nas is not as good as they, as he say he
Right.
is.
Everybody got an opinion.
Whatever.
about something.
Everybody has their own opinions about things.
But that's what it's about.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say shout out to Kit and all y'all for tuning in and everything like that.
Right. For sure.
Y'all ready to just get into some fun?
Yes, of course.
So
Let's jump right into it. No
we
time
kicked off
wasted.
Fusion once already.
Yes.
People liked it.
Yeah.
So let's double down.
Let's double down on Fusion.
So we're gonna hit him with a fusion.
I see nothing wrong with doubling down on Fusion. Why the hell not? It's number 2, yeah? Or number 1?
What are you talking about? Oh, you're looking down here.
Yeah. Remember, we're upgraded
We're
now. We don't
upgraded. I'm
have
like,
to
what
do.
are you-
We
what
don't
are you
have to
doing?
do
I'm
shit
like-
there no more. We can do that.
I try 2.
Try number 2. Yeah, I see number 2.
Yep. That's it.
you doing?
I'm trying to stop
You
it.
gotta see the evolve,
Yep.
evolution.
Right. So,
This fusion is gonna be crazy. So the point of playing fusion is
uh-huh.
I'm gonna show you a picture.
Uh-huh.
That picture comprises of 2 other characters.
Right.
It's you guys' job to tell me
Who they are?
which 2 characters made this character.
Right.
You
Okay.
understand what I'm saying?
Got it.
Okay. Then afterwards, obviously, I'm gonna show you guys
Who the person
who
is.
who the 2 are. We got some good ones. We got some easy, like, you know, fun. Like it's gonna be crazy right here.
Yeah, this is dope. I mean, I think it's your first time actually doing fusion with us. So
Kitty
then-
said for
this is-
legal
this is
reasons
my
I
first
can't
time,
participate.
For legal reasons. For legal reasons. I can't
Oh
participate.
man.
Okay, let me get it on over there.
Your
Too.
lawyer told you you can't participate, kid. Oh no. You started
Here we
whispering
go.
in her ear.
All right, so here we
All
go.
right, so here we go. Intro.
Intro, look at the good quality stuff there.
You know what I'm saying?
Let's do this. Ready when you are, Trunk.
Ooh, I know who that is. That's Go Tanks. I know.
Yes.
I know who that is. It's Go Tanks.
Got that rotation in there just right.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that could be. Damn. Well, I know
For
one.
sure, that's Bane.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's Bane.
Bane. That's Bane and the other dude from shit.
He's missing an arm.
Could it be Terminator? No, it can't be Terminator.
Not
That's not
missing,
Terminator,
like a
that's-
wrist.
Bane and
War Machine.
Yeah, I was about to say
Yeah.
that. Yeah, War Machine.
Okay.
I say
I would say Bane and War Machine because of the
What's
color
that
and the
Shuki, what's that dude from
mini
He
gun
says
at the
he
top.
says Punisher and War Machine.
Punisher. Oh, I didn't.
BT
think of
Gamer
Punisher.
says, Punisher and War Machines. Are you in trouble for
But
Punisher's
Punisher's gun would be there though.
Who got the kitty
Definitely.
there?
Oh,
I would say Bane and War Machine.
Yeah, definitely got
You
to be
say Bane and War
That
Machine.
face is definitely Bane. 100.
CJ, when it goes to like the fresh one,
yeah.
try to pause it as soon as it starts before it moves.
Okay.
That's when you can see it raw.
Okay.
Now you get that, Diane.
Yeah, okay.
That's crazy.
Okay. Let's see who the fusion is.
Let's see.
I just put motion to it because it's cool.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Bane and War Machine.
Bane and War Machine.
That one was from Kitty Jr.
Ah,
wow.
Young Cat.
Young Cat.
Yeah. Young Cat.
Or was it
yeah.
Cubby?
It's a Cubby.
Young Cat?
Yeah, we called him Young Cat. She's
Okay.
Kitty Tat. He's Young Cat.
All right, there you go. Young Cat.
Yeah. Right.
Young
right.
Cat.
Drop a bomb for Young Cat.
I'm a ball for Young Cat.
Yeah.
That went together way better than I thought it would have.
Yeah.
It just went well.
It was clean.
It just went well.
It was clean. And but the mask is so he has the wrestling lucha libre mask on now versus
The thing here.
yeah, the
But
claw
that-
face
This
mask.
thing here is like, you know that's Bane.
Yeah, you know
Shit
that's
here.
Bane. Yeah.
That'd be a problem though with them too. That'd be a
Yeah,
problem.
definitely.
Oh, that's definitely Blade.
That's Blade and
Oh, wait.
Static Shock.
yeah.
No. No, what's the guy?
Wow.
Probably not Static. Is it Static? No,
No, the guy from
Thunderbolts. No, Thunderbolts.
no
What's the
Black
fusion,
Lightning.
y'all?
Black Lightning.
Yeah,
Oh, Black
Black
Lightning.
Lightning. Yeah,
Black
yeah,
Lightning
yeah.
and Blade.
I was thinking of that
That's
Netflix
tough.
show. You know the Netflix show that it's the whole family and they got superpowers, but they black.
Mm.
The what?
It's a Netflix show and they superpowers, but the whole family is black. But it's like a real life
That's what he
thing.
said.
No, that's not Black Lightning. Black Lightning. is
They
something
all got
different.
powers?
They all got
Whole
powers, and it's
Black
a
Lightning.
whole family. It's a whole family. And they got powers.
Umbrella Academy?
No, it's not Umbrella. It's not
Black
Umbrella.
Lightning.
No, it's not.
That
no,
sound like Black
is
Lightning.
something
Yeah, it
different.
does.
Yeah.
Is it two daughters?
If it's 2 daughters, it's
No,
Black Lightning,
it's
bro.
one.
One daughter.
It's one daughter.
One daughter,
It's
one
the
son,
husband,
one
wife, and a
daughter.
daughter.
Husband, wife, daughter.
What kind of
And they're
powers
all
they
black.
got?
It's a black family. Robin?
What kind of powers they got?
The dad got like lightning powers. The mom has something else, and the daughter got lightning powers. Well, she got both their powers. I forgot what it's called. Hold on, look at the show right now. Hold on.
Skip the Black
Mm.
Lightning.
But yeah, it's Black Lightning though. I feel like it is too.
Okay, let's see who it is.
All right, let's take a look. What y'all think? Supercell.
Supercell?
Mm.
Papa Chop said
It's a
It's not
Supercell.
Supercell.
Supercell, they weren't family.
No,
No,
that's
they
that's
weren't.
what
No,
he
not
said.
Supercell.
That's
No,
what
I
Supercell
think
was
it's
good, though.
Supercell.
Yeah, yeah.
It was.
Supercell was fire.
Yes, but-
I heard they greenlit season 2.
Yeah, I
Really?
need that. Supercell was lit.
Drop a bomb for Daddy.
Yo,
Mac
what's
Game
up, Papa
Alert.
Chop? Yo, Papa
Drop a
Chop.
bomb for Papa Chop.
Papa Chop, which 2 characters made this character right here?
Not Supercell.
This one came out nice, though.
Black Lightning and Blade. BT Gamer says.
Black Lightning and Blade, okay.
Yeah, he believe that too. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
I
take a
want
look.
to know what Papa Chop got. Hold on,
Okay,
give
yeah.
me one sec.
Let's see what he said.
Bro,
You know
write it in. I
already
don't want to know.
Ah.
You know. Now we want to know what you
You
think.
know
You
I
know.
already
You know what
know.
I'm saying? Like, come on, bro. I want to know. Write it in. Let the people see.
Right.
Watch him get it wrong. Watch him get it wrong.
They say Static Shock. I'm gonna lose my mind.
Oh yeah, it was called Black Lightning.
We
Okay,
said
that's the show.
that.
I'm sorry, y'all
Bro
right,
was
y'all right.
over
I'm
here
sorry.
describing
Get him
Black
out.
Lightning to us.
Ain't Black Lightning a total different nigga?
No, it's him and his
Get him out of
It-
here.
Get him
it was
outta
a-
here,
it was
bro.
a remake
I'm
of
like
that.
Black Lightning.
The door.
It is.
You know what I'm saying?
Ike
Ike
Turner
Turner
and
and
Power
Power
Rangers.
Rangers. Crazy.
Ike Turner.
Ike Turner and Power Rangers. Wow.
Okay, Blade and the Blue
Blade.
Power
Ike
Ranger.
Turner's
I-
LOL.
I-
Shut up, child.
I actually like it. Ike Turner and Power
He
Rangers.
said I
is
like
dope.
it. It's crazy.
Power Ranger.
All right, let's see. Let's reveal it.
Keep
I'm
that.
out of here. That Vanish is nice.
Right. Yeah, Black Lightning.
Bleeding Black Lightning.
Blade and Black Lightning.
Blade and Black Lightning.
Yeah,
That went well together as well.
man. It did.
Clefairy.
Oh,
and
that's Jigglypuff and
Kirby and
That's Kirby and
Jigglypuff.
Jigglypuff.
Kirby Puff.
That was so
That was
easy.
Jigglypuff.
Kirby Puff.
Kirby Puff or
Y'all don't know if y'all right.
Jiggly
We are
Bee.
definitely.
Y'all don't know if y'all
Or
right.
Jiggly Bee.
Y'all talk like y'all got it
Jiggly
locked in.
Yes,
No, that's
Y'all
Jigglypuff.
got it locked in.
Jigglypuff.
Alright.
Jigglypuff and
Kirby Puff.
Absolutely.
Y'all got it wrong.
It could be either Jigglypuff or Clefairy or Clefable.
This nigga said, Koza said Jerby.
Jerby. That's Jerby.
Y'all think y'all nice?
Yes.
Is that really Jiggly? No.
Kirby Puff is crazy.
For some reason, it's making me say Clefable or Clefairy. But
I just said
Clefairy.
Clefairy, bro. I just said that
Jigglypuff
just
is the only
now.
one that sings and
No,
put
but
people to
it's
sleep.
Jigglypuff that sings, yeah.
I know
Clefable and
Jigglypuff.
Clefairy
I know
don't.
Jigglypuff.
They just do the metronome
Yeah.
shit.
He said Kirby and Jigglypuff.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm gonna go with Jigglypuff.
Jerby, like Koza said.
Jerby.
I said Kirby Puff, but Jerby so much
Kirby
better.
Puff is crazy,
Kirby
Chomp
Puff.
said.
Damn. Kirby and Jigglypuff. Look at that.
Jiggly.
I could just picture boy, yeah, boy,
Yeah,
yeah, boy,
it is,
yeah,
it
boy.
I thought Poyo go crazy.
Y'all don't got that.
No,
Y'all don't got
Hey,
that.
No, that's the
Lord.
girl from
Bang,
One
bang.
Horizon, Zero
Why I
Horizon.
feel like
Bang,
that's Laura
A-Lord
Croft
and
and Black Widow.
Laura
Why
Croft,
that's Laura
or
Croft and
I would
Black
say
Widow?
Uncharted, Nathan Drake.
I don't think it's Laura Croft though. It looks like the girl from Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, A-Lord and Uncharted, Nathan Drake.
The sister?
You know
I
what
mean,
I'm
the little girl?
This one
Nathan
for
Drake.
you.
Oh,
This one for
Nathan
you.
Drake, Uncharted.
Mm.
I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go with Nathan Drake, Uncharted, and
I don't know who the
A-Lord.
second person could be, but
Okay.
I know the first one is the girl
I'm going
From
with Laura Croft
Zero
and
Dawn.
Black Widow.
Zero Horizon.
Laura
Zero
Croft
You was
and
playing
Black
that
Widow?
too. You was playing that. That shit was dope.
Yes.
You was playing Zero Dawn. Good game. Good
Fire.
game. Yeah.
Fire. I love it. Who you got?
I'm getting high.
I only
man.
have one, and that's the girl from
I need two.
Horizon Zero Dawn.
You gotta click
I
it.
love
Dos, my friend.
I guess
Dos.
maybe
Huh?
I guess Laura Croft too.
You going with who?
Laura
You must
Croft
have
and the
said
girl from
Bird.
Horizon Zero
Crazy.
Dawn.
Yeah, I'm gonna say him.
Laura Croft and what?
The girl from Horizon Zero Dawn.
Okay.
I said Laura Croft and Black Widow.
Okay. And you said what?
Nathan Drake and Aloy.
Not
Zero
the
Dawn.
Nathan
Oh, that's her name, Aloy?
Why you always do
Yeah.
that? Why
I don't know. I don't
you
know.
she just
I
be
don't
like,
know.
what he said?
never-
You know?
I don't know.
Aloy.
Aloy.
Like
Oh,
Nathan
Aloy.
Drake.
Oh.
Too easy to.
Tomb
I
Raider?
like Tomb Raider Aloy.
Is it really that?
Because the bow and arrow says it all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it was her. I knew it was
Laura
her. 'Cause I
Croft.
see her in the face
No.
It was
immediately.
Laura, I knew it was Laura Croft.
Nah, the face was Aloy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aloy.
Aloy
not Laura
all
Croft.
day
Face
long,
was
but-
Aloy.
Yeah.
And then she had the little visor
hell
on the
is Aloy?
side.
Right.
Right.
But they both used the bow.
Yeah. So that's
They
what was
both
like.
used
I
the bow.
want to
But
do
them
a
little
little
things
different.
that she was holding for the rock climbing,
Yeah.
that's Laura.
Mhm. I also what made me think about Uncharted is this pillar here
Mhm.
Yeah.
and
When
like
Nathan
the
fell off the pillar,
ruins,
right?
the
But
ruins
if
of
you
the
look,
pillar.
if like, well, I've beaten Aloy. That's all metal. I even kind of like squished the picture in a little bit. Because
Okay.
if you see more of the background, all of the creatures are metal.
Oh,
So I squeezed it in to
that's
hide some of it.
nasty.
Okay.
Because sometimes the AI merged both their backgrounds.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? So it's like jungly, but everything is metal.
Right.
Oh,
Okay.
that's nasty work.
But yeah,
This nigga cheating.
it's a good.
That's Peach and Harley Quinn.
Yeah, Peach and Harley Quinn.
What? Wait, let me fix her
That's
face.
fire.
Fix her face. Gotta fix her face. Gotta fix her face.
Peach
and
Quinn.
Harley
Peach
yeah,
Quinn.
That bat gave
Peach
it
Quinn.
away. The red.
Peach Quinn.
Peach Quinn is crazy.
Harley
Peach
Peach.
Harley?
Peach
Harley
Quinn.
Peach. She's Harley Peach.
Peach Quinn.
Peach Quinn. Peach Quinn.
Aloy got them skunk ass facial features.
That's crazy.
She do got that jaw though.
Whoever thought of this one, that's actually funny.
The hook gave it away. Princess Quinn.
Princess Quinn.
Yep.
Come on, Coles. He always coming with the names.
That's
like
fire,
that.
though. Like that.
Princess Quinn.
That is fire.
Let's take a look. Let's take a
It's
look.
real nice, yeah, definitely.
She's just like, yeah.
Look at the pigtails.
Hey, I just want y'all to know, for her to skate, I have to type that shit in.
Damn.
Oh, wow.
It ain't that auto-generated. Whatever they do, I'm the one that put that shit in.
Nice.
When the nigga was shooting the guns, I say, bust some guns. You
But
know
some
what I'm
guns.
saying?
All right.
Yeah.
What's his name?
That's not Superman.
Yeah.
That is not Superman.
I don't know
That's-
shit.
Nigga, this outfit says
I don't
Superman.
know
Stop
shit.
it.
But look at the goddamn.
It's the guy from X-Men. I don't remember his name.
Bro.
Cyclops.
Superman got the S.
No.
Superman got the
I'm a
S
damn.
on him. Knucklehead.
What's the guy? What's the guy
They
name?
don't know shit.
Help me,
I'm a
help me,
damn.
bro.
They don't know shit.
I don't know shit.
Superman and,
I forget the guy's name. He's on X-Men, and he's the one that threw Juggernaut big ass across the across the
He
water.
said, he's like, you know him.
Him and Homelander.
Yeah,
Oh.
Homelander. I was gonna say Homelander.
Homelander and him. I forget his. I forget
actually, it
his
might
name.
be Homelander because of
The American flag cape.
American
Yeah,
flag.
for
It
sure.
could be Homelander too.
This nigga just said Superman. I should really come over there and slap you.
Nigga, look at his outfit. That's
But
Superman.
you just said Superman the first time, you knucklehead.
I'm trying to say both characters.
Apocalypse, not
I'm
Apocalypse.
tired of you.
Not Apocalypse. BT Gamer. Jeff says Gladiator and Get Gladiator.
Homelander
Gladiator.
and Apocalypse. Who said that?
BT Gamer.
No, who said Gladiator and Homelander?
Papa Champ said it
BK
first.
Jeff and
Papa Chow.
Koza said Homeglander. As Homelander and
See, when
Gladiator.
niggas like Jeff and Papa
Papa
Chomp
Chomp
start
said
linking up in the
Homelander and
chat,
Gladiator.
and we got comic shit up here, you know what I'm
Oh my
saying?
God.
But wait, there's more.
There's more.
Oh, we gonna switch it up.
Okay.
So let's
We
see
gonna
what this
we gonna
is.
throw them off their skill level.
Okay.
Go on, press the button.
Press the button. Okay, cool.
Unity.
It's 3 of them then, I guess.
Oh, it is Homelander. Okay.
I don't know.
Oh, wait, who the hell is
is
that?
that the guy?
That's Gladiator. That's him.
That's Gladiator. Okay,
Okay.
cool.
You got a Homelander. They got through. Then they got through Juggernaut.
Yeah.
That's
Nigga
him.
that threw
Do
Juggernaut.
you know how his powers work?
Nigga that threw Juggernaut.
Yeah, he's just like
Nigga that threw
omni-powerful. Like,
Confidence.
confidence?
If he thinks he's stronger than you, if he has the confidence to beat you, he kind of just
He
can't.
will.
If his confidence wavers,
Mm,
that's a big part of his power.
okay.
thing.
So it's all about intimidation for this guy.
Oh, that's
It's the aura.
Kiki Palmer
And Rihanna?
Rihanna? Maybe?
No.
Kiki
Michelle
Palmer
Obama?
and Rihanna?
Oh, it's definitely
Kiki
Kiki.
Palmer, Michelle Obama.
I said Rihanna because of the forehead.
Damn! Shit! She said,
We
ain't
love
gotta
you,
do me like-
Riri. But everybody knows about the
She said, you
forehead.
ain't gotta do me like that.
Oh my god. Now that's Jesus and Kiki Palmer.
He said, "Make coach you did her dirty with the paws."
Right.
Michelle
Michelle
Obama,
Obama,
and Black
Black
Widow.
Widow.
Wow,
Black Widow?
wow.
Is it because she got all black?
Imagine Michelle Obama just busting ass.
Right,
nigga.
right.
You
It
will
gotta
not
be
touch
Rihanna.
Barack.
First lady shit, right?
Crazy word.
Riri and Kiki.
Riri and Kiki. Yo, Chop, get your old ass out of here, nigga.
That's Riki?
Riki.
Riki.
Ricky,
Oh,
going
Ricky.
crazy.
It's Kiri.
Wait, let me see.
Kiri.
Kiri.
Kyrie.
Hey, pause that. I had to type that shit in.
The kiss?
Yes. That's not. I'm gonna keep reminding y'all. The motion is all me. I don't
Right.
just press do something.
Right,
I had to
right.
type that shit in.
Right.
Mm.
We got kisses. All right, just go on.
My good sir, teach
Oh,
me
this
how to
is
do.
Rihanna.
Teach me how to animate. Teach me.
You see that hairdo that Kiki's rocking?
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
Kiki and Riri.
Yeah, like you said, the
That's
big ass
Riki.
like you said, the big ass forehead.
It's both of them though.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they do got both parts. Oh, that's
Yeah.
Jamie Foxx. And...
Oh, y'all fucked
Oh,
up now.
God, what's his name? That's
Yeah,
so
fuck.
annoying.
Yeah.
Is that
Ben.
the-
Ben.
Is that the white guy? No.
Keanu
Ben.
Reeves?
No.
No, it can't be Keanu.
Ben Affleck. Not Ben.
No, not
He's- yeah.
Is that the white guy who was in
Is
Dad
that
Oh,
Jamie? Is that Jamie
God.
Foxx and John Cena?
Jamie Foxx in the
Oh, that's
the
hilarious.
Batman.
This
The
is
Batman.
hilarious.
Jamie Foxx in the Batman.
Denzel Jamie Foxx.
could be,
Bigfoot
With the
stupid.
hair like that?
Oh, no.
Jamie and Henry
Oh,
Cavill.
Antonio Banderas.
Oh,
The slick back
Ah,
gives
Jamie
me Henry Cavill. I'm rolling
and
with
Henry
Chomp
Cavill.
on that one.
oh,
He says
this is-
Jamie and Henry
it's the
Cavill.
funniest one of the day. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Look at this nigga smiling like life is just good, you know?
For the
Who you got on this one?
for the Riri Kiki,
I was
Koza
thinking
said
of,
Kiana.
Kiana, yes.
was
I know a
thinking of,
Kiana.
Right.
Jamie Foxx definitely in.
Oh, this is hilarious.
Henry Fox.
Henry Fox.
Henry Fox, yeah.
I'm going with that. I'm gonna go with Papa Charm. He makes sense.
Why is your grin getting so bigger, bro? Cut it out.
Oh wow.
Who
Yeah.
the fuck is that?
There you
That's Henry
go.
Cavill.
It's Henry Cavill.
Oh,
That's
I didn't
Superman.
know
It's Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Big ass forehead.
I called it that.
Oh, Princess.
Jasmine.
That's Jasmine. That's
Princess
Jasmine.
Jasmine
and...
and
Jasmine and Belle.
No,
it could be Belle because she got the rules.
Yeah.
It is Jasmine and Belle.
She in India. The hamla halimala.
Jasmine and Belle.
This guy.
Right, he's just
Back
slipping
here.
and smacking his goddamn lips.
Don't be mad at me.
Jasmine and Belle.
I believe Jasmine and
Snow
Belle.
White and Aladdin.
But the scrolls. Why is the scrolls there?
Aladdin?
Aladdin, right?
Who knows?
Aladdin and Scrolls, which is Jasmine.
Right.
Aladdin has scrolls.
The genie and Belle.
Didn't the genie pull out the scrolls and tell him the
He did.
rules?
He did.
Yeah, he did.
Of
He
what he
did.
can't get.
Aladdin, yeah.
Baby, we just watched.
Okay,
Aladdin.
yeah.
You just need to like relax.
No, we act like
Let's
you
go
don't
remember
know.
the whole movie right now.
Yeah.
Remember the genie? He rolled out the scroll.
Right, hello.
I'm a little afraid of her now because she has 3 hands.
Yeah, that was. I was about to redo all that when I seen that.
No.
3 hands is crazy.
Yes, see.
Yeah, Jasmine.
First
Belle.
of all, that's my favorite
Now, the
princess
3
right there.
hands is crazy.
Jasmine?
Princess Jasmine is my
Yeah.
girl, and then the black girl.
Yeah, Jazz Kardashian.
Charles Kardashian.
Cozy up, cozy. What the hell is
Jazz Kardashian is too funny.
that?
Because Belle do give animated
Oh,
Kardashian.
we got Chomp on that one.
Chauncey, y'all got me. Oh, damn, Chomp didn't know that?
He don't know the princesses.
Yeah.
I gotta teach him.
He got a son. They watching all the beat up shits.
The Rock and Dwayne.
The Rock and Dwayne Johnson.
The
Same
Rock
person.
and Dwayne
Dwayne
Johnson
Johnson.
is
Same person,
crazy.
Same person.
Dwayne.
The door.
Because I said
Oh my
Dwayne.
God.
He ain't say Dwayne Martin. He called him by his actual
His
name.
actual name.
The Rock and then Dwayne Johnson.
Oh, what's his
Two
name?
different
I
people.
know his name.
You don't know his name. You don't know his name.
Annoying. I know his name.
You don't know his name.
Dwayne and damn, what's his name?
Yeah, I don't know his name.
I do know.
I'm telling you
Is
right
it the
now, you
dude
don't know
who
his
turned into
name.
the Hulk?
Mark Ruffalo,
No,
Maybe?
no.
the current Hulk.
I mean, the beard is making me see that in his face. The beard. The dude that turned into Hulk.
I can't get his name.
You give me a sec.
The dude that turned into the Hulk.
Oh, yes.
Nigga said he
Yes.
Face, right?
Nigga said you doing a Ray J with 3 outfits in one fucking screen. You okay with your shirt with that?
He got wardrobe changes. and
Right.
shit.
I'm going to come back with a tank top. A Speedo.
Every time they put a new outfit
Get
down.
that type of party.
Every new game is going to be a different kind.
But this the last game, nigga. I heard Speedo. We ain't playing shit else.
Wait, my bad. I pressed it.
Oh, you gave it to him.
Oh, my bad.
So wait, who's that? No, that's not the guy from the book.
Who is that?
That's not the Hulk.
Yeah, who is that?
Yeah, I know
That's
who
Christian Bale,
Christian Bale, the Batman.
the Batman.
Oh, the bad
I screwed it up. I was there. I was almost there.
I was saying that. Damn.
The nigga don't got no head.
Okay, let's.
I was saying the Hulk. Damn, jeez. Who the fuck?
Yeah.
Adam Sandler and
And
This was the
Um,
this is the finish.
Same with
This is the
Wookie?
finisher right here.
Adam Sandler and
This the finisher right here.
hey, what's his name?
Adam
I say Adam
Sandler?
Sandler and
This
Oh,
the
no,
finisher
his name
right
is the
here.
color
You don't
eyes.
sound like you too excited about that Adam
It look
Sandler.
weird.
I don't
He
think
looks
you
weird.
see
You look like
Adam
an alien.
Sandler.
I don't.
You don't see Adam Sandler there?
I don't.
yeah, I see Adam Sandler in the eyes.
I see Alan
I know
Sandler.
who eyes and noses that. I
Papa
know his
Chomp.
name.
Well,
So-
Papa Chomp said
And I
Tom
say
Cruise and The
Sam
Rock.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise and Adam Sandler. That's his name.
Tom Cruise and Adam Sandler
Or
is
Tom
crazy.
Brady.
Tom Cruise.
Or Tom
Tom
Brady, the football player.
No, I know Tom Brady. Tom Brady eyes ain't that color.
Tom Brady. That nigga got
I'm
injured
Tom
not
That's
too long
Brady.
ago.
Adam Sandler and the other guy he just said.
He got injured not too long
Tom Cruise?
ago.
Tom Cruise.
Brooke and Jeff say Tom Cruise. Tom
Saying
Cruise.
Adam Cruise.
Tom Brady, Tom Cruise, Adam
This is
Cruise,
crazy.
Adam
Supposed to
Sandler,
know?
Adam
Koza don't
Sandler
know
and
shit.
Tom Cruise.
Don't let Koza lead y'all into
What is the
detriment.
complexion?
Okay,
Yes,
you remember the last time we followed one somewhere? You remember?
Who is it? Now I
He,
want to see
he
it.
ain't never steered us wrong.
And a black man. Yo.
Kid, he said what in the complexion?
Right.
Oh,
I said that's Tom Cruise and Sam Wiki.
Play, I'm anxious now.
Yeah.
Sam Wiki.
oh
Let's
this
see
gonna
what-
fuck y'all up.
Let's see.
What?
Denzel.
There's no way. I don't even see Denzel there. This is Adam Sandler.
Oh man, I see the Denzel
Oh,
actually.
the jawline.
I
the
see it. I see the
I
Denzel.
don't
The
see
jawline.
no
The
Denzel.
jawline.
I see Adam Sandler, man.
The
Right.
jawline and the beard. That's what I
What
see.
the
The
hell
jawline
is-
and the beard.
That was the finisher right
Denzel,
That
there.
was
Tom
crazy.
Cruise.
The jawline and the beard.
I don't believe
That's
this.
what maybe.
He said, "I don't believe this."
I don't believe that. That was crazy. I
The
don't
hairline.
Right, Koza, ain't no way.
What you mean? Ain't no way, Koza. Y'all got. Hold that.
That shit
Yeah.
looking like
Hold that.
Y'all
Y'all
got-
got for the finisher. Denzel killed y'all
Jordy,
just
get your
now.
ass up right
Denzel killed. Why you mad at Yardy? What did Yardy do, bro?
You already catching strays.
Catching straight. He just thanking the people. You know what I'm saying? Denzel finished them, y'all.
Yardy is
That was
catching
hard. That was crazy.
strays.
That was
Ain't no
crazy.
way, bro.
I thought I had that one in the bag.
I think Fusion's here to stay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Fusion's
yeah,
here
yeah,
to
I
stay.
like Fusion.
Let's keep
I
Fusion
got some
around.
crazy cook-ups coming for y'all. Tell the people what we got coming on, CJ.
Yes, indeed. No, they can't see us yet. They can't see nothing yet.
You know,
They
I'm just,
can't
I'm just
see.
looking here.
They can't see
Just
nothing
looking
yet.
here. They can't see nothing
Don't
yet.
give it away.
Don't
just
rush
yet.
the process.
Don't rush the process.
My
Trust
bad.
the process.
I'ma
Don't
sit.
rush,
I'ma
but
sit.
trust.
I'ma sit.
Yeah, here you go. Look.
One for Lou Cozavius Jr.
Cozavius.
Cozavius.
Cozavius Jr. the third is
The
coming.
third, yeah.
It's Hawaiian something to drink.
I didn't even know y'all brought the drink out. I thought y'all was winging. This whole
Bro.
time I'm playing the game.
Wait, first of all, hold on, stop it. Why you acting like you new here?
Nah, that ain't that at all. My fault.
I'm sitting here like,
Why
oh,
you
they
gotta
got
vouch
something.
for them?
Because I'm sitting here suffering.
I ain't know.
Yeah,
they
she.
was
It's a
out
reason
here.
why she can't drink.
Right.
I ain't know they was out
Wait,
here.
hold on.
Nigga, give me the
Yeah.
damn drink.
Give me the damn drink now, nigga.
All of a sudden, now he thirsty. You know?
Nah, you should pass it to YN2
I've been,
first.
you know what?
YN2 first. Yeah.
I've been gave y'all cups
He said
45
this
minutes
game
ago.
almost ready.
What do you think the cups is for?
Estimated an hour
Nah, this
ago.
whole shit-
Estimated.
Wait.
Wait.
Where are you? Where are you?
Estimated an hour ago.
An hour ago. I gave these niggas cups an hour ago. For what reason?
It really has almost been an hour.
I just gave him cups for no reason.
I ain't know, gang. The cup was in my pocket this whole time.
Yeah. And you
The
beat
cup
me.
was in
And
my
it's my
pocket.
fault.
Yeah.
I didn't know y'all
CJ
busted up
Cole.
yet. My fault.
Here you go.
Kozavius.
CJ Cozavius Jr. the third. Love it. I love
Look,
it. Then
Bigfoot-
Papa Trump said, I believe in CJ. BT Gamer said, GK, is my game almost ready?
Oh wow.
And then Bigfoot said, you a big ass kid with them house shoes on.
Shit, bro. Shit.
He be rocking
What's
them
so
shits
wrong
every day,
with the
bro.
I'm not
Every
gonna hold you,
day.
Bigfoot. I would probably be wearing some shit too. I would,
BT.
What's so wrong
If it
with
wasn't
the
raining
sunset?
outside, I probably would have worn my Crocs.
BT, we're not doing verses today,
Right.
and we're still behind from Thanksgiving episode. So we're catching up. We're catching up.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff we're doing today we were supposed to do last week actually.
Yo.
But we got we have a schedule and everything's right on track.
Right. But we're jumping into our game.
What we got going on?
So right now we got some shit.
What you mean by
I'm
that?
going to explain what some shit is.
Yeah, okay, go on and explain it.
As soon as my brain processes what some shit is.
What's the shit you're talking about?
No. Monet, Melanated Monet has a game.
Yes,
And
yes.
It's whatever that game is. I'm gonna just press the play button.
I want to know what it is before you.
Nope.
It's gonna press the
You
play.
don't
It's
get
gonna
to
it's gonna
see.
get to it.
No hints for this one.
Yeah. 'Cause
Mr.
you-
Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
What was that
Hey,
person?
Tom Cruise.
Y'all met- you
Miami.
salty?
That was
You
crazy
salty on the
work.
Denzel?
That was crazy.
Right.
Ah, nigga.
God damn it, that was crazy. I was confident.
Oh, my
Wow.
God.
Play it.
So here we go. All right. So here we
Who
go.
is
We're
Shorty
gonna-
like Yardy tablet though? Who that?
Bro, that's the Chun Li, bro.
I ain't know. Oh, that's there's no buttons, so I
Yo,
ain't know.
hey, relax. That's the listen.
That's not
upgrade.
no iPad. That's the fake pad.
Not an iPad.
I ain't no iPad. That's fake
It's
pad.
not an iPad.
That's with your boy Young Cuts. That's Young Cuts right there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shout out to our guy Young Cuts. Drop a bomb for our guy Young Cuts.
Yes, sir.
Definitely gotta have him back on the show
Oh, he
again.
definitely
Maybe
will
he
be
can
back
cut
on the
both
show
of our
again.
heads
Okay,
that
okay.
day. Maybe.
Hook it up.
Yeah. Or do another pop-up shop on him
On
because
him,
it's a hit
yes.
shot because that's a shot from you
Yeah, that's
for
his
your
shop
birthday
when we went up
stream.
there. Yep.
And
Looking cool.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And that not to mention the sweater that you got on is
That's
his
his brand.
it's
there.
his brand. It's his
Yep.
brand, Seeking Happiness. It's a dope dude, entrepreneur in his own right, and
Doing his thing.
young barber.
He's on Instagram, Young Cuts.
Yep. It's spelled specifically a way, but
YUNG.
no, YVNG.
Yeah, he said,
C K, I think KUTZ or CUTZ.
It's crazy.
Melanated Monet.
The Queen.
Yes,
Yo,
indeed.
he just every episode I'm
And
shocked.
me.
Thanksgiving, man.
I'm saying.
You know, had to get the turkey. Me and the turkey was having a conversation. You see the little tip on my face, like, get your hands off me, fam. Get your hands off
He
me.
got the turkey ass in his face. Though.
The ass. That's not the ass, the head.
The ass is at the bottom.
Oh.
Yeah,
That's the wings.
Don't
That's
say I got
that's
the turkey
wings.
ass.
That's
You should be jealous that the turkey ass is in my face.
No.
Wow.
She said no.
How you know? How you know if it was a female or not?
No ass either.
Good question, bro.
How you know if it's a female or not?
Good question.
Yeah, see, you gotta check that. You gotta check the testicles.
Of course, we all know Game Lounge is affiliated with Art Club, Bridge Crew, Maid Mafia, and yours truly. And we definitely want to pay some homage this time to you guys. The Game Lounge community affiliates is so many more. There's so many of y'all. I couldn't put everybody, but I put a whole lot.
Yes.
And we just would like to say thank you for rocking with us
See a lot of my
every
peoples up
Sunday.
there, man. That was
Whole
nice.
lot of people. It's so much. But this game, the Game Lounge presents Melanated Monet's game. Which one is right?
Okay.
We all know that that's her game. Pick the correct version, pretty much. You're going to see pictures, and you're going to pick the correct version, what you think is the correct version.
Okay.
Right, chat? We've done this before. This is not nothing new. This is easy. It's something you see it every day.
I know all the logos by heart. Stop playing with me.
Okay. Well, let's see.
Let's see.
Which one is right?
Which one is right?
Left is right.
Left is right.
Left is right?
Yes.
Okay. Coca-Cola sign, chat. Coca-Cola, y'all. The left, it's either the left or the right.
See, even Koza agree with me. Yo, Koza, I appreciate you, bro.
I guess I'm gonna ride with y'all on that one.
I did have a brain fart. Fair point. CJ had a brain fart. I did have a brain fart. I really did.
You say he had a brain fart.
It's Lottie. Someone tell me why he looked like a damn glow stick in the back.
Oh shit!
So now they on you now.
Damn.
Oh, look who's back here glowing.
First off,
I had the table half
First
turned.
off, that's Mike.
Let's go.
Shut the fuck up.
Drop a bomb.
That is my co-host.
Yo.
Drop a
That's
bomb for that right there.
crazy.
Yeah.
The sniper shot was crazy.
I
son.
appreciate you, Lottie. I appreciate you, Lottie.
Shut up, Zay.
Yeah.
You asked the bed, nigga. You got screwed
Yeah.
Say,
You got screwed them all.
You got screwed them all. Yeah, you
Right.
got screwed them all. Take your ass to bed.
It's always
Yes,
it's
indeed.
always
Oh,
always enough time for one snipe. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
real quick. It was a sneaky snipe, too. Pew. Dropped him. Anywho, Koza says left. Cliff says left. BT Gamer says left.
Left.
Who hasn't drank
And then they're
Coca-Cola
laughing
in a long
at this
time?
guy back here.
Yeah.
So let's take a look. Let's see which one it actually is. Let's take a look. I'm gonna sip my drink while we sit here.
It's left.
Answer is left, y'all. Answer is definitely left. Y'all know Coca-Cola. Y'all drunk it all the time. What about Amazon? Y'all all order from Amazon.
It's A.
It's A.
Let's see which one it is. Is it A, B, C, or
That one
D?
is definitely A.
At what point?
Man, if you buy from D, your whole
Look.
account information is
Because
out there, bro.
you know it goes from A to Z.
Yeah.
That's actually purposely done.
Yeah.
From A to Z.
Right,
They
right,
cover
right.
It goes
everything
A to Z, but
from
it goes,
A to Z.
Right.
it
And
goes
then
A
if they
to
do,
Z.
if they have the arrow on top, that means your package bounced
Yeah.
and went back.
And then it makes a little smile. So
Right. And then the C is the package got returned.
Cliff said C.
Cliff says C?
What planet Cliff living on?
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
right. What you living on?
He
All
said,
right.
"Oh, I brought shit from D."
Did you ever get it?
I know, because it bounced.
Instead of out. That way.
I'm gonna tell you this right now, Cliff. See me on Street Fighter 6 after this. See me on Street Fighter 6.
Cliff don't play Street Fighter 6?
You don't play Street Fighter?
No.
Oh my god.
You don't know Cliff that well, do you?
No, I don't. I saw him in person one day.
He
I did see him
played
in
Street
person.
Fighter.
He played it
But
before.
he's not on it.
He's not us. Like he's a he'll be there and he'll probably do some fights with
Right,
us.
yeah, but he's not.
But he's not competitive in
At least
Street
not.
Fighter.
Probably not currently.
After saying that, he need that ass whooping after that.
Nah, he's not competitive, bro. Clip's not the one now. If you say something to Dirty Dan,
Dirty Dan go crazy.
He might.
Yeah, Dirty Dan is something different.
Yeah, Dirty Dan and
What's
his
gonna keep me in the corner?
the Honda player?
Baldoni.
Baldoni. Yeah,
He's a master now.
Is he?
Yep. That's a master Honda now.
Master Honda. Drop a bomb for Baldoni. The master Honda. Savage.
Said YN challenge out of nowhere, shaking my head.
Look. Clip catching strays with Street Fighter, but
just
no
chilling.
reason.
Just because he said C.
Yep, he just like C. Oh yeah, Capcom. Yeah, what you say? C for Capcom. Get this catch this face in Street
Let's
Fighter.
play Street Fighter
right now.
Because yeah, it's A.
It's definitely A. Yeah, I say. Okay, let's see. Let's see if it's definitely A. You see the question marks in the back too, right? Really nice touch to the. Yes, it's definitely A, y'all. It's definitely A. Yes.
Oh, you better
BMW, y'all. Some of y'all drive them. Some of y'all sit in them. Some of y'all are passenger princesses inside of them.
This one got me fucked up.
Okay, so
which logo is it right there? Is it the left one or is it the right one?
Oh, shit.
No Googling.
This one got me fucked
No
up.
Googling.
It's the right one. I want to say the right. It's the left. It's the left.
I want to say the left one.
It's the left?
But do you know what BMW stand for?
Black man working.
No.
yeah,
no.
basically, black man working. Yeah.
Broken machinery wants. Broken machinery want. Broken Yo. I can't get the W
I'm
out
gonna
of
go
my
A.
head.
They
That
say-
blue-
I can't get the
that
W out of
blue-
my head.
That blue look proper.
Right, so Koza says A. Cliff says A. Kitty says kiddo middle. She's gonna stay with the green line right there. She's gonna sit right there in the middle. Lottie says left. Chomp says right. And Cliff says or left.
Brooklyn Most Wanted. Oh my God.
Okay. Brooklyn Most Wanted. BMW. I like
Brooklyn
Cliff's
Most
line better.
Wanted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you guys say? What do y'all say?
I'm saying left.
You're saying left? You
I'm
say
gonna stick
left?
to left. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm gonna stick to left.
Okay. Wife?
Look, I don't got Wi-Fi on my
My game
phone.
already know the answer.
Oh yeah, it is. You do know the answer, right?
Left. I say left.
And
I'm gonna sip my drink and say left.
you gonna say left? Okay, well let's see what it is, y'all. Let's see what it is. Let me hit the button real quick.
It's margarita fire.
Yeah, margarita's good.
It's fire. You gotta put me onto something.
With some ice. And
Correct answer, y'all, is definitely left.
Okay.
It's definitely left.
Okay.
It was a brain teaser.
It was.
What about Tesla? Some of y'all got
Right.
Teslas in y'all garages. Some of y'all
That
have
one.
driven Teslas.
B.
What about Tesla? You definitely say it's right.
Yep.
Okay.
That cut ain't that deep.
Okay, the cut, the V cut right
Yeah,
there.
it's not
Okay,
that
it's not
deep.
that deep. Man. Okay, pause.
Look like you might as well put a tie
Yeah,
right
but
there.
you
in the
might want to
collar.
pause that again because you said it twice.
What, the cut not that deep?
Yeah.
But what if the
I
cut
mean,
was
it's a cut.
It's just a cut.
All right, I said,
it's just a cut.
I said the V's
Hold
not
on,
that. I
but what
said the
if-
V's
what if-
cut. Yeah. The V's not that deep. I said yeah.
No, see, you trying to.
That's what I said.
For no reason.
I was just talking about the cut.
Overly
Yeah,
freaked
all right.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Overly
it's hot.
freaked out.
Is ya?
What the fuck? That got me scared.
Don't be scared to be overly freaked out.
It's hot.
Don't be scared.
I'm
You
hot
said
and
don't.
bothered.
This one said don't be scared. It's crazy.
You cheating?
What you going
You
to
cheating? You on your phone? You cheating?
Nigga, my phone is
Right.
Right,
Yeah,
and can't
right,
get no
right,
writer.
right.
Everyone's saying right,
Yeah,
right,
it's
right, right.
Y'all beat your ass.
Okay, here we go. Let's see. Let's see
I'll
what
say
this
right.
is.
I say right.
Said right. Correct answer. Of course, y'all. Y'all say right. It is right. All
We on the money
right.
so far. We
All
have
right.
Whoever had picked left, they ate it.
What about Lay's potato chips?
Come on now.
Everybody love Lay's. Everybody love Lay's. Sour cream and onions, the original recipes, the barbecues, honey barbecues.
I'm gonna go right.
You gonna go right? Okay, cool.
Alright, I'm gonna be the opposite.
You gonna go? You gonna go?
You gonna go
right?
left? Okay, cool. What you going?
Say left.
You going left? Okay, what you going? Oh yeah.
What's the difference?
When have we ever saw the Y connect to the S?
The Y and S.
Koza says those are the same logos. No,
it's not.
Koza, they're not the same
Koza,
logos.
not
we
the
not
same.
friends no more.
Pay attention to the Y's and the
Look-
S, Koza.
Koza, we not friends anymore.
So
after you said that.
if I had to,
Nah, the Y and the S is conjoined on the right.
yep. So it's conjoined on the right, and then
got a whole
it's
bunch of
not
mixed-
conjoined on the left.
I'm going right.
GK's going right. Koza said, "Oh, the connection. I'm gonna go left." Lottie said
See,
left.
no Call of Duty.
Cliff is going right. Kitty said, "Oi."
Papa Chop went right.
She would say, oh.
GK,
Oh, okay.
oi.
It's left. They were never connected. Okay.
Cliff said it's Vegeta's widow's peak. He talking about the V code.
Yes. Yes. Definitely Vegeta's Widow.
Oh,
for sure.
nah, it's the Vegeta go crazy.
I need my glasses, Kitty said. And BT Gamer says right. Let's see. It's a bunch of different answers here.
Yeah, it's pretty mixed.
Yeah, it's close. It's very close.
Mhm.
Very close. Very close. Let's see. The correct answer is, y'all, left. You right people are wrong this time. What about KFC?
Yeah, alright.
Oh,
Yeah.
What about Kentucky Fried
Still
Chicken?
beefing over
Let me get
Denzel.
this
It's
one, but not
crazy.
black.
Or Kennedy Fried Chicken?
It's not. It's
You
yo.
get this
What?
one,
You ever
but not
notice
black.
how his tie looks like a little body?
Yes.
The tie does look like a little body. But is the tie there or
Or
is
is it
the
not
tie
there?
missing?
It's A. I'm saying A.
It's KFC.
I think I'm gonna go
Is the
A.
tie there or
I
is the
don't
tie
see-
missing
I don't
for
remember
this
seeing
logo
A.
specifically?
I don't remember just
Because they
seeing
do
it.
have
though.
one of each
But that's
in,
what,
in a
that's, what,
sense.
that's what I was about to say. That
Because if you see his full body,
have them both existed.
It's kill fat children, bro.
in a sense, yeah. Depends on how you're looking at
Man,
him.
I'm gonna go A at this point.
But
He said, "I'm going
for
A."
this exact square, which is obviously what's on the boxes of chicken and all of that, which
What
logo
Chess
is
said?
right?
It gotta be with the
Say
tie.
A.
You're gonna say with the tie?
Yeah.
Okay, left.
I don't eat the white man's chicken.
I don't eat the white. Damn, Coach. I don't eat the white man's chicken. He probably got that tie though. That's a spiffy individual is left. Okay.
To the left, Kitty said.
All right. To the left. To the
Everybody
left.
saying left.
Everybody rocking with the left. Let's see. Let's see, y'all. Let's see. Correct answer, y'all, is A. It's to the left.
Gotta have the little tie.
Gotta have a little tie. Gotta have a little tie.
Curious Joe.
Curious George, y'all.
It's
Not
right,
not
it's
the
right. I
damn
used to watch
Mandela
Curious George.
effect.
It's right.
Do Curious
right.
George have a monkey? Oh, excuse me, have a monkey.
George
Have a
never had a
tail
tail.
or not?
George never had a tail.
Bro had a tail, bro.
No,
With
he
him
never
being
did.
the
No, he
monkey,
didn't.
does he have a tail or not?
Bro
I mean,
had a tail,
Goku
bro.
had a
George
tail. Goku had a tail.
Goku had a tail. but
Bro
George
had a
never
tail, bro.
George never had a
You going
tail,
with
bro.
left?
Ever
Yeah, I'm going
since
with right.
George was a monkey, he never had a tail.
I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen.
George never had a tail.
Right. They might say right's the right answer.
Yeah.
But left is real.
What?
Yeah.
Left.
He
That's
said
what
he
I'm
usually has
saying.
a
Left
raincoat on.
back
No,
in
he
the day,
don't.
son had a tail.
Kitty, we got to fight, bro.
Okay.
Never had a tail.
I'm gonna go left, but I know what they're gonna do.
It's right.
They're gonna try to Mandela affect me.
He usually has a raincoat on.
No.
Yeah, he free balling it today, Kitty. He was just
He
was like,
free-balling
he
it.
said, "I'm out here just with eat, but then
But
free
that's
balling
me
it."
for no
Yeah.
reason.
All right,
I don't know
George
what
never had a
episodes
tail.
of Curious George. I watching that has a tail. That's crazy.
Curious George does
Not
not
see,
have
See,
a
I told you.
tail.
I told you it was going to go right, but son had a tail.
No,
No, he didn't.
he
George
never.
had a-
He never had a tail.
Whatever.
Me.
He never had a tail.
Well, I'm not arguing with y'all.
Even the artist who drew him never drew
I
him
don't
a
give a
tail.
damn what he said.
George, I don't give a damn what he said. What? You know what? Yeah.
I think Curious George is a chimp. Okay, y'all, 90s people. I'm sure y'all watched some Bugs Bunny cartoons back then.
Oh damn! I just seen this. the other
Looney
day.
Tunes. Is it Tunes
Bro,
T-O-O-N-S?
the shit was always
Or is
T-U-N-E-S.
Tunes T-U-N-E-S?
It
Like
was-
music tune.
It was music.
It's the
It was
what?
like Looney Tunes, bro.
Cartoon
I'm gonna go
That
right.
you know what's
tunes
crazy? That's
or
what-
or
that's
music
what-
Bro,
tunes?
it
That's
was
crazy.
no
That's what gonna trip people
O-O-N-S,
up.
bro. It's
The
right.
left
bro.
or the right?
That's really gonna
Right.
trip people up. That's really gonna trip
That's
people
right,
up.
bro.
Yeah, I'm
Mm.
gonna go right.
If you actually think about it, it's not the
sure
right.
it's
It's the left. It's the left.
T-U-N-E-S.
You think
And then-
you say it's the left?
Yes.
Okay. Cliff says right. GK says right. Book Nation says right.
Yeah.
BT Gamer says right. Lottie says right. I think you kind
Speaking of Looney Tunes, our boy Daffy Duck shares the same birthday with us.
Does he?
Oh,
that's
April
fire.
17th?
Daffy Duck.
That's fire.
Clap it up for Daffy Duck. Daffy Duck.
My man right there
Same
too.
birthday with us.
Then he get shot in the face by
He been shot in the face by many different people.
Right.
He's got his ass bit
Beak
by
just spin
dogs.
around and he put it right back.
Yep.
Right.
So let's see.
I say it's the left.
You say left. So
Yes.
let's see.
I'm gonna go right because I think it's T-U-N-E-S.
Answer is
The right looks
the
right.
right side. T-U-N-E-S.
Ain't no
Right.
But-
T-O-O-N-S.
I'd like to say for the people who did say tunes, the left side, T-O-O-N-S, you probably are mistaking the port over for when they were kids, the Tiny Toons,
Tiny Toons.
the Buster Bunny,
Mhm.
Babs Bunny.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're their kids.
That
or
was
not.
the new generation.
That's the new generation. They called them Tiny Toons, and it was TOONS for Tiny Toons. But Looney Tunes always been music TUNES.
That's crazy.
Yep, just a little tune thing there.
Baskin Robbins.
Baskin Robbins, ice cream people.
Oh, it's left because
Left.
31 flavors.
Both of them have 31 in it, though. Both of them have 31 in it, though.
Yeah, it's 31 flavors.
It's 31 in pink or is it 31 in blue?
It's the 31.
Oh, it's the pink 31.
It's the pink 31. 31 colors.
Pink 31.
Yeah,
Okay.
31 pink.
I'm not sure actually. I just feel like left looks better.
Yeah, it's
You
left.
feel like left looks better?
Yeah, I'm
He
just
said
gonna
left
go with
looks
that.
better.
Okay.
I actually don't know. I'm just gonna go left.
Okay.
How many ice creams did you eat from Baskin Robbins?
One vanilla. That's it.
Bro, I'm big Ash.
one?
I know it's left.
One.
Yeah, it's left.
Kitty says left. Cliff says left. Okay. Let's see. Well, let me see. Coles are probably more than likely gonna say left too. Or he may say I don't eat ice cream.
Oh,
Because
God.
the white man.
He
Yeah.
not black.
It gotta be left.
Answer is left for sure, y'all. Left for
It just
sure.
looks better.
It looks better aesthetically.
And the 31 pops out more.
Okay, yeah, it does. Last one for this one, y'all. Last one. Oh, that was not
Hey,
supposed to be there.
Yeah, it's
Hey.
it's A.
Hey.
Since it's there, cool.
Okay. Oh,
Febreze. Which
That's
is
the right one. My bad, y'all. I screwed up.
Which one is
Oh,
right?
so you threw an extra one in there. That's all right.
Febreze? Wait, what?
So right,
Febreze or Febreze?
Is
Nah,
it
it's
One
it's
E Febreze
it's
or
not.
two E?
Oh, breeze.
Oh.
Like
It's
Indian
double
breeze.
E, bro,
Like,
for breeze.
Yeah,
nigga.
breeze.
Right.
That's Febreze.
Yeah. No. That's Febreze.
that's Febreze.
Febreze.
That's Febreze.
Febreze.
So for this one, y'all, is it for as GK said, Febreze or Febreze, as everybody knows, left or right?
That's right.
Left or right?
It is not Febreze.
It's not Febreze.
If you going Febreze, you went to Dollar Tree.
So you going for breeze too? Okay.
now he got that shit.
It cost less
Cliff.
because they took an E out.
Cliff said right for
You went to
Febreze.
Dollar Tree.
Okay.
You
Cool.
can't
Cool.
say Febreze, they'll get sued. So they can say
say
Febreze.
right.
You gonna say it right as well? All right, my man.
Not even gonna hold you. If you say Febreze, you got that shit off the dark web.
Oh, the dark web.
The
Wow.
dark web is crazy.
Dark web.
But why is it good smelling stuff on dark web?
I don't know. House cleaning products.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Make your house
BT
healthy.
Gamer says right as well. Let's see.
You probably gonna
Let's
probably
see,
throw
y'all.
some
Let's
chemicals in
see.
Your house that's gonna melt your shit.
Even the bottle of mad skinny.
And
Word, like,
the correct
yo, what's
answer
up with
is-
that bottle? That's a lotion bottle. That's a lotion bottle.
The right answer. The
What?
correct answer is the left side.
It's Febreze?
Febreze.
It's not two E's.
Whoa.
It's Febreze.
Whoa.
Go to the store.
Not
next time
Febreze.
you go.
But the bottle don't look like that.
Right. It look like that. It look.
The bottle does not look like that,
The
bro.
bottles don't look like neither one, really.
Those are the
That
older
look
bo-
more like the
Wait,
bottle,
it's not
bro.
Febreze.
No.
Nope, it's Febreze.
It's Febreze.
It's Febreze.
Nah.
And that's a real brand, the extra strength type one.
That's
a real
a different offshore brand.
No, it's real.
Febreze.
Nah.
One. Real
You
shit.
trying to tell me I'm not supposed to
So when you
spell
go to the
breeze?
store,
This
they-
no-
That's what I said.
I know how to spell breeze.
Me too.
Right.
I went to school, goddamn.
We say see breezy all the time.
All the time. We don't say Febreze.
And you gonna have to say see bread now.
That's crazy word.
That's
Ain't no, I'm
insane.
clipping this shit, cause we not
Yeah.
alone.
Where the fuck
I'm
did you get
clipping this
from?
shit.
See
Yep.
how it feels?
We
Yep.
not alone.
It's not for
Kitty said, get the
breeze.
fuck out of here.
It's not for breeze with two
Motherfucker said,
E's.
that's propaganda.
It's for breads with one
You
E.
trying to tell me all these are
Well,
those
for
E's,
Breze,
nigga?
you said, right? For Breze?
Febreze.
It's for Breze. It's
It
not
is
for
not.
breeze.
That's a crazy word.
Go to the store y'all next time and take
Now,
pictures.
if y'all got Febreze in your house right now, go
Go
pick
look
it
for
up and go look at the bottle. I promise you, you're gonna say bullshit
Right.
real quick.
Ain't no
You're
way.
gonna say, what the fuck?
It's not
I've been
Febreze,
spraying
it's Febreze.
Febreze
For Breze.
all over the crib.
All over the crib.
Talking about Febreze.
Yeah.
Nah.
The black in you said Febreze. It's for
The
Breze.
autumn mist flavor is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Febreze.
It's for Breze.
That's crazy business.
Like esta vez, not esta vez. Appreciate y'all. Great comments chat. Now it's time for Who the Fuck Is That?
wow.
Those of you that don't know who the fuck is
Shit
that,
is really Febreze.
those of you that don't know who the fuck is that, we're pretty much going to play a silhouette game. You're going to see a silhouette of a person, character, or thing, and you're going to tell me what the silhouette is. In this game, we definitely need to turn the lights on, so hit the lights. Here we go. That's better. Let's
There
get
you go.
into
Lights
it.
off.
Yeah.
What the hell?
That's
Who-
that's that
Who-
guitarist with the long.
Guns N' Roses.
Who the fuck is
Oh,
that?
God.
I know who that
Jimi
is.
Hendrix?
That's not Jimi Hendrix. It's the white nigga with the round glasses. It's the Steven Axel.
Slash. Is it Slash? That's not his
Coles
name.
that says Slash. Wife, you
Oh,
say
Slash.
Slash.
I
Kenny
I don't
says
know his
Slash.
name. I don't know his name, but I'm gonna go Slash because
I
y'all
don't
said
listen to
so.
Guns N'
I ain't
Roses.
even
I'm
gonna
not even
front.
gonna hold you.
Kenny said, "Y'all, I'm so mad at that." The Febreze, right?
Yo,
I knew the Febreze that was gonna fuck people up. I knew it.
Not for the Febreze, bro.
I knew it. Cause it fucked me up.
That's crazy.
It fucked me up. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get
Nigga,
it.
where the
Infecting
other
the house
E
with
at?
fucking Febreze.
It's crazy.
Infecting the house with fucking Febreze. All right,
Slash.
so
That's Slash.
yeah, I said Slash. Let's see, who's that? The answer is the one and only Slash. The one and
Big ass
only
hat.
Slash. Who is that?
Willy Wonka?
Willy Wonka.
Who is that?
I don't know who that is.
That
Is
could
that
be Joker, but then
is that the
it could be-
Riddler? It's not the
Could be
Riddler.
Joker. You say okay.
Joker.
Could be Riddler. Okay, I see
But
why
is it
you
the
said.
cartoon
I see why you
Joker?
said Joker, and I see why you said Riddler. Okay.
Is it the cartoon Joker? Like
Okay.
the early,
I
the
don't
early
know. I'm
Batman cartoon
confused
Joker?
That,
because I see Joker.
Right.
What's
Okay.
his name? What's this dude named? Shadow Man from Princess and the Frog?
Ooh,
Shadow Man.
That's a good one.
Princess
That's a
and
good one.
Frog.
That's a damn good one.
Oh,
BZ
so
get-
Kitty Tat said the same thing.
Villain
That's
from
fucking
Princess
crazy.
and the
That's
Frog.
a damn
Listen,
good
Willy
one.
Wonka.
That
BTA.
Kitty said I looked at my bottle and threw it.
That's enough of this shit.
It says for president. And she's Spanish. But fuck this. Coño, for president.
You're right, Kitty. He said Riddler's a good guess, but he don't have the hat. Yes,
Last that villain.
It's not-
Villain
Villain
that
that
laughs.
laughs.
Villain that laughs.
So
That
I
would
would
have
say
to
either
be the
between
Joker,
Shadow,
then.
I would say
Is
Shadow
it
Man
the
or the
Dungeons and
Joker.
Dragons nigga?
then it's the Joker. Then
Shadow Man.
Okay.
I would
nah,
say
if he
the
said
Shadow
villain
Man
that
or
laugh,
Joker.
I'm going with Joker.
It could
Riddler
be
not a bad guess, but he don't got the hat.
Right, it could
Okay.
be the,
And the
Then he
hat
said-
would have had to go for your guy, the Princess and the
Yeah,
Frog
the
part.
Shadow
It's
Man.
the
The
Joker.
early-
Once he
the
said
Shadow
the
Man.
villain that laughs,
Shadow
it's the
Man.
the
Joker.
cartoon Joker, right? The early one.
Who is that? Answer is
Yeah, see the early one.
I picked this funny face ass.
cartoon.
Nigga
It's
look like
the Joker.
Dracula.
Dexter, fucking Point Dexter chin having ass.
I know who that is. That's a
That's
girl.
Sub-Zero?
That's a woman with a hat on.
With that metal shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the fuck is her name now?
Right.
You got me on the name.
Right, the bronze hat, right?
Yeah, some
Yeah.
shit on
Flying,
her.
right?
Some round shit she got on.
Right.
Some strong bitch.
Damn.
She don't get
Boy,
she.
you need
You know what I'm saying? Eat that
You
bitch.
need napkins.
I need. It's hot, man.
You sweating like a slave.
You want me to turn it back?
GK Studio 200 is on hell. The temperature's on hell in
We
here.
pay our heating bill in this motherfucker. You know what I'm saying?
Tell the people that the security downstairs to turn this shit down. Yes.
Damn.
Right.
Coño.
We gonna wait for you to come back because definitely want you to see this one.
Damn.
I see the
Gluttony in the building. Drop a bomb for Gluttony. Cliff said Manon from Street Fighter 6. Okay. Gluttony said happy Sunday, everybody. What's up, Glut? Shout outs to Glut.
I haven't played Street Fighter 6 in a minute.
Is it? Damn. I know who that is. Damn.
I'm gonna wait for GK to come back, y'all. But at that time, I'm gonna give y'all. Oh wait, I'm gonna wait for him to come back to give y'all the hint too. But keep on going. It's not for Cliff. It's not Manon. It's not her. Manon is Brawlick and Stocky. This character's not Brawlick and Stocky.
Damn.
I thought that was Frost from
Not doing Sunday Discord is a sin. Oh, Gluttony, you in trouble? Gluttony said that's an MK character. Okay.
I say that's Frost.
Kitty said Scarlet. Okay.
Scarlet Witch? No, okay.
It's Scarlet from Mortal Kombat. Never seen it.
Gluttony says it's an MK character, so I'll give y'all that.
MK Ninja. Oh, Mortal Kombat Ninja. Oh.
I'll give y'all that
I'll say
because
Scarlet.
because Gluttony said it. I'll give y'all that.
Oh. Okay. All right. So it's an MK character. Damn.
Not
I would
doing
say
Sunday
Scarlet- I
memes
would
is
say
a
between
crime.
I would say between Scarlet and
Scarlet. It's a Scarlet
Frost. I would say Scarlet or Frost.
or
Which
Frost.
one?
Okay. Cool.
I don't know all the fucking ninjas and fucking thingy.
You got Melina,
Okay.
Jade, Scarlet.
I couldn't
Frost.
stop sleeping. Sorry, damn.
You got it.
So now no one got it yet, but Gluttony came in and says the MK Ninja, a Mortal Kombat Ninja. So The hint actually is Mortal Kombat Ninja.
Mortal Kombat
Sorry.
Ninja.
Yep.
Sonya.
Sonya.
Okay.
Blade?
I thought Sonya was Special Forces, but yeah.
I mean,
Right.
that's why I was hesitant because it says
Oh,
ninja.
Blade
She's not a
is.
ninja.
Right. So
I
here
don't
we go. Answer is
She's Scarlet.
I know
Ermac.
that.
Oh
Wow.
my God, we said the lady with the hat.
no lady with no hat.
That's
That's
not no lady.
Ermac.
Ermac.
That's a whole
That is Ermac.
monster thingy.
Who is that?
Geraldine Hay Arnold.
Right,
Yep,
right,
Jonathan
Arnold,
Arnold.
right. The hair gave it away immediately.
Football head and tall hair boy.
Geraldine Hay Arnold.
Nah, football games.
Geraldine Arnold.
I know. Stewie and Chris.
Stu.
Wow.
Chris is fat.
Chris is the big boy.
Ain't no way. That nigga's Chris.
Clearly, with the football head, we all know that
Oh,
that's
Stewie and Herbert the Pervert. How about that?
could be
Herbert
Stewie.
the Pervert.
Could be Stewie. Yeah, these two niggas.
These two niggas right here, Arnold and Gerald with the cool fit. That's when they went to took the girls out, the sixth graders.
Yeah, I knew that
They
one.
were stepping their game up.
Yeah, we want to step their game up.
That's crazy. Now that's GK and Arnold. Oh, it's Dante.
Yeah,
No,
that's
that's Nero. My fault. That's Nero. Nero from Devil May Cry 5. That's Nero from Devil May Cry 5.
Is it?
No, that's
That's
Dante.
That's Nero. That's not Dante.
That's the Dante with the short hair.
That's not Dante.
Okay.
Oh.
He said
He
okay.
says Dante. He with the short hair. You saying it's
That's
Nero?
Nero from Devil May Cry 5. GK, you get this wrong, we gonna have to drop 50 push-ups.
Okay.
Y'all
Drop
trying to
50
make him do
push-ups.
something.
They ain't doing
Kitty
nothing.
says Nero.
I ain't doing
Cliff
nothing.
says Nero. Kitty says Nero. BK Jeff says Nero. Everybody is saying.
I'm not changing shit.
All right.
We gotta change your shit.
Hence, it's new Demon Hunter.
Yeah.
That's Nero.
Fuck that.
Say fuck that. Say fuck that. Yo.
All right. Answer is like y'all said.
I might
Nero.
I told y'all niggas knew. It was doubting me, chat.
That's
You feel
one of
me?
the Dragon Ball Z
Let's
characters.
go. No, that's not Gohan. Wait,
Is that Yamcha?
that could be Yamcha because the hair, right? I think that is Yamcha.
Is it
Is that the nigga-
Yamcha?
is that the
That's
nigga
not
that get
it.
bombed?
Is it?
Is it Yamcha?
Is that the nigga that get bombed?
Is it Gohan?
But then again, his posture.
I'm
looks
thinking
weird to me.
Gohan.
Is that either between? That's either between
Okay.
Yamcha. Wait, Chucky. You gotta think about it. If it's
I'm
between
thinking-
Yamcha-
Is
I'm
it even a
thinking-
Dragon Ball Z character?
That too.
That's it,
That
Yeah.
too.
I was gonna say that's
I
Vegeta
was
from
thinking-
Dragon Ball GT.
I
Cliff
was
says
thinking-
Goku's picnic.
Yeah, I was thinking Gohan too. I see Gohan.
Gohan is my
I
guess,
see
Koza
Gohan, I
said.
see-
Papa Chomp says Gohan.
I see Gohan, then I see Yamcha. And
I
then
go a
he
lot.
just said just
I
now,
see-
is
I
it
see-
even a
There's
I
the
see
other
either-
character that I can't get.
I see Gohan or I see Vegeta from Dragon Ball GT. I see Vegeta.
Okay, I see the Vegeta. I see the Vegeta.
With
That's
that dumbass character. Oh, okay, it is.
the hint is a Dragon Ball Z character.
So it could be Yamcha though.
I'll go Gohan.
It's
over
definitely not
Yamcha.
damn Krillin. It's definitely not damn
It's
Krillin.
that Krillin.
Alrighty, so let's see. Let's see.
Damn. My guess is Yamcha, man. Honestly,
Yamcha.
I'm gonna double down on Yamcha.
Answer is
I knew it.
double down on
It's the
Yamcha.
nigga that get blown up by Saber.
It's not Goku. It's easy to
Darkwing Duck.
it's easy to
That
see
is Darkwing
Goku.
Duck.
Let's
Yeah.
get dangerous.
Yo, what the hell is
Darkwing
that?
Duck.
Darwin Duck.
Who the hell is
Darkwing.
Darwin
Before
Duck?
y'all time.
Darkwing.
Duck.
Oh, Darkwing Duck. Who the hell is
Darkwing
that
Duck.
still?
That's before y'all
The
time.
hint
Yeah.
is
It's a
Batman
cartoon.
Duck.
It's a cartoon.
That's way before y'all time.
I know who it is. I just never watched
Kitty
it.
said.
There's only one other possible option.
Right.
Negaduck.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mega Duck.
That's the only possible option.
You know what? Alucard. I'm saying Alucard. Fuck that.
You don't see
Alucard.
the beak?
You don't see the beak, my guy?
That's probably Daffy Duck.
Answer
You fucking
is?
know. That's fucking Daffy Duck. That's Daffy Duck's twin.
That's Darkwing Duck.
That's Daffy Duck's twin.
That's Daffy
Fuck.
Duck doing sneak
No.
shit at night.
That's
So
Daffy Duck's
chat,
twin.
Darkwing Duck was my
chat.
shit.
Kitty said Darkwing Duck. Koza said
Lunatics.
Darkwing Duck. Yup.
Oh.
And Glutty said Lunatics.
Okay.
Lunatics.
That was a good guess. Lunatics, yeah.
I see why he said Lunatics though.
Why?
The duck and
Yeah.
Lunatics. It was a scene that he Daffy had the cape. He was
Okay,
pretending.
I got you.
But,
I remember that scene. I remember
yeah.
that scene.
It was just a little part. It's not his regular costume though.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably Daffy Duck's father. Who knows?
Damn.
What else you got in the
Alright.
tank
Last
over there?
one.
Last
Nice
one.
copy.
This is the last one.
That's Poppy.
Kill Bill.
No,
that's not Kill Girl.
It's the last one, y'all.
That's
Is that the
fuck.
black girl from Dead not Dead or Alive?
Is she a Marvel character?
Are you a sip like you?
That could be the no.
Psychic?
Yeah.
Is that
She green?
Is she green?
She a guardian
I
of the
can't-
galaxy?
You said Cyclops?
Is that the black girl from the movie I be watching?
Maybe
with the
not
zombies?
green, but
Walking Dead.
There you go.
I would consider her.
Zoe Saldana's character?
Okay.
Video game.
Looks like Psylocke. Yeah, but Psylocke doesn't have a sword. Though.
I don't think that's Psylocke. I see where she's going
Kenny
with that.
says Psylocke. Gluttony
Psylocke
said looks
got a
like
sword.
Psylocke.
I can see the Psylocke. I definitely can see the Psylocke. 100% see Psylocke.
Yeah, but she don't got a sword.
I don't think it's Psylocke though.
Yeah, Psylocke don't got a
I
sword.
was going towards Gamora, but I don't know.
It could be Aeon Flux. Even I'm gonna go Psylocke. Makes more sense. Okay.
I see
I'll
the
say that's
I see
Kill-
the
I'll say that's Kill
Psylocke.
Bill.
I see the Psylocke.
Let's see what the hint is.
Psychic assassin. So is it Psylocke now?
Yeah, yeah, Psylocke.
The Psylocke? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. But where'd she get the sword from? She don't have a sword, from what I be knowing.
Answer is Psylocke.
Yeah, there you go.
It's definitely Psylocke.
Definitely
Psylocke actually does have a sword. She's an assassin.
She's the assassin.
I never seen her
And
with it.
she has like the pulsating, the psychic pulsar,
Mhm.
Yeah,
pulse
arms.
blade.
Yeah, I know. That's when I seen the sword. It threw me off.
Yeah. Good call though, Kitty. Good call. That was a good call.
It was a
Great
good one.
combos, chat. Thank you all for playing. Appreciate y'all. All right, GK.
Uh-huh.
So what you got brewing up over there?
Uh-huh.
My mic game.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we got
Look, you
YM
have to say,
games?
fuck me, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
YM
That's
games.
crazy work.
We about to move on with the show. You know what I
This
mean?
is that fuck the YN games. Don't worry about this
Fuck
guy
me,
shit.
yeah. Ain't no more.
Motherfucker, if this is
There's a
more
bunch of
if this
anime
is some
that
more
always-
Pokemon shit,
Yes.
No.
And
Actually, no.
anime.
It's anime, yes.
Can
but
you
not
do
that,
some
that,
human
no.
stuff?
It's anime.
Some
That's
human
what I
stuff.
wanted.
If it
Alright,
was
so wait,
Pokemon,
Pick the first one. Pick the first one. There you go. I just need y'all to look at it and just let me know what y'all do.
see Pokemon shit.
Wait, no. Hold on, nigga. Click it. Yeah.
Okay.
You gotta put the
I
share
gotta-
screen on.
I gotta put it up with the share screen on.
You gotta do a montage. Fuck that. Yo, shit, we gotta do a montage. Thanks.
All right, cool. So Broke Nation has something for us to take a look at, chat. So let's take a look at what Broke Nation has for us. It better be good.
Booty. Some cool booty
Better be
shit.
good.
It's pretty nice.
All right, here we go.
He said, holy shit, he's killing her.
So this is like
What is he, some kind of racist?
That's Chucky.
Look, Chucky.
Thank you.
Oh my god!
After he killed the he walks over and pulls the next street down.
He didn't even know what
He didn't
happened.
know what was going on. Oh, he's on the slide. He's on the slide.
Yo, it's too much going on.
Oh my god!
Double kill. Game Boy open it. Oh, he said I'm doing the Game Boy on there. How you slide
Oh my
on
God.
the Game Boy? It's crazy. Hijack. Hijack.
Oh my god!
With them, bro.
He could barely move when his man's got shot. He was in the same spot.
Alright, so yeah, I'm gonna go. So I was thinking about going pro in this game. Yeah.
He's thinking about going pro. This guy thinks he's going pro. He was pretty good.
Now,
That was pretty
not the
good.
second one. Not the third one.
What y'all think? He said, Gozer said, "Where's the game? This is just FPS at 13 frames per second." Damn,
Damn, why you gotta shit on
Bro,
my
that's 10
man? for?
that's rough.
It's the
That's
That's
video,
rough.
sir.
That's rough.
rough. And then Gluttony said, "Bro, that's 10 frames."
They got shit on my
Even
man's phone,
worse.
man.
So I play on P5. That's like at
He
least
said, "What's
120.
going on with the audio? Damn, you got to do some more better editing, man.
The audio was low.
The audio is back, man.
It was a little low. Even from sitting here.
So this is it here?
Yeah, that's the next one.
Okay, cool. All right, cool.
Hey, so, wait, hold on. Wait. Damn.
All right.
I'm gonna do
All
more
right.
real ones.
So here's another one from Broke Nation, y'all.
Shocking anime stuff.
So let's get ready for guess that anime gear.
Guess that anime
Oh.
gear. Okay.
Stop it.
See, I ain't gonna get
That's some Naruto shit.
Oh, too late. You see.
Why you being cutting it so fast?
Word,
I
you
gotta
gotta put
set it
time in between.
Yeah, you gotta get
You don't
it
see
up
how
a
I
second.
do it?
I see how you do it.
Yeah.
But if I put too long, it's not gonna do it. But anyway, just obviously.
Just
so
that sword.
It's gonna show a weapon, a gadget, or like a weapon, a gadget, or some type of
Well,
thing. from
we
the
seen
anime.
this one already. This is Zabuza.
So you can
Yeah,
give.
this is Zabuza.
So you can give.
I was gonna get Zabuza anyway.
So you can give the character's name or the
show?
weapon,
The weapon
or the
name.
show.
Okay.
That's probably Ike's
He
sword.
said
Who
go kill
knows?
stuff.
Okay, cool. So pretty much we're guessing the weapon name
Okay.
or the person who wields it or where it's from.
Right.
In this case, this is one of the this is Naruto character Zabuza,
Yeah, Zabuza's sword.
and it's a name for that sword. I forgot the name of it. Hirakami Kara or something.
Zabuza.
All right,
Oh shit, that's Dante's. That's Dante's sword. That's the rebellion.
the rebellion.
Could be rebellion. Okay.
It got the shape of it from Devil May Cry 5. You knucklehead.
Okay.
No, I don't think that's Devil May Cry 5.
That is.
I played that game way too much to know that's not a
That's the anime, right?
Black Clover. Kitty said, okay.
I have no idea what sword is that.
I don't
Black
even watch anime
Clover.
anymore like that.
You can give the anime,
Asta
the name of the
sword.
sword, or the character sword, or the character.
Kitty
Oh,
said
no
Black
neck-
Clover.
oh,
That's
no neck
Asta
nigga.
sword.
Asta sword.
Black Clover, Asta sword. Okay. All right.
Oh, the no neck nigga sword.
Yo, Ash Ketchum, what
Ash
up, bro?
Ketchum in the building.
Yo,
Drop
Ash
a bomb.
Ketchum.
I got Ash.
Ash Ketchum, whose sword is this?
Yeah, this is an anime sword, Broke Nation, a YN game, so you might know it because it's like you like in between. You're like a
You're the
big
closest
YN.
of what used to be a YN.
Yeah, he's a big YN.
I don't know what sword that is.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Kind of looks familiar, but I don't
No,
know.
the anime is not so popular.
I can tell by this how it looks. It's not a popular anime.
Yeah.
It looks pretty like cheap.
Ash said, I think
Black
that's
Clover.
Black Clover, so
Okay,
agreeing
two
with
Black
Kitty.
Clovers. Okay,
All right,
two
so
Black
let's see.
Clovers.
I don't know what that is.
So it's Asta's
It's
sword.
Asta's-
Black Clover.
Asta's sword.
Which is Black Clover. It's Asta's sword.
Yeah,
Let's
Kitty
go,
Kitty
let's
know
go.
her shit.
Let's go, Kitty. Let's go,
Alright, next
Kitty.
one. Who's that sword?
Okay.
Oh, that's Link.
This just said Link.
If that's Link's sword, then from the anime, I'm
If
scared
that's
shit.
Link's sword, Ganon got problems.
Yeah.
Ganon don't got problems. That's Link's sword.
I don't know whose sword that is.
Black Clover's pretty okay, Koza. It's actually pretty decent.
I have no idea whose sword this is.
I don't know whose sword that is either.
Inosuke?
Okay.
Inosuke. Don't Inosuke got two swords and they're straight blades?
Is that
I don't
Inuyasha
think. Nah,
sword?
that's not Inosuke's
Seven
blade.
Deadly Sins. Okay, we got
Seven Deadly Sins.
Inosuke. Okay, all right.
Inosuke's good call because the how it looks on top. Those ridges.
Yeah, he has not hook swords. He has ridge
So
swords.
Ash, you
yeah.
can
Yeah.
name the sword's name, the character's name, or the anime name. Anyone you can get a
He
point
said
for.
7 deadly sins.
You said Seven Deadly Sins. Okay.
Kitty said no, it's not Inosuke.
Okay, no Inosuke. Okay.
But
You got
Seven Deadly
Inosuke.
Sins, we're going with Ash. Ash would know.
Ash said Seven Deadly Sins. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Let's go through it.
It's Meliodas. Which is Seven Deadly
Meliodas.
Sins.
Oh, nice.
Seven
Who said that?
Ash. Ash. You know, Meliodas. I don't know who that guy is.
I know
That's
Meliodas.
Meliodas. His
Yeah.
name. His name.
No,
You
7 deadly
win.
sins.
Seven Deadly
Perfect.
Sins.
Appreciate you, Ash.
He's like,
Yes,
he's
yes
like,
indeed. Drop a bomb for Ash. Sub 11 months so far. Currently on a 1 month streak.
Full counter.
Yeah.
Full counter. There you go. Yeah, that's his favorite move. Full counter. Meaning, if you send something his way,
And
he
he's
will double it
gifting
back.
a sub. Who he gift the sub to? He gift the sub to somebody.
Somebody got a gifted sub.
Oh, the Winter Soldier 5000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Appreciate you,
Yeah.
Ash.
Yes, indeed. Drop another bomb for the gifted sub.
Full counter.
Cliff said, I know that anime.
Yeah, Seven Deadly Sins.
That's not bad.
All right.
Over the top as
Next
fuck,
one.
though.
Right.
Who's this? This gonna knock y'all head.
Is that a
what am I looking at?
It's a
I know it.
arm buster.
I know it. I know it.
You know because we used to play.
I know it. I know
It's
it.
an arm buster like this.
I see
But
it
it's not
now.
Mega Man.
I don't know what the
Nigga,
fuck
Mega
that
Man
is.
is blue.
No, not like him. We all know Mega Man's blue, but not from his game.
Oh, I know who that is.
I have no
Like, it
idea.
could've been
Zero's
one of the-
Armbuster.
Like one of the
I know
boss
exactly
characters.
who that is. No, you
The
don't.
Mavericks. I know though. I
Actually,
know
you
who
might
weapon
because I
that
made
is.
the
I
game
know
with you.
exactly who that is.
So say who it is.
Come on, Lottie. Tell
Help
us
us
who it
out,
is,
Do you
Lottie.
even
Lottie.
remember who it is?
Say, take your ass to sleep.
IGU. Is that the name of the guy? IGU?
No, I think he's.
Oh, he's telling
texting
you
me?
the IGU.
Is he texting
Okay.
me?
I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yang Zhao.
Yang Zhao Long.
Yang Zhao
It's
Long.
Yang
Is that
Zhao,
right?
yes.
Yang Zhao Long.
Who's
okay.
Yang Zhao Long?
She's from the game. That's what it is. It's
Oh,
two of them.
okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So
Never
she
seen it.
uses
Never
her
seen
fist
that
and the
shit.
shotgun shells. The shotgun gauntlets.
Okay.
Shotgun
Cool.
gauntlets, yup.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way.
I don't know.
All right, next one. All right, who's that?
What?
That's a twat.
Oh,
What are you doing here?
It's her belt. Her belt is the weapon.
Nah,
What-
no,
what
no.
belt?
No, the belt is an accessory. The pussy's the weapon.
I'm fucking dead.
Bro.
The twat's the weapon.
Yo, Twitch, I promise it's a weapon. I promise.
That's what you calling it?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's weaponized against every man in the village.
It's over.
Yo, nobody. Yo,
what kind of
nobody
shit
understands
is
this anime.
Talking about
Nobody
demon
understands
slayer. This
What?
is manslayer right here.
Nobody know this.
Bro, all I said was a twat.
We're
Pop
kinda-
up. Bow, right there.
Nigga asked him what kind of Gouda shit. Yo.
Alexis, Texas.
Alexis, Texas?
Alexis, Texas. If that is the person,
no.
Man.
Bro, be watching.
Right.
Wait, chill. It's a weapon, I promise.
It's a weapon. Stop saying that, right?
Is it really?
Nah.
Oh my god.
That's Thundercats. That's Thundercats.
The
Oh.
7 deadly again. I don't
So
know.
what does the belt do?
Go
According
take
to
it.
this part.
So, okay, I can't say it because if I say it, it will give away the character.
Does she
But
carry
then
a
again-
hammer?
What, man?
She carry a hammer?
No, but
No,
click
she
on it,
gets
alright.
hammered.
I get it.
Stop, nigga.
Click on that thing.
But according to the belt, it looks like she does the hammering.
So
She's
the
the
belt.
power.
So what I'm getting is the belt is holding up the strap, concealing the deadly weapon that
So,
she's
Glenn,
carrying.
do you know the anime?
So it's the pussy.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the pussy go
Do
crazy.
you know that? Do you know the anime then?
No.
No.
Hold on, no. Glut is on something. Glut is onto
Seven
something.
deadly sins again, as said.
No, Glut
She
is onto
transforms
something.
into a cat, Glut said.
Glut is onto something. Do you know it?
He said the belt holds pussy in place.
That's what I'm saying.
The belt is a strap on
deal.
deal.
Wow. You see what you started here?
Okay,
Yeah.
anyway.
You see what you started here?
I said it
You
too.
go-
I said I should have
You're going viral again. I want you to know you're going viral again.
Leone.
So it's her weapon turns her into like a tiger.
Damn,
She
bro.
has tiger powers. That's why.
From
her
what I
hands-
see here, that was the only picture you could have given me.
Right.
Right.
Wait,
Bro.
hold on. We gotta talk about this.
Yeah. Let's unpack this real
Fuck that.
quick.
Fuck that. Bro decided to zoom in on straight pussy.
Furry.
Right.
Furry.
How did you even
There's
get that
nothing
picture,
furry
bro?
about it. It was just on the screen.
Okay, so
Wait,
anyway,
wait,
the people who watch
So
the
we
anime,
all shut up. We all watch anime, right?
Right.
And the pictures is always skimpy.
Yeah.
This nigga
Right,
zoomed
close
right
the
in on the
wait for
pussy.
for anyone who didn't watch the anime, it's called Akame Got Killed. If y'all know what it is, Akame Got Killed.
Bro.
I swear, that's the weapon. Look, it's the weapon.
Stop saying
No,
that.
the
Not
claws
helping
is
you
the
right
weapon.
Keep saying it. Make it worse.
Yeah,
The
the
claws
claws
is the
are the weapon. You could have showed us the claws.
Yeah.
It wasn't gonna do shit.
So showing a straight vagina.
Bro, the belt is the weapon.
That's like showing us Wolverine's
Without
belt
the
with the X-Men on it.
Yeah. Who's that?
It's like, I don't know. I just see.
Bro,
You
without
could
the
have showed us the
penis.
claws at least.
I
Without
see
the
big
belt,
crazy.
without the belt, she doesn't have the power. Stop it. You could have showed us the belt.
Without without the X.
I tried.
No,
It
you
didn't do
didn't.
it.
No, you didn't.
He said no, you didn't.
Come on, it's a free card shot. Who don't like that?
If you just Google the belt by itself, it'll pop up.
Right.
It'll
Yeah.
pop up.
No, it ain't.
Yeah,
You
sure
know what
would.
I'm talking about.
There's cosplayers who do this.
You can AI that shit out. All this editing you doing, you know?
He just said, "Nope, I'm going to."
Yup. And they get one of these.
Anyway, screw it.
The
Whatever.
two fingers. Until he got closer, was just
Son
like,
said, yeah.
yeah.
No way.
Yo, fuck away, y'all.
No, thank you.
No.
No.
We just need to fuck this girl, right?
You could have
Scissors.
did that with the belt. You said you just got scissors there.
But
Yeah,
the funniest thing, chat, the next picture literally is an
scissors.
item by itself, no character.
Y'all should know this.
Yeah, oh,
anime.
you couldn't do it. Now you're doing it.
Oh my God.
Anime or name. Well, I don't know the name of the swords. I just know of the scissors. I just know the anime.
Bro, like
Scissor hands.
Edward?
Edward. This not Edward.
Bro, I'm telling you right now, I have no fucking idea.
You probably watched
I
the
see a
anime
pair
before.
of scissors,
What's to say the
bro.
name?
Cash said,
I know
Ash
this one,
said,
but
wait,
not the
My
next
son
one.
said
is
cash.
this
You about to
Dragon
get
Rump-
money. He
Dragon
called you
Romper?
cash.
Dragon Romper? No,
What's a Dragon Romper?
that's an anime.
Is he wearing a romper?
Baby. It's from Netflix.
It's from Netflix.
Scissor
They know
7,
this
okay.
one, but not the next one.
It could be Scissor 7.
So what's the Scissor 7?
Scissor 7.
Is
That
it all
sound like-
females?
That sounds like a category, bro.
That's what I'm saying. Is it all girls?
No, it's a different guy. It's
just
it's a
all
guy.
in just doing this right here.
What kind of scissor are we
Just
talking
doing this
about?
right here, like,
What kind of lips is locking here?
especially after the other picture, bruh.
So y'all like the
She-
Scissor 7 name, but
she's,
y'all don't like
she's,
Leone?
she's number
Come
4
on now.
of the 7 sisters. Like,
Yeah, you don't fuck with y'all.
So it's I need
Nah,
all
Scissor 7
4
is
pair of
fine,
lips
bro.
to lock up. You know?
No, Scissor 7 is alright. Scissor 7 is decent.
What's that?
It's an anime, but no, it's Rio from Gachi Katura. Have you ever heard of that anime?
What the fuck is that?
He cut him a hat.
That's
God
first
bless
season?
you. It's not like you
Yes, first
sneeze.
season.
You can't expect everybody. I know about it. I ain't watch it yet. Gachikaku?
Gachi Katura.
Gachikaku.
Bless you, because you're sneezing.
Yeah.
You guys are
Bless you.
sneezing.
Brooke and Jeff had put me onto it. It does look
Zay is the one
cool,
who made that one.
but I haven't watched it yet.
Lottie said I made that one, not
Did
gonna
they
lie.
scissor it? Yeah.
Zay is the one who made it. Because
I
he
don't
watches
know.
this anime. So he was like, yo.
Yo, the next reel better not be nothing sus, son.
Nah,
You
it's not.
right?
It's not. Who's that guy?
Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anime Darth Vader.
Anime Darth Vader.
Well, no,
That nigga right
no,
there.
because it's blue, it gotta be Luke.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
No,
yeah.
wait, Luke's is green.
Okay.
I don't know the colors.
Why does that?
So
I'm just
why
gonna
Han
agree with you.
Solo.
Han
Han
Solo.
Solo.
does that,
Yeah.
why does that feel like it's from Fire Force?
It could be from Fire Force.
I
Why
have
does it
no
look like
idea,
that's
bro.
from- why do
Yeah, I
I
have no
that's
idea,
from-
I got
really.
no
Ash
idea.
is on the right path. Light up sex toy.
Holy
Ew,
shit. Like,
ew,
so you know what? All right. Just because I'm a Leone, everybody think everything is a sex toy now. You know what?
No, you did that to yourself.
All
You
right,
showed
that's
us
who y'all-
vagina
That's who
self.
y'all.
Luke Rue Skywalker, you.
That's who
Luke
y'all.
Rue Skywalker.
That's who y'all going with. Y'all gonna be mad. Y'all gonna be mad. Y'all gonna be mad. Go for it. Y'all gonna be mad.
Lucro.
That's zero sword.
Oh,
That's zero sword.
This don't look nothing like
that shit look corny as fuck without him holding it like that.
That's zero.
That's
Yeah,
zero.
that's
That's
zero.
zero.
That is
sword.
not the same sword.
It is the same sword.
Oh, go back.
Go back. It's the same fucking sword. Look,
Nah,
the
hit
tip, the red tip at the back.
tip. Whoa, hey, whoa.
You got to be more careful. You got to be more careful.
Another one. He said the red tip at the back.
You got to be more
Whoa.
careful. Oh, wow.
Whoa, hey, yo.
You know what? Fuck
Hey,
on
yo.
Yeah, no,
What's
sir. I would read nigga
What's
again.
happening? What is happening?
Yeah.
You know what? Alright.
So it said the red tip at the back.
Wow.
It's
So
crazy
like
business. You're
The
going
red
viral
dot,
again,
the red
sir.
dot in the back.
You go.
The red
The
dot.
red dot in the back.
The red dot's in the back now. It's not in the
Red dot
front.
in the back.
It's not in the front.
Yo,
anymore?
this
Zero
is
sword.
crazy.
God damn it.
I mean,
Jesus Christ.
that is not the same sword, sir.
It is the same sword.
That is
Alright,
not.
Next one.
What
Oh,
is
that's
this?
Link.
It's Excalibur.
That's. I was thinking that too. That is Excalibur.
Yeah.
From who?
King Arthur. And the Knights of Justice.
I would say something from Soul Calibur.
So, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
You're saying Excalibur?
I'm
saying
going Excalibur-esque.
This is mad funny, yo. Oh my god, it's mad funny. But go ahead.
Nah, broke, you losing me. I said, nah, broke, you losing me. Kitty said, I
Cook it
didn't
and then
know
pause
this
it.
was the type of stream we running. We didn't know either. We just got
I'm
brought into
shocked
this no
too.
reason.
I'm shocked too. I don't know.
Alright, cricket.
Excalibur.
Now, y'all got the name right.
Maurice.
The sword's name is Excalibur.
Then we win.
Maurice and the Sonic Knights.
The sword's name is Excalibur. That's when y'all
Anybody
said
see that
Excalibur.
Sonic?
It's a kitty's sword, and she didn't even know what the hell the
Like,
sword was.
nobody know what
Whose
that-
sword is that?
What is
That's
this?
what Sonic and the Knights.
Sonic and the
His name,
Black
the
Knights.
sword's
The
name
Black
is
Knights, yeah.
Excalibur.
Let's go on press play.
That's when y'all said Excalibur.
It's like the Martin movie. Martin
Yeah.
with the sword.
Let's
Nobody
go-
cared about Martin with the
let's
sword.
go on
I
and press
never
play.
played this. Y'all lucky he didn't
Black
use
Knight.
the sword.
Black Knight. Nobody cared about Martin with the
Oh,
sword.
Ben 10.
Ben 10.
Only
Know
on the
that.
tricks.
Hey, y'all know that?
Yeah, I
Y'all know Ben 10,
Ben
but not the
10.
crotch? Come on now.
Get Ben 10, but not the crotch. Is
Who wants
crazy.
the crotch?
Yeah.
Get your ass up.
Wait a minute. Why would we know the crotch?
Hey,
That's
hey,
how quick chat got
hey,
Ben 10.
I know that pussy right there. I tell you.
I know that one right there. Every time she put that on, I get scratched.
Yeah, that's
I know that pussy right
season
there.
2, episode 4 right there.
right.
That's crazy.
You know what?
Ass had a penis ring. Jesus Christ.
What is going on?
Yo, you know what? All right.
You turn it this way, it pumps it up. You put it this way, it turns
What
it
you
down.
want, baby? 5-inch, 7-inch, 8-inch, 9-inch. What you want to go all the way to turbo?
And this
Only niggas can do that.
This one I can
Niggas
turn
stay
it,
on
stay
turbo.
still.
What the fuck is Who's going back down to 5 inches after you've been on turbo? What is? You done plowed her shit out from here to next year. Then you want to come back regular the next night. Get out of here, bro.
On turbo, once you're done with her shit looks like a matrix hallway.
Supposed to say, see how he didn't show Ben's wrist? Exactly.
Yeah.
Where's the wrist?
Exactly.
Where's the wrist?
You saw the
It's the watch.
No.
So I said, look at that buff.
Kenny said, I can honestly see it being a cock ring.
Oh my God.
Kenny, no!
All right, gang.
And the green buttons and the mode changes.
Some more bullshit.
Y'all are killing me right now,
That's
son.
him.
It was a belt.
Oh.
No, y'all don't know it because Leone. That is some bullshit.
So I got a question.
That's the weapon.
I got a question. You're not included.
Fine.
You're not included.
Well, ask it. I'm curious.
Wait.
You about to start your shit.
Wait. Let's finish this out
No,
first.
I want the question. Fuck that.
It got 5 seconds left.
Nobody knows what it is.
Fuck that 5 seconds. I'm gonna get y'all the question.
Oh shit, that's
that weapon?
Kratos.
Kratos.
Wow.
Kratos?
No, that's Mr. Flashy
Mr. Flash.
from Demon Slayer.
Demon Slashy.
I remember his name,
Hashirama?
man. The Hashira that have 5 wives and
All right,
get
you
all
close,
the bitches.
You close.
Yeah.
I ain't close. It's him.
10 games.
Yeah, 10 games. Yeah.
Now that's Kratos. Fuck you talking about? That's Kratos. You don't see the chain in the back? That's fucking Kratos.
That's Tengen. That's Tengen.
Ain't no Tengen. That's fucking Kratos.
Y'all got me fucked up.
So I came across this question on social media,
Uh-huh.
and I was teetering and tottering if I'm gonna actually ask it. It's too funny not to.
Okay.
So, niggas, fellas, when y'all eating the box, right?
Oh, no.
Oh God.
Oh
I
god.
already started going crazy. That shit, nigga.
He said omnidicks.
This is not going well.
Not
The
Let's do the
omnidicks
question,
is
Chad.
hilarious.
The
Not the
Omnidicks is
omnidicks.
crazy. So wait, fellas, when y'all eating the box, right? How y'all doing it? You lying down or you ass up?
Oh my god. Nigga said feet swinging or ass tooting. Oh my god.
Leg straight.
Answer the question. Come on,
Oh,
man.
oh,
Come on. How y'all doing?
on the belly, leg straight.
Kenny said I hate you, GK. Ash.
Every nigga in the world
Ash is right. Sniper position. You
Everybody
wildin'.
lying. Look, everybody start lying and shit. And niggas is lying. Ash gonna say sniper position. You
Ain't
wildin'.
nobody sitting there with their legs going.
Sniper position is crazy.
Ain't nobody sitting there with their legs going like this.
I'm sorry. I'm eating in doggy position.
Oh,
You
God.
said don't you ass tooted up then.
Wait,
Wait a
what?
minute.
So you
You
smell
eating
the
it from the
asshole?
back?
Yeah, I got hit
He's a wild nigga.
So
You
how
got-
you doing? Everybody
That remind me of the
Like
part
I
of.
said, sniper position.
That remind me of the part on next Friday.
Sniper
That's
position.
crazy
This
word.
suck my dick. On Friday after next, she sucked my dick with the back. I ain't never had it like that.
Look, I'm a soldier. I gotta take him for the team. I am a soldier, all right?
Nah,
Sniper
What are
position
you?
for me, bro.
You taking what? What?
not for this
You
team.
gotta answer. You answer.
Huh?
That ass is tooted, ain't it?
Nope.
Sniper position,
Bro.
nigga.
Belly down.
I'm in that position that like when you in video games, nobody can see you straight flat.
Yep. I'm like Solid Snake.
She gotta look like nigga. You still there?
Nigga said from the back.
I became one with the sheets, nigga.
Nigga said, nigga, you still there? It's crazy, bro.
I cannot believe that question. Y'all niggas is stupid as
Tuning
shit.
in at the
But Kenny said, who did the motorboat on the box? This guy. This guy.
Another said from the back, he's smelling pure asshole.
What? What's wrong with y'all?
Trinity in the building. Drop a ball for Trinity. Trinity in at the crib,
Your
bro.
nose is shooting straight to asshole.
Straight to asshole, straight.
I know all y'all in here probably did it with y'all ass to this. Stop lying.
No.
Y'all is lying.
Nah, man. Sniper position for
Niggas lying
me.
now.
Sniper position.
Y'all is lying. Niggas is lying.
Jesus
I'm on the
Christ.
ground.
What's happening?
Oh God.
What is happening?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Lying.
Oh.
Oh God.
Ass tuned up is wild.
This question is not for you.
But Koza
Not
said,
for
Y'all
you.
lying.
Koza said, one of those on the ground. Don't
Yeah.
leave for nothing.
Tulsa, that's a lie.
Oh my god.
He said, "Don't reach for nothing."
Yo.
That bank robber position.
Yeah.
You can be locked in there.
Oh my God, y'all niggas is stupid.
Oh man. Oh.
Oh my god. My stomach hurts.
Y'all some dumb niggas. I tell you that.
You asked the damn question.
Nah, social media asked the question.
Yeah.
I'm just relaying the message.
That's very funny.
So,
Ass two is funny.
woo!
Ain't nobody back there. Relax.
Yeah.
Everybody back there bothering y'all.
Nah, son. Casper.
Nah.
He like this.
All that wind, nah. You feel that draft?
I don't even got no dog, but what about the people with the dogs? The dog come walking by
that's
sniffing
crazy.
ass.
That's
yo,
crazy.
Hey,
Nah.
Dog's like, yo, what up, bro?
He
Nah,
like scruffy,
bro.
like, oh, that's what we do? I never do that.
Oh, you have the kids walking on you while you like that? What the
Like,
shit?
damn, this how y'all get down?
Straight move.
Nigga say, hey, Johnny, this is not what we doing. This is not what we doing, Johnny.
Oh, boy.
Straight move. He gonna be
The
like,
kids gonna be disappointed in you.
Why you back here, Dad?
you can't say
out.
shit.
You're like, son, this is a long story, alright? Don't worry about it. It's a long story.
He's like, yo, son, we playing leapfrog.
That was hilarious.
who room smell like Febreze and Badussi?
Smell like pussy.
Oh my God.
Oh, man.
Febreze.
Fabrese.
Fabrese.
Fabrese. And Bodose.
Fabreze.
Fabrese and Bodose.
Nah, dogs stay out the room. God damn.
Oh my god.
That was funny.
Oh my god.
Oh my
That
god.
was so funny.
Oh.
We'll have to take him to the racial sheds after this. Biracial sheds after that one.
Biracial shade is still. We had a biracial shade joke the other day.
Yeah.
We did.
It was biracial pie.
That's just,
Yeah. It was the Thanksgiving when the kitty actually
you
brought
know
it up. Biracial
you know,
pie.
that's crazy.
I know it.
Oh,
Oh
so now
my
y'all
God.
stuck on my shit from Woon Pine. Y'all gonna take Woon Pine biracial sheds same and right.
Yeah, biracial. Yeah, because it was a pie. It was
Y'all
a
gonna
better
take,
know
y'all gonna
this
take
one.
my fuck. Y'all gonna take my fucking quote. Okay.
So that's for you to do.
Oh
Me to do
shit.
That's for you to do.
So I gotta tell it to y'all.
Yes, whatever your card says, that's you do.
Kitty said, so we sniping the box in the biracial
But it does say who
shade.
can do it.
Oh
no,
my
it said
god.
it is on here for me already.
But listen to
Okay.
Kitty.
So I gotta do it to y'all. Y'all gotta
Bro, listen to Kitty.
What's that?
So we sniping the box in the biracial shade.
That's
Yup, with the ass
Hey.
tooted.
Ass tooted.
No, you don't snipe with your ass tooted.
No,
Yeah.
no.
No,
You can't.
that's the world's worst sniper. Everybody else is like, gonna be like, is this nigga ass in the air?
Like, why you have aerodynamics with your shot?
Right. You can say you trying to get the shot, son.
Nah,
Everything.
Nah.
Like, are you
Put his
winning?
back into
Like,
it.
are you winning,
I like
son?
this one.
Like, are you
Me?
winning, son?
Why you give me
Get
this
a
one?
little ridiculous.
Y'all gotta
Pick it.
guess mine.
Some bullshit.
Oh shit! What the fuck is this?
Oh shit. Sniper in the bushes looking like hungry caterpillar.
Are you fucking serious?
Alright, so I'm gonna go.
All right, so boom.
There you go.
All right,
The
so
name of this game is.
So,
the name
new
of the
game,
game,
chat.
You can
Oh.
do it, man.
Who can do it?
the
Put
card
on
got
screen up
some.
there, not the black screen. Put on screen.
The screen is up there.
Where is it?
No.
Oh, that one.
What's wrong with TV?
Name of the game. Who can do it? Every card got something on it.
Yep.
And we basically gonna see who can do it. Everybody gonna take a shot.
Lots is a question for
See
y'all.
who can do it. All right, we're gonna start with the queen.
So I gotta finish this Miley Cyrus line. I hop off the plane in the LAX.
Again.
You ain't said no words, nigga. English.
Right.
What did you just say?
Something card again. And then
Come on,
Got a
Chad,
plane
let me
on
know
the
if you got it.
LAX. I know the
it's a
song.
party in the
I
US.
hopped off the plane in the LAX.
Finish the bar.
Something card again. And then I can't. I don't know.
I don't
the
know
part.
it.
I don't know the
Finish
words.
it.
I don't know the
Nah,
I
words.
don't know it.
I don't know the words.
I hopped off the plane in the LAX.
I know the song.
I know the song, and
What
that's
the
not,
card say again?
that's not the part I mixed.
Wearing the cardigan?
And I'm wearing my cardigan.
Nope.
Fuck!
Close.
It's something cardigan.
It's something cardigan.
And then
Wearing my black cardigan.
It's a party in the
I hopped up the
USA,
train
right.
in the LAX. Not
Something
wearing my
dreams to come
cardigan.
again.
Something
No,
dream
Ash,
to
what
come
the hell?
again or some
No,
shit.
Ash.
Something
Ash is
dream
making up his own
to
rhymes.
come again or some shit. That's mad
Hopped on
funny.
the plane in the LAX.
What's the bar that comes after that Miley Cyrus song?
Party in the USA.
Party in the USA.
Party in the USA. That's the name
That's
of the
the
song.
Well,
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
the next line after it?
Read it again, sis.
No, because
I hopped off the plane in the LAX.
I hopped off the plane in the LAX.
it's something before the party in the USA. It's something before.
And I'm waiting on my car again.
Nope.
And
No,
I'm waiting
it's
on
definitely cardigan.
cardigan like sweater.
Yeah.
I knew it before I read it.
And I'm wearing my cardigan.
No. That's what I thought.
Tried to fill in the gap.
my cardigan.
Nobody got it? Yup. You cheated, Ash.
With the
For my
dream
dream and my
You
cardigan.
cheated. You
Yo,
cheated.
he
You
went and
cheated.
played it. He's like,
Yeah.
my shit.
Because you said something completely different. And then you're going to get it right. Yeah, it's for the dream in my cardigan.
All right. Who goes next?
Cheater.
Freddie, what's your card say?
Do your best Obama impression.
Do your best Obama impression. Starting with you.
I don't know.
No, you got to do it.
Damn. I'm trying to think of a quote that he says. Damn.
It could be anything. Just sound like
My name is Barack Obama.
Hey.
Yeah, you know it.
And I'm the new president of the United States of America.
There you go.
Sound like it.
You got sis.
I'm going to do it too.
Everybody.
I can't do that.
Oh yeah.
Sound like
Can't
Michelle
sound
Obama.
Like a man.
So you can. You got one?
Yes, epic
I don't even know neither, actually.
America.
I don't know what to say. That's what it is.
I know you guys know that this guy is Trump. His name is Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump, but it's okay. My wife, Michelle. Check out Michelle back here. She got the bang. Love you, baby. This guy, Donald Trump, he needs to get out the office. Get me back in there.
America, we don't like him.
No.
Scroll down, chat talk.
America could be
Scroll
great
down.
again.
My
Diddy
fellow
party.
Americans,
See, I could have said that.
I'm in here clearing things up. Michelle is not a man. I can do a mean Obama impression. I got you on the next train.
I got you.
He goes up.
He speak like he need a water, mouth dry.
Don't do that to
I
me.
don't got one. I'm
Who next? Who called next?
Oh,
Shit, you gotta do one. You
Shucks.
gotta do one.
He said he don't got it. So
Well,
what's your card?
It says come up with a name for a pretentious nightclub.
Pretentious.
Pretentious.
Pretentious nightclub.
Come up with a name. Chat, go crazy on this
Oh,
one. Come
yeah.
up with a name for a pretentious nightclub.
I got anything.
So I got a club, and it's for cats, Kitty. You could probably,
You've been talking about
copyright this. So you know how Brooklyn has a bunch of alley cats, right?
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of cats all over the place. So there's a club for these cats.
You've been saying this since you was
Come and go is
Come
crazy.
and go is
Come
wild.
and go is wild.
Come and go is wild.
It's a club for the cats. They be outside hanging, and they go to the kitty club. But the sophisticated club can be called Perfection.
PURRFECT.
I got one.
That's nice.
If you break the words up, well, come
Oh my god.
in.
Let me think.
I like that one.
You gotta breathe it in and say,
Well, come in.
Take your time. Take your time through that one. Yeah. Nasty.
You got more.
I'm trying to think of
I'm still trying to think. Damn.
dicks.
The fuck?
I got dicks galore.
Dicks galore.
Stinky Kitty.
What? Ain't nobody going there.
What's it called?
Ain't nobody going there.
Stinky Kitty.
Stinky kitty.
She don't want to beat your ass, bro.
Ain't nobody going in there.
You nasty.
Wait, how many bars do you know that really got a sticky section with
Ain't nobody
in
gonna
there?
go in there. You need for breasts to be in there.
Yeah, for Breze.
Fabreze. Bring Fabreze to the stinky kitty.
Snipers do like, oh my god,
Koza.
yo, what is going on?
I got another one.
He sneaks in there with them every time. He just, there you go.
I got another
Hold
one.
that.
Dinner for two.
Oh, shit.
Ooh, I like that.
Ah.
I like that.
Dinner for two.
I like that. You got one?
I'm gonna just say God of the Light.
God of the Light.
God of Delight?
That sound like we supposed to be
That's
going
not a
there.
church.
That sound like a sinner
We going
ass
to go.
place.
Not, oh, we going to pray?
Yeah.
What?
Kimchi cream.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
What the hell?
What the fuck?
Mm.
Macaroni pie.
Macaroni pie.
Moon pies.
Moon pie. Ass pie?
Oh, I was gonna say coochie cream, but you gotta spell it K-E-W.
Cream.
It's
Whoa.
like you say K-E-W-C-H-I-E
Coochie cream. Go crazy.
cream.
Coochie cream. What about for the
It's a
ladies?
donut spot.
Well, you expect
Happy
us
Meal.
to make up the name for the ladies?
Yeah, I made up one for the ladies. Damn it.
What was that?
Sure, I forgot what I said.
Yeah, look, it's not important.
You need male strip club in this one.
Ew.
No, I don't like male strippers.
That's weird.
I don't like male strippers.
Just dangling balls on people.
No,
That's nasty.
No.
First time chat.
First time chat from
Coochie cream.
yes, a last and coochie cream. Drop a ball with the first
Hey,
time
welcome
chat.
in, Coochie. Welcome
No.
in.
Welcome in, coochie cream. Yeah, coochie cream.
I gotta clip that. That's not funny.
Somebody clip that, please. Welcome in, coochie cream.
Coulter said what?
Welcome in, coochie cream.
Welcome in, Fury. What's his name?
Fifth Five Cry, Fifth Cry, 92.
My bad.
Great, my name is now Coochie Cream. Oh, Jesus. That is too funny. Welcome in. Welcome in. Perfect timing. From now on, every time we see Fifth Cry, 92,
That's
or
Coochie
Five
cream.
Cry, that's Coochie Cream. Coochie Cream, what up, Coochie Cream?
That's CC right there.
You gonna say,
What's
What's
up?
that? Coochie Cream, what's that?
Well, he said you can just call me 92. All right, we
Oh,
got you.
God.
92. His name is 92.
Oh.
92.
Ash said balls deep, full steep, cream cootery. What the
Wow.
hell, nigga?
Balls deep, cream cootery.
Cream cootery is
Not to be behind nobody's bootery.
What about this?
Hey, yo. What the fuck?
Oh my God. What
Yo, go.
you got?
What's your cause? Y'all
Oh, my
talk
card? Yeah. Oh, my card, okay.
Hooting and hollering.
Okay, it says, go around the circle naming fast food chain mascots. Last one standing wins.
Oh, that's nice. Where we starting at?
I'll start first.
No,
Well, I mean, I gotta start first. I'm saying the easiest one, Ronald McDonald.
Oh, the Burger King mascot.
What's his name?
I forgot his name.
You lose.
Colonel Sanders.
Wendy.
What's her name?
Her name is Wendy, motherfucker.
Wendy, that's her name.
Right. He just said, what's her name?
Grimace.
Okay.
Grimace?
Jack in the Box.
Jolly Bee Bird. Jolly Bee. His name is
Jolly Bee.
Y'all got me. Wait, I'm
No,
confused.
let's go. Let's go.
Jolly Bee.
You lose.
Stop, you know.
Toucan Sam.
You lose. It's not a fair.
Fuck that. I'm naming
not
him
a
after
restaurant.
Toucan Sam is a cereal.
It's not a restaurant.
Nigga said
Nigga said
Toucan
Toucan.
He counts. He counts. Just keep it going. Name all the shits. Go on. Keep going.
It's not a restaurant.
So you gonna say Frosted Flakes?
Yeah. No, Tony the Tiger.
Tony the Tiger.
What you got? Yeah.
Fucking butt. The Chalupa dog.
Rastaman and
The
stick.
Chalupa dog?
What's
Your
his-
Gator
what's
Taco
his
Bell?
name? What's his name?
I don't know his name.
You lose.
Ooh.
Digit is his name.
Ooh, I got one. Snap, crackle, and pop. That's the three niggas from the Rice Krispies.
No, that's a cereal. Again.
I'm just naming niggas.
Starbucks girl. Yeah, what her name is?
Bucks girl.
Starbucks girl.
Bucky's.
Jimmy Dean. Jimmy.
What?
Oh, the nigga.
All right.
The nigga.
All right, plug another goddamn card. This guy. This guy
No.
said Jimmy Dean. A breakfast sandwich.
Nigga said ostriches.
The nigga name is Jimmy. It's Jimmy.
Jimmy Neutron?
That's his last name, Jimmy Dean.
The name. I got another one. The Green Giant
Oh, Green Giant.
from the peas. He's on all the peas.
This thing is really a vegan here. He's saying everything that could potentially be a veganism.
They got more.
Cereal.
Come on, let's keep it going. They got more. They got Ooh, Aunt Jemima.
Aunt Jemima.
Y'all some
She ain't
traitor
there no
ass
more,
niggas.
They took her
The
home.
salt
Jemima.
bitch. The little bitch
Aunt
carrying the
Jemima.
salt and throwing it
Uncle
with the
Ben.
rain and the under.
Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben.
Uncle
We
Ben.
forgot.
Ben.
Ooh. What about the nigga?
Pearl
The
Miracle.
nigga got
Quaker
cookies.
Oats. The Quaker Oats.
Famous Amos.
Famous
Famous
Amos.
Amos.
Famous Amos.
Yup.
Who else we got?
We got more.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said Aunt Jemima.
Yeah. We did.
Aunt Jemima.
Ooh.
She not there no more.
The other one. Betty.
Betty Crocker.
Is it Betty Crocker?
Yeah, Betty Crocker, Duncan Hines.
Duncan Hines.
Dog and House.
Yeah. Hog and Dodge.
Hog and Dawes.
Dog and Hoss.
Oh yeah.
Don't forget Ben and Jerry.
Ben and Jerry now.
Friendlies.
Not to be confused with Tom and Jerry.
My
No,
nigga Mike and Ike.
Aunt Jemima. We said that.
Mike and Ike.
Them janky ass monsters on the Quiznos commercials in the early 2000s.
Oh, I
Yes.
remember the Quiznos
Yes.
commercial.
Yes.
Sonics.
Sonics.
Maurice. Yo.
Sonic ain't got nobody though.
They
He
don't
just got a
have a
bunch of
mascot,
roller
though.
skate people.
They got the roller skating.
Arby's got Vin Rain's voice.
Yeah.
The beef.
Celino and Barnes. Wow.
Celino and Barnes is crazy.
And Jerry attorney.
Now we're just naming everything that got a name on it.
That got nothing to do with the damn action
Nothing to
card.
do with the card.
Nothing to do with the card,
No.
y'all. Nothing. Nothing to do with the damn card.
They got Celino and Barnes. What else they got? They got there was another law group. Two
One Triple A
guys.
Pain Law.
Which one?
One Triple A Pain Law.
One AAA Pain Law. Damn, what was the other one?
There's the I Have Fallen. And I can't get up.
Yeah, that.
Well, now we're just naming shit.
It's my money and I need it now.
J.G. Wentworth.
877 cash now.
Sleepies. They had the little Sleepies man.
What are you guys doing now? Stupid shit.
Ooh, the General.
Oh, yeah.
The General. Y'all forgot about the General?
The General.
Come on, man. The Dracula.
Famous
from Count
slogans,
Chocula.
BT Game, and famous slogans. Stanley Steamer.
1-800
Chia Pet?
Stanley Steamer wheels.
He said, chia.
Chia Pet?
I guess that's his own mascot.
Chia Pet?
Fuck Chia Pets.
Where a kid could be a kid.
Chuck E. Cheese.
Where a
They do
kid
got
could
their own
be a
mascot.
kid.
Chuck E. Cheese. The lobster from Red Lobster.
Yeah.
There's a Red Lobster up there.
Bubba Gump Shrimp.
Olive Garden.
Bubble gum
yeah,
shrimp.
Bubble
Yup.
Olive Garden.
Yup. What's that shit? That fish place?
What?
Long John Silver's.
Long John Silver.
Yeah.
Gordon's Fisherman.
Yeah.
Church to Gordon's
You from
Fisherman.
New York? Where you from?
We from the NY, from
Yeah,
BK.
from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn to be specific. Drop
all
a
the way
bomb
in
for the New
Brooklyn.
York.
It's Brooklyn in the house, without a doubt.
Now we from Staten Island.
Ooh,
I don't know you.
The Big Apple.
No shade to Staten Island, because we still include Staten Island in the 5 boroughs.
I mean,
Yeah.
Julius.
We kind of have to say we include them, you know what I mean?
Drop a bomb for Julius.
Julius, welcome in. What else we
what's
got?
your card? I don't know what's your card.
Oh yeah, we do got another card.
Yeah.
92 is from
Coochie Cream.
Coochie Cream. Coochie Cream is from Malaysia.
Malaysia.
From
Wow.
Malaysia.
Are you a streamer?
Word.
Gucci Cream, are you a streamer?
Gucci Cream.
Text the judge.
Big Brooklyn in the building here.
Big Brooklyn, my man.
Perfect.
So whatever the cards say is what we're gonna do.
Right.
Text the judge a 5-word story. Most compelling wins. I'll go first. I did not do it.
I am innocent.
That's one word,
I
nigga.
am innocent.
Nigga, that's one word. I'm clipping that shit.
No, as Cole said on Martin.
She broke down the syllables.
Innocent.
I am innocent. I like it. Though.
No cent.
I need my money now.
That you going to jail.
Right.
You going straight to jail.
They go to jail. Damn.
Yeah, you going to jail too.
All right.
Why you ain't getting locked up? What you got, CJ?
I plead the 50th, Judge.
Charge and I'll end you. Kosher's different.
I love you
Kosher's
so much.
that's a straight threat. Charge and I'll end
Damn,
you.
going
It's
to jail
crazy.
fast.
Oh, what?
I love you so much. I love you so.
Oh, he said he got.
He
that
went the
from
total
SRC.
opposite route as Kosher.
Okay. Coochie Cream said, like I said earlier, I just got back from the SIC. What's the SIC? Tell us what the SIC is. I'm interested.
Staten Island Center.
Staten Island Center,
I'm
but
making
they
shit up.
from
I don't
Malaysia,
know.
so.
Maybe
Staten
he
Island
visited
Center
Staten
crazy.
Island. Now, what's the SIC?
Oh, just Petronas F1 C-Paint International Circuit.
Also,
Kart.
racing.
Oh, the racing thing.
Racing
The
thing. That's
racing.
fire.
Okay.
That's fire.
I only know one racer, Jeff Gordon. That's it.
Yes.
That's all I
He
know.
was on there with Jay-Z. Jeff Gordon.
Right.
Yeah.
I only know one racer of the F1 thing,
You
and
want
that's
to do
Jeff
another
Gordon.
round? Y'all want to
We love you too, Julius. That's our guy. Drop the ball for our guy, Julius.
Give me an old card. If it's too ridiculous, give it back. Because some of them get a little crazy.
Yeah, this is. What the fuck is that?
How about you randomly pick? How about you randomly pick them?
We do that.
We love all our chat people.
We love all y'all.
Our community. Everybody. Even our new friend, 92 Coochie Cream.
Okay. I like this one. This is nice. We're gonna be freestyling right now.
Okay. Oh shit.
Basically, we're going around the room, keeping the rhyme going. So it says, go around the circle, naming words that rhymed with rhyme. Last one standing wins. I guess we're starting with rhyme. So, rhyme.
Time.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
Crime.
Twine.
Grind.
Shine.
Time with H.
Line.
Dine.
Fine.
Wine.
Prime.
Mine.
I said that already.
Did you?
I said it first.
Oh, then go ahead.
So Bob.
I'm out of here,
Sublime.
man.
You out.
Shine.
Genuine.
Oh.
I like that.
Wow.
My nigga!
Wow. Cooking it up.
Yeah, right.
So we gotta make it brine.
Go, go. Say
Brine.
again?
Brine.
Brian.
Nope, you out.
Oh, fine. Fuck. I'm out.
Somebody said prime already?
You go. Yep.
Somebody said prime
I
already?
said prime already.
Yep.
Shit.
You're done.
Damn it.
In test time.
That was annoying.
You heard that one?
Intestine?
In test time.
Wow.
Slime.
Yeah, so Twitch said mime, chime, sublime.
Yeah, you know y'all can't go bar for bar with GK.
Oh, here we go with the bullshit.
We was gonna be here all day because GK don't play. Y'all know all the words I'm gonna make up and shake it and I'm gonna say. I'm gonna make niggas bow down. It ain't no homo. We just gonna pray. On your head, my hands gonna lay. Come on, man. I can do this all day. Woo! Bars all day. I'm Big Brooklyn. They don't know. They can't keep up with me. You know what I'm saying? If they try it,
Pick another goddamn card.
I'm gonna pick another goddamn card.
Sublime, high, shine, light, dang it.
It's a red fish, blue fish.
Oh, damn.
That's my shit right there. And always remember, my brother, one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. 2000 oops, out of time.
Come up with a new slang name for vagina.
A new slang name for vagina.
Damn.
Tunchi?
Tunchi?
Mm-hmm. That's what he showed us a minute ago.
Tight lips.
Tight lips.
Tight lips. Tight lips. Come on, y'all.
PZ.
Peasy.
Pleasure zone.
Oh, I thought you meant like peas, like
Come on
hairy
now.
peasy. Boogie in the bush.
Boogie and
And make it thing go.
He said definitely not coochie.
That coochie green.
Right. Definitely not coochie green.
Jeff said hot pocket.
Wow, that's a good one.
If she burned it too.
Julia said knick-knack,
Paddywhack. I'm gonna tell your mama on you. I'm fucking with you, Julius. You know I'm fucking with her.
Don't tell Jay. She on here, I think, so damn.
I'm saying flower
Big
pocket.
Brooklyn said hot pocket.
Flower pot.
Hot pocket. That's the best one.
Flower pot.
That's the what?
Flower pot.
That's not bad. Flower pot's pretty good actually.
That shit big.
He don't know. He just want to put his penis in.
Kid drop off.
Wow.
Oh my God. What is going on?
Metal can.
At that point, might as well call it the
Julius
daycare.
The daycare.
The daycare.
Julia said pink towel. I am
Pink
appalled.
towel.
I'm appalled right now. I'm uncomfortable.
CP for short. CP for short.
That is crazy.
For the cock pocket, see people short.
Pink towel is crazy.
Pink towel, sir?
Fix your face. I like pink towel. That's
I want to laugh, but I don't want to laugh.
No, laugh, goddammit.
I'm naming that
Show
shit.
Julius.
Pink towel is crazy.
Oh my god, that's
Miss
funny.
Be Nasty.
Drip,
You
drip.
gotta do it for the men then. Come on.
All right.
Oh, damn.
What about
You
drip,
hit.
drip?
Drip, drip.
Give us your Starbucks order in the best posh British accent.
I would like to order 1 latte macchiato. Shaken, not stirred.
You go.
Press the button, nigga. Goddamn press.
Said press the button.
You go.
I gotta say my drink, the drink that I get. Fuck. I say.
I say it's crazy.
Yo, this nigga.
I say, I would like to have myself a nice grande.
Strawberry. Come on.
What the fuck is it called?
Strawberry acai.
A nice grande strawberry acai with lemonade. Make sure you add some ice, not enough berry, just a little bit of it. Make sure you put 2 drops of syrup in it. Yes, indeed.
Yours.
Hey, you fucking bloody wanker.
Yo. What?
Hey, went straight to the wanker. It's crazy.
Right.
Wanker is wild.
Let me get an iced brown shaken espresso with a lot of brown sugar oatmeal in it. Oat milk and whipped cream on top. And hold the fucking wank on the side because I don't need that in my drink.
Oatmeal in it?
Nothing my
Oat milk.
Why
Yeah.
did he?
Ultimate in it.
I think you just hit that crazy just now.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotta
You
go.
don't need no fucking wankers on it.
Hello, mate.
Hello,
I like
Mike.
the grande. Caramel frap. Cream base. That's it.
She started out British. Hello, Mike. And just went straight Brooklyn. Hello, mate. Yo, my nigga.
All right, my nigga. Get my drink. Fuck all
Yo,
that.
hello, mate. Good day, mate.
Yeah, I'm not
Hey, yo,
wearing the
ah,
hat, Julius.
I'm
I'm
gonna
not
need
wearing the
yo,
hat
yo,
today.
you know what I'm saying?
No hat. They made me take my hat and my sweater
We
off,
ain't fixing
Julius.
anything. That's a lie.
They made me take it off.
What you got? They made him take his off too.
My hat, my sweater, everything. It was nice.
My order is okay. Let me see. All right, because I get one thing and that's
British
it.
accent.
British accent.
Hold the fucking wanker.
Oi, mate.
BT Games, so are you guys getting ready to end the stream?
No.
Got a little bit left.
A little bit left. Not right this second.
Oi, mate. Let me get a strawberry shortcake drink.
Strawberry shortcake.
Strawberry shortcake drink with extra sugar on the
I
side.
don't like your order.
You don't like my
I don't.
That's it. Fuck you.
I don't like your
Oi,
order.
mate. Fuck you.
That was a good one.
I don't like the order.
in here.
Put that there.
No, what?
Do
Fuck
another
your
one?
order.
Fuck your order.
Who the fuck ordered a
Let's
short?
do lyrically
What was it called again?
A strawberry shortcake.
That's that in liquid form.
Yo, Koza is stupid.
What's
Excuse
blended?
me, this water
That's
is too
that's
wet.
blended or...
I like
Excuse
the caramel
me,
just
this is-
espresso with-
Excuse me. This water is
Wow.
too wet. I'd like a caramel
Wow.
drizzle espresso with oatmeal, 2 cane sugar, and 2 scone and a scone.
The score.
Make sure you warm my scone and cut the edges off beach.
Say he want his beans and toast.
We gotta say beach at the end. Beach is B-E-E-C-H. Beach.
KSI is the best example of a black bird. Yes, he is, yo.
It's a good one. Tell the group, chat, chime in on this one too. Tell the group the craziest thing someone has ever said to you. I'll go. One that popped right off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
May not be the crazy, but it popped right off the top of my head. I was in high school. Me and my man was walking home because, we gangsters.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Me and my boy. And we came, long story short, we came across a couple of shorties or whatever. And shorty was kind of hitting on me and shit. You know what I'm saying? I was young, you know what I'm saying? I didn't really know how to get to them. I wasn't as you can, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You feel me?
Yeah. He had the DM, just not the X.
Yeah.
Right,
You
right,
feel
right.
me? Shorty dead looked at me and said, I like him. But Shorty dead, like, I'm not even gonna hold you. I should hurt my feelings. She said, I think he ugly as fuck, but I'll fuck him. I was just like,
What?
That's crazy.
I mean, if she gonna fuck you, a win is a win, right?
I went home, bro.
Yeah, well, no, what I'm gonna stay here for?
Man, a
Shorty
win is a
dead
win.
ass said that. She said it out loud.
A win is a
She
win,
wasn't
bro.
cute either.
She was like, yo, that was the thing.
A
But
win
she
is
should
a
have said
win.
that.
I was already shot. You know when animes, when you get shot, everything
Yeah.
goes, doosh. I was just like, I'm ugly. My mom been lying to me, nigga. She told me I was handsome. What? This bitch dead ass said, I think he ugly as fuck, but I'll fuck him anyway. I was just like, what? I didn't know where to go. I was just like, am I mad?
That's a stunner. That's a stunner. Right there.
Crazy.
It's
I was
like,
shocked.
It's like he'll give you some charity pussy. Like, I don't want no charity.
Yeah. But then again, I ain't saying no words to you. You talking to me. You feel me?
The first thing that popped into my head is mad wrong. I can't say that here. For real.
Damn, now we want to know. You better find a way to edit it.
Right. Yeah.
What about you?
Shit. This nigga said fake story.
Yeah, they called him black.
Who called?
What about you?
No, he got mad because they called him white.
Yeah. They got mad because they called him white. He was like, oh, you motherfucker.
You mother, you see me, nigga?
You know what the fuck What's wrong with you? and I know he got this close on her face and put the bottom lip and said, fuck wrong with you?
What you got, bro?
Shit. Craziest things about, I mean, it's kind of been said for a while. Just a fat, sweaty nigga. That's what I've been called.
Yo, I mean,
I'm like, all right.
That's the easiest
Don't worry
shot.
about it. I know somebody who don't like it. Fuck wrong with you? I know somebody that like it. She like the fat, she like the sweat, and she like that I'm a black nigga.
Damn right.
What about
You got Fetty?
Me? Damn. I did remember somebody in high school telling me I look like a school shooter.
That what?
I look like a school shooter.
Damn,
That's
Damn.
crazy.
That's wild. It doesn't help with the light beaming on you when you say that.
I know.
Saying he looked like a school shooter is crazy.
A school shooter is crazy, man.
Ash Ketchum said, I've been called short my entire life.
Damn.
You're not short, you tall. You a skinny string bean.
What you got, sis?
Somebody once told me to suck a fart on my ass.
Whoa.
Wow, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah. A fart?
Stop!
He made the smoke
I know,
sound.
like,
It's
he's
crazy.
like-
Wait, can we hear those?
No, you cannot. I'm not doing that.
Out
Who,
your ass.
who is this
I was
nigga?
looking at the store. Somebody said it to me.
You don't even know this nigga?
Yeah, you know how niggas
Random hood nigga?
What happened to drinking
He was like,
bathwater?
I'm sure he was just like, yo.
Was he drinking Henny?
No, he
Shorty.
was on the corner selling weed.
Yo.
What year was this?
Yo, girl,
This
I
was
suck
back
a
when I
fart
was
out your ass.
17.
He did the same thing with the bottom lip. I suck a fart out your ass.
Shut up.
So he was
I was
trying to
like
holler at
17,
you?
Yeah, that's
And that was his line.
Yes, I was like, oh,
Wait, so say how he said it.
Yo,
What I say? What I say? Yo.
yo,
Yo.
shorty.
Yo,
I'll
shorty.
suck a fart.
Shorty, think of the motherfucker. I suck a fart out her ass. The bottom lip. Fart out her ass.
Next person.
Yo, that's crazy.
Next person.
What'd you say?
Hey, Coach, they got a couple up here.
All right, go ahead.
Ash said, he's 6'5", because Kitty asked how tall. He said, I'm 6'5".
Yeah, all right.
6'5" is crazy.
This nigga's 5'3".
I mean, he might be 5'6", but, who's counting?
This nigga's 5'3" and a half. Okay?
That nigga 1 feet.
I mean, if he does put his height in the mirror,
That
it does
nigga's
say
5'5".
6'5".
Okay, you know?
I'm with you, Ash. I'm with you, bro. I'm with you. Coach said 80-year-old man in Detroit called me an olive nigga, but the word, but
Oh,
the hard R.
wow.
Oh, he hit you with the ER.
Oh, you know what that mean right here? Like Cozy, because Cozy's cultured.
Yeah.
He go, you one of them that like them other motherfuckers. You one of them one, yeah.
Yeah, he said you waffle color.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Olive Negro nigga.
Traitor.
And Dragon.
Yeah.
Like right there.
You gonna make sure you hear the R.
So you hear this crazy one.
Kitty said, my brother told me my son is going to be a serial killer and shoot up
Wow.
schools
No,
because
that's not funny.
his 10th birthday theme was Five Nights at Freddy's.
That's not funny.
What's wrong with your brother?
Your brother, oh, okay, wait, hold on. Was he joking? Was he just fucking around?
I don't know, but fire for her brother.
Yeah, fire for that. That's not funny.
Fire for her brother.
That's not funny.
We like Young Cat, goddammit.
That's my dog.
Yeah, we like Young Cat.
His mastery is on screen. You get what I'm saying? Matter of fact, for the last one, I asked Kitty, hey, ask young nigga.
Yeah.
Sorry, young man.
Young Cat.
Young Cat to
Oh nah, he
Just
said
throw
no, he
OG
was
a bone.
bad.
What he got in the tank?
Yeah,
What he
yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about?
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Let me see.
No, he was dead ass. You said, oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Fire for your brother.
No,
Fire for that.
you know what I'm saying? Some stuff we just not gonna condone.
No. Fire
That's
for that.
crazy. I got kids. You don't talk about people's kids like that.
Yeah, no.
I got one.
And he only 10?
Yeah,
On his birthday.
That's crazy.
He said he got one.
Go ahead.
So I was playing randoms on this battle royale game, not Fortnite. I forgot the name, but anyway, I joined it with some randoms. We started playing. Out of nowhere, I beat the shit out of some dude, right? And after I killed the dude, I just killed him something nasty to where he didn't get one shot on me at all whatsoever.
Damn.
So he texted me right on PlayStation. After he texted me, I didn't see the text until like hours later when I got off the game on my phone. Tell me what this nigga gonna tell me. So you just gonna really shit on me like that? You know what? Just for that, I'm gonna suck the kids out your dick. I said,
What? Oh my god.
I wonder if I still have the text messages, but bro, I looked at him and I said, wow. The kids?
That's yo.
92 got something new too. He said.
What 92 got? Cause we moved on from that. That's crazy.
That's why.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You said crazy shit.
I don't even have a reaction for that.
I don't. You see my face? I got stuck and I put the button.
That's
Fire.
it. That's
Fire
crazy.
for that. He said, actually, I remember I was taking the metro train, obviously. A girl sit next to me. She looked like a cosplayer. She looked at me and said, I'm also wearing black lace underneath. Want to see my mind?
What?
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh,
So I got questions now.
No, so my bad. I read that wrong. Let me go back and read it. She looked at me and said, I'm also wearing black lace underneath. Want to see?
I got a question though.
He said, oh my god.
I would have said, yes, ma'am, indeed.
Hey, hey, yo.
You gotta push your glasses up.
Hey, yo, 92, aka CC.
I said, what for dick fell out with this?
I got a question though.
We all have our little
Took us to prepare for trouble. Whoa.
What the other person look like? I'm just curious.
I'm not worried about that part. I'm worried if 92 said yeah,
Right.
and then a secret fell out as soon as you went up under it to take a look.
I never seen her again. Damn.
It's just that we all got our secrets. Like, where we going?
Gotta, Kitty said gotta change his name now. CC92. I'm telling you,
Yep.
you forever CC, man.
Yep, CC92.
I done invited you in with that name. You know what I'm saying? I caught myself right before I finished the cream.
Yep.
Hey.
Hey.
Wow.
Got to slow down.
Fire feet out. Bomb now.
Crazy.
Yep.
That's kind of crazy.
Yep. He said, I never seen her again.
God damn it. I said bomb. No, wait, no, wrong one.
No.
You don't even know the button.
Press the wrong buttons. Fire for that.
It's the button with the bomb on it?
Yeah, it's a button with the bomb on
I
it.
ain't seen the bomb until last minute. Until I pressed the
It's a button with the bomb on it, John. He goes over here and presses the chef hat. Like he's cooking.
Fucked it up. Worry about it. I got it next time.
I remember I saw GK and said, damn.
That's a lying ass little nigga right there.
Damn.
That's a lying. I remember when I first met Ash. She was skinny as fuck.
Damn.
Presto.
Damn.
Nigga said he
Crazy.
was Oscar proud, small.
Presto.
Presto.
Hold on, let me grab another one. Cause these shits is hitting right now.
I'm gonna read this once he throw away, just so y'all can know what he's throwing away. Grab something in the room that starts with the letter C and say what it is. First one wins. Nobody want to grab that. We want to grab our cocks. Like, we gotta get
Wow.
yeah, cocks and coochies.
How
Like,
about some cats?
I got makeup with imaginary chip flavor. Tastiest sounding flavor wins.
makeup and imaginary chip flavor.
Jerky doodles.
What the fuck?
You ruined it with the doodles.
I don't want to say jerky chips. That's whack.
The way we segued out of this other subtopic, jerky chips and jerky doodles.
No, she said jerky doodles is crazy.
Jerk
flavored doodles? Wow.
Jerk flavored cheese doodles.
That's even extra crazy.
So he jerked over too?
No, not that type of jerk. Hey. I'm talking about
This is
jerk
what I'm
sauce.
saying. Like, are we
Like
putting
jerk chicken flavored cheese doodles?
So we making flavors?
CC92? I'm sticking with the name. CC92
Yep.
said, You know what?
Cubic
Since I'm into
centimeter.
bites, I'm going to think of it
Dookie
as
is
CC
wild.
stands for a cubic centimeter.
Nigga ass said pussy flavored chips.
I was about to say
I would,
coochie sensation.
I wouldn't buy that.
Jerk dookie is
Because there's
wild
no
as
way
fuck.
I'm going on the shelf and picking up pussy flavored chips and going to the counter and paying for that with a
You
straight
really want to
face.
try it? Is he really?
No.
Really like? All right.
No, I'm not.
Maybe
No.
I'm just curious.
Nah,
Because I don't know whose it
Right,
is.
every coochie don't taste the same.
Henny flavored chips.
Any flavor.
If you could give me a more enticing liquor than Henny, but liquor
Don Julio.
flavored chips, I could probably
Don?
ride.
Old Bay and crab leg favorite chips. They actually have something called a crab chip out here.
There is something called a crab chip out here, Koza. Google it on your phone. We
What
got
about-
crab chip. It's called
What about
crab
the
chip.
seafood boiled chip?
Ooh.
Seafood boiled chip.
What about ramen flavored chips?
Seafood
Ooh,
sensation.
ramen flavored
Why do I
chips.
feel like that exists though?
The ramen flavored chip?
Yeah, it might.
Pickle flavors is already invented. Pickle flavors.
Curry goat or curry chicken chip.
Ooh.
How would that translate chip wise?
Pineapple spice chip.
Just the curry chip.
Teriyaki chips.
Ice spice flavored chips.
Oh hell no! We don't need no fucking.
She fucking everywhere, bro. She fucking everywhere.
She already shook ass all over.
Ash said pineapple spice chip. Koza said jambalaya
Jambalaya.
chips. I like jambalaya
Why two
chips.
switch that sensation is
Sensation is S.
Oh, how
Cubic
about
centimeter
moon pie
sensation. Okay.
Chips? Moon pie chips.
What's up with you and the ass pies?
Right.
It's like the
Yeah.
third time we went.
Like
to
it's
moon
it's like
He's
fuck.
right.
Wait a minute, chat. Fire for that. Fire for that.
I said moon pie because there's a cookie that's called
But
moon
you
pie.
cannot
It is
put
the
moon
moon pie.
and
But you
pie.
but
I'm
you've
not
been
buying
putting
it.
every
I'm not
kind of
buying it.
ass joke in your mouth
Wow.
all night.
He already said he eat it with his ass tooted up. from the
Wow.
back. He did say it.
Wow.
He did say it.
They're pulling up receipts on you,
I don't,
guys.
I don't get it. I just don't get it.
But the thing about the ass too, nobody said y'all had to be naked.
Say what?
Nobody said y'all was naked with your ass too. You can have clothes on. Your ass still too.
And you eating pussy with clothes on?
That's how you started off. And then you get to that.
What?
Wait, what?
I'm already naked.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Who
What
butt
you
ass
talking about?
nigga?
If my tongue is licking your twat, I'm
Just
already
have your
naked.
shirt off. Shirt off.
How am I eating pussy with my North Face on?
No, just your basketball
What's your
shorts.
North Face?
Just your
He
basketball
said, I'm zipped over. I don't want nothing to get
I
on
got
my
on my
damn.
turtleneck. You know?
Right here. We have it zipped up.
Your
And
basketball
it's gonna be
shorts.
right here, right here.
boxers.
Just,
Ain't like I said, your ass tooted with a thong. Now that's crazy work.
Whoa! When the Diddy hit going on here.
First of all, if a nigga even own a thong, you know?
Y'all
Thong
lying.
on speedo.
Everybody in this room own a thong.
Lies.
Baby, stop.
Lies.
What?
Hold on.
Lies.
You have a thong in your
Lies. Don't even go there.
What
Nope.
She just leaked him.
Nope.
She just
joking.
leaked.
Tried it.
I'm just joking.
Fire for
She
that.
just leaked my brother. Goddamn.
Fire for that. Fire for that.
I'm just joking.
I said fire for that.
Y'all get
Hell.
down like that at the crib?
Nope.
He got thongs, speedos, G-strings.
I finna take
straps.
these. I finna take these same cards just like this. And
I'm just
on top of her head.
joking.
Right there.
I'm joking.
You got
Fire
Willy-
for that.
You got Willy Nilly's.
I'm joking. Y'all be a
Fire
fire
for that.
because you think it's funk. But I would love it, but you not gonna do it.
Yo.
Hollywood go
So,
get
Yeah,
if
Hollywood.
your girl asked y'all- so y'all won't dress up.
Hollywood.
Okay. Hold on, wait.
So if your girl
Wait,
asks
let's
you
talk
to,
about
y'all
that.
won't?
Let's talk about that. Let's talk
So
about
if
that.
your
She
girl
want me to dress
asks
up
you to
as?
wear a thong for you, for her, y'all
Now-
won't do it?
Nah, you say what you just said.
What she want me to dress up as?
That's the key. That's the key. I'm into some fun shit.
Right. What she want me to dress up
But you want me to
as?
put on heels?
If it's some Jeepers
and-
Creepers
and-
shit,
nah,
no.
nah, I ain't into no weird shit. You want me to dress up as Superman?
A thong and a gag
You want me
ball.
to bust out that
A
shit?
thong and a gag ball.
The
A what?
The
Why would
boxer
you say
shorts
thong?
that we got, that you got, the black ones with the kisses all over it. I'm
Yeah.
cool with that.
Yeah.
I can rock with that.
Yeah, that's cool. But why do you keep saying thong?
Because girls, we like to look at y'all cheeks too. What are we supposed to look at besides
Why do you
dick
keep
and
like
chest?
being the ambassador
What
for niggas'
about?
ass?
Because all we gotta look at
Why-
is dicks and chests. All we gotta look at is dicks and chests. I want to see that all the time.
Because
What do you want to see?
Pussy in a
Ass
shiesty and beat up force.
Wait, what?
This is crazy
Koza
work.
said I only eat pussy in my shiesty and some beat up. What?
What?
What are we talking about right
Bob
now?
Bacoza.
He said in a shiesty and forces.
Black Air Forces too.
That's crazy.
Wait, he said black ones?
No, I said black ones.
Oh, if he said white ones, nigga,
Koza
you
the type
steal.
of nigga that be hitting it doggy style with Tim's on.
Yes.
You need that grip.
Yes.
You need
I
that
need that
grip.
grip on the ground.
That
Oh
grip
Let me
is
ask you a
crazy.
question. You ever fucked?
Mhm.
you know, saying doggy style on the floor, and
the-
then when you're
like
done, your
road
knees
rash.
just rubbed
What would
off,
y'all-
raw.
The road rash.
Your
That's
fucking
That's
knees,
mad uncomfortable.
and you wondering how I didn't feel this while
you
it
was
was
too busy.
rubbing raw.
You was too busy.
Black. Coach said black and hot top, real Detroit
That's
shit.
crazy.
Damn.
That's crazy. I think
Now he's
Coles,
shooting somebody.
I think
know that
Coles
for a
is
fact. You
blacker
got the
than me.
black-
Now
You got
see,
the black high top.
yeah.
You shooting somebody.
You be
shooting
in doggy
somebody.
style with your knees.
So let me ask y'all a question. What's y'all fantasy sex thing? Like, what's y'all thing? Comp and Ramba?
like kind of see fat from
I don't
cosplay.
even know how to
Yeah,
answer that.
cosplay.
Fantasy
Like,
cosplay?
what's my fantasy sex?
What's something you would try? Like you haven't tried but wanted to try?
Hey, does she?
You
can,
would try?
Can she shut the fuck up for a long time?
No.
Can't do that. She can't like.
Are y'all into whips and chains?
Nah.
Oh
Nah.
hell no.
Oh, you said BDSM.
Why not?
GG's.
What do you mean? Why not?
That's some
What
50
you
Shades
whipping
of
me for?
Grey shit. Like
I'm a
what
grown
the
ass
fuck?
man.
That's BDSM.
Fuck you
That's
whipping me
anything
for?
got
Shades
shit to
of
do with
Grey.
it.
Oh
That's
man,
knees got
damn,
raw sucking
Kitty.
dick. Kitty, come on now.
Who
First
said
of all,
My
the
knees
anal,
got raw.
and now
Oh,
it's this. Come on.
Jesus.
Clap it up.
Clap
Clap it up for that.
Kitty was a
Fire.
Clap it
trooper.
up.
Look,
Kitty is a trooper.
Give her one to Superman too.
give us Superman for that too. All right.
Kitty was
A
a
little.
I
trooper.
saw you
I
again.
forgot
Superman.
again.
I
My
saw you.
daughter
She
was
forgot
texting.
again.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
See, Kitty said whip short. She come for the whip.
You was like, again.
Nah, fuck the Superman.
1, 2,
This
3,
girl.
go. Little Superman for that.
I'm saluting her shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
He gonna be on all her streams now.
Word
How long?
Word up.
Okay, so how long is too long?
He said, "Yeah, you screaming them
I got a
all?
question for y'all.
You screaming them all, Kitty? I'm trying to get a duck. You screaming them all, Kitty? I'm trying to get a duck.
She already took my. She
Kitty
took it
ignored
herself.
it. Kitty ignored
She
it.
took my
Kitty
anal
Talk
wasn't
about
bad. Anal wasn't bad. Shorty, you took it in your.
He gonna have the longest stream streak ever.
They so stupid.
Kitty gonna
Ask
press
a
live.
question. So
Hey,
how
Kitty.
long is too
Hey, yo,
long?
what you playing, Kitty? How you doing? How you doing?
I'm
The
gonna
rubbing
do
of the
that.
hands, like, yeah. Yeah.
How long is too long for a woman, a girl to give you head? How long is too long?
What you mean? Too long? Like what you mean?
Like
How
3 hours.
long?
Why you
you
down there
gotta
for
suck
3
the
hours?
nut out.
How
No,
long?
bro. If you
Sure,
down there like
shit
10,
on
15 minutes, the head is trash, bro.
Yeah,
Like,
but you out there down there for 3 hours, bitch. My cock hurt.
Now, how long is too long?
if you
for
down there 10, 15 minutes and I ain't shoot off, that's a problem, bro. Like, what we doing
15
here?
minutes is long. You gotta know what you're doing.
I
If you
had
know what
long
you're
15
doing,
minutes
sessions
ain't
with that.
bad.
so she knows what you're doing.
Sometimes, you know what I'm saying, when a girl's sucking dick and shit.
It depends on how she doing it.
Depends on how she doing it, but sometimes it's not pussy though.
KK done said, what did I
It
come
takes
back
more
to?
work.
Not-
Gluttony
not-
said,
It
am I
takes
too
more
pure for
work to
this?
suck it out.
No.
Then the pussy can
If
get
you
it.
do it
in a-
hand,
In
no,
a
no.
pool?
What you mean?
Ash said, I always wanted to try
That's
the
a jerk off.
jacuzzi. I heard it's
Y'all
on
be
tits.
cheating with
Ash,
that.
No, it's
First
not.
of all,
No,
hold
it's
on,
not.
fellas.
No, it's not. You gotta
Fellas,
do all
let's
of
talk
that.
about
You
it.
did it
No.
over.
Sometimes that bitch supposed to be sucking your dick, right? And she's really giving you a hand job and licking it. Like, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Stop trying to cheat niggas, man.
That's not cheating.
I know what y'all doing. Like, y'all
Right.
do that when y'all neck
So
get
y'all don't
tired.
finger while
Right.
y'all eating,
What?
Y'all like that, though.
but y'all like the hand moving and the sucking.
That's
What's
not the
difference?
same, though.
How is that not the same?
Because you get an insertion.
Oh my god.
I
We-
wanna-
we
So y'all
rubbing
want
the
us to
spot.
suck and do this to your
Whoa,
balls?
what are you doing?
You see- you see-
Why do you keep going back to that? Why do you keep
Stop
going
it,
back
Dan.
to that?
Which
Why
one
do
would you
keep-
prefer?
The
Why
booty
would you
bandage.
keep going back to
The
that?
booty
you want it
bandage
like
shit.
that?
Why
Or
would you
you
keep
want it
going
like
back to this? Why?
Booty warriors.
Which one do you
Booty
prefer?
warriors crazy.
Like, I feel like her finger get this long when she do it. Why?
Swear to God, she ever tries some shit like that, I'm going in the living room.
Oh,
I'm going in the
I'm
living
coming in
room.
there too.
Nope.
Wow.
She said she gonna chase you with it.
I'm just gonna be on the sheets. Hey, bro.
You gonna
Nigga said she got the ET finger.
Soon as she start with the ET shit, look.
Shut up.
Soon as she start with the ET shit, fuck this, I'm out. I'm out of here.
He said E.T. He said E.T.'s crazy. With the light on the finger and everything. Nigga had a bulb finger. It's crazy.
Y'all gonna go poop.
Yo, that's
Right in there.
crazy.
Oh,
Y'all some dumb
So how long do
motherfuckers.
y'all eat the box then? If that's the case,
I'm not gonna lie, I can't eat pussy for that long, man.
so how you?
Yeah, my
make
jaw
the
started-
dick
My
suck
jaw
then?
start hurting and shit.
Right,
How you
start
think we
locking
feel?
up.
How
Nah,
you think we
that's
feel?
different. That's
Just
different.
picture sucking a cucumber.
What? I've never pictured that.
Nope.
I don't think I want to start doing that. I don't even like cucumbers.
Oh.
I don't eat pickles,
Pickles.
my nigga. I don't eat pickles.
I don't eat
No, I don't
cucumbers
like-
unless they cut.
I don't like pickles at all. I don't eat carrots.
Oh, my
Coochie
God.
Cream said, and to think I was looking forward to eat my hot dog.
Thanks for that image.
I'm
Damn.
sorry. Jesus Christ.
That means Glizzy about to go in the
Somebody,
microwave.
somebody give me a red flag. I gotta throw it at the screen.
Oh
This is
my
crazy.
God. Oh.
The glizzy.
No, you just said shit 20 minutes. I started looking like Stephen Hawking.
Who said that?
Yo, Koza. Oh, dear. Yo.
I'm just picturing Cozy just laying there like this.
Mouth.
He
You
like-
gotta do the mouth.
Nigga said, I'm at the bar. He said, I'm at the bar.
Oh God.
This goes right here. This was.
Oh my God.
Yeah, y'all. I give it to my cat. I lost my appetite.
Oh my God.
Don't do that.
Damn.
Motherfucker lying. He down in the glizzy right now.
I'm just picturing him.
Son got sauerkraut on it and everything.
He had it like this. Was to go.
She said the reenactment.
This is bullshit.
Oh
I
God.
can't breathe. I think it's stupid.
Y'all some dumb motherfuckers, man.
That's mad funny though.
You gotta go on.
The perk 30 is crazy.
He gonna be in the cut.
Nigga said
He gonna be in
he
the cut like
was in
I
the
need
Jeep.
some drugs.
Yo. Bro, Stephen Hawking, that fucked up.
Yo, too funny. Too fucking
Nigga said, oh
funny.
yeah, oh yeah.
Too funny.
I don't know if everybody got
I'm.
one.
Coach said the Stephen Hawking thing. Once I got down here, I don't want to get up out of this spot. Though.
Motherfucker comfortable down
I got
there
down
and
there
shit.
just like, yeah.
This shit crazy.
Yeah.
I got my cracking up tonight.
Ash is funny as hell.
Cause he
What
said
you
I
say?
had someone go like 30 minutes on my box and I was good. I got dizzy and passed out. Damn.
Damn.
Y'all ever had this like it's just like where the nut at?
Right, yeah,
You
yeah,
fucking you just like where is the nut?
Is that
Like,
when y'all drink?
ah!
Like, do y'all not quicker when y'all drink? Or, like, does drinking make it hard?
I'm gonna tell you a drinking story, right? My baby mama,
Take
right?
longer.
Me, my baby mama, my homeboy, and his baby mama, right? We all went out. So we all coming back, and the girls are fucked up. So me and my homeboy, you know, we on guard duty. We gotta hold them up and shit.
Yeah.
So we in the cab, we ain't live far from each other, like 5 blocks away.
Right,
So we
right,
took
right.
one cab, bound.
Right.
So we got to the crib, and my homeboy, he looked at me, I looked at him. He's like, "Yeah, I know, nigga. Long night. Meaning you gonna have to go in there and work this bitch out." Cause they both got sexual energy spilling all over the place. And he was like, "Me too, nigga. We clocking in tonight."
Oh, damn.
So we go inside. Of course, we get crazy. You know what I'm saying? I don't remember nothing else.
Jesus
You
Christ.
don't remember?
I remember the initiation of getting ready to fuck. I don't remember where I bust, how I bust.
Oh,
If
I've
I
never
God.
bust.
been that drunk.
I don't remember. We just both woke up the next morning like, hey.
What?
I don't remember nothing.
What you was drinking? I don't want none of
Now, see,
that.
that kind of sex
Yeah.
I'm scared of. What you put in your butt?
Right, you
You
don't
don't know what
You
happened.
don't even
What?
know.
You don't know what happened.
No, you would have felt your
But
ass.
you don't know
would've
what
been sore.
happened.
His ass would have been
We're not
sore.
talking
But you
about
don't
no-
know what
I'm
happened.
gonna need you to shut the fuck up.
But,
You don't know.
but wait. CC 92. At least my
CC90. That name ain't go nowhere.
CC 92 said at least my cat is female. If my cat was a male, that's gonna be a problem to
Fucking
enter fatherhood.
Shit.
The glizzy for the kitty?
That's crazy.
Damn.
See, I don't remember shit. I remember us getting to the bedroom and the clothes coming off and all of that. That's it. I don't remember shit else.
Nah, kid, you a trooper, gang. Fuck all that, gang.
Soldier.
I'm saluting your shit inside with a granny.
I'm a born again virgin too. I ain't been getting none.
I blacked out 3 times.
Kitty says it's been like a year. I'm like glut, a born again virgin. Cause KK done said Kitty.
See, it's
damn,
not
Kitty,
only
I
me.
didn't know you
Kitty
got
just
down
blacked
like
out
that.
3
The
times.
Michael Jackson.
So blackout 3 times during sex is crazy.
Right, that's wild.
I got one for y'all. Name the funniest slang term for sex.
What? Name the funniest slang term.
for
The
sex.
horizontal poker.
What the fuck?
Spank that monkey.
Spank that monkey.
In the bed now.
Horizontal
Right now.
poker is what I'm saying.
That spank that monkey.
Backshot grannies.
Backshot grannies is
stole our-
crazy.
Question. That's your question though. What's the oldest person you have sex with? Oldest.
I would.
Oldest?
Oldest.
You still look good. I'm fucking.
How old?
28.
He said she can be
You
102.
said 28. Man, go.
I'm so
28
dead
ain't
ass.
old.
I'm so dead.
Shut the
The
fuck
oldest,
up.
oldest that you said the oldest that I did, right?
No,
No, that you would
that
do.
you would do.
Oh. I ain't gonna lie, she got that good pension. I'm going for like 60, shorty. I ain't gonna lie.
55.
She could give me that,
What?
that Tesla.
55?
She could give me that
I'm
Tesla.
kind of like, honestly, it's the visual. If you fuckable, I'm tearing your ass up.
Don't be an old person.
Nah, fuck all that.
What's the worst song
you
y'all
got a
fuck
good
to?
pension.
Madonna.
Like the song happened to come on.
She look too prosthetic.
What's the worst song?
She look fucking like
16, 65, oh, never mind. Kenny said 60 to 65, oh, never mind.
What's the worst song?
Damn.
Like the worst song.
The oldest men is different though. But maybe the old, I get old.
That's not true.
Oh my God, K Cadence, no.
And pussy dry up.
No.
Hakuna Matata?
Okay.
What happened?
I said, what is the worst song you fucked to? Like the song happened to come on in the middle of it. She said Hakuna Matata.
Wow.
No.
That's bad.
It means no worries though. For
means
the
no
rest of
worries.
your
It's our problem free.
philosophy.
He put it on and instantly. I dried up so fast.
Worst part he put. I dried up.
That is so funny.
Yo.
Worst song though.
Oh no, he put it on intentionally. What's wrong with this?
She said I dried up so fast and pushed him off
Right,
of me.
why would you put that on? You got mad songs.
Hakuna Matata.
He said CJ goodbye.
What's the
Jesus
worst song?
Christ. Oh
that
my
song,
God.
What's that song that go that? That came on.
I can fuck with that. That ain't gonna bop my
September.
Nah,
listen.
tight.
That came on. I was lying.
He was going crazy in September.
Baby
Do you
Shark.
remember?
There you go. Yeah. Do you remember?
Nah, not do you remember?
That's a good song. You crazy.
That's actually
That's
a old
song.
yeah.
It is.
It's an old
You
head.
ever seen Love the Closer Thing? When Steve walked in on that? Come on, that's a good song.
Yeah.
That and Baby Shark. What you talking about? Baby Shark is the worst.
Wow.
Baby
no.
Shark came on. Goddamn.
Baby
No.
Shark.
I mean, I ain't
This
gonna lie. I
gonna
got the
remind me
beat.
that this bitch got kids and shit.
It got the beat though, baby.
Golden said I beat cheeks to baby sharks and stole her kids' fruit snacks.
And watch little Einsteins in his bed.
We
What about the
different.
kids, Koza? What about the motherfucking kids?
Clearly, he don't give a fuck.
Well, yeah. So,
I'm gonna tell you a story about the kids though.
oh,
I'll show you how G kid care about the kids.
oh no.
Ah,
This is a real story.
Oh
So I was
God.
messed up with this little young thing, right?
Uh-huh.
She over there in Harlem, right?
Uh-huh.
Nice.
East Side Harlem or West Side Harlem?
Black Harlem.
It's
Oh
Harlem.
shit, that's the middle
You
Harlem.
fucked to ABCs.
Whatever. Long dreads, light skin. She was a little thing.
The drink, yeah, it's over for me. It's done. I don't need no more. I don't need no more. Fucked up.
Wait, CC92 said the chicken song.
Oh, hell no. Hell no. And who put that on? And who put that song on, though? That's crazy.
I'm just picking.
It's hype.
That's crazy work.
Yo.
No, wait, finish the story.
Wait, my pants.
So-
Look at them. Piss myself. I'm piss myself.
Damn.
Long story short, me and Shorty in the bed, right? But she had a little daughter. The daughter was like 1 or some shit. Probably the cutest baby I ever seen in my life. She was so cute, it looked like AI. It
Damn.
was unreal, like unreal, like cartoon cute.
Damn.
Big eyes, cheekbone. She was just like, why? Like, how are you this cute? Like,
Beyond adorable.
beyond adorable. Love the kid. So we in the room.
Settle.
The daughter on the bed sleeping and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
She gonna tell me, let's put the baby on the floor so we can get on the bed. And I'm like,
Wow.
I told her straight up, I said, nah, we ain't doing that. I said, you ain't putting your daughter on the floor for a grown ass man like me.
Yeah, right.
I said, what we gonna do is leave the baby on the bed,
We can go in the bathroom or something.
and then no, get the blankets and all that. We go in the living room on the floor.
Right.
Like, we ain't gonna put a baby on the floor
Right.
for me.
That's kind of.
I said, there's no way I'm gonna allow you to do that. Like,
It wasn't her first time, obviously.
I don't know what other niggas you fucking with, but that type of shit show you the morality of the. What if I was to agree with you?
He's like, yeah, put it down there.
Yeah, that's crazy work. But
sure
I made
when
me
niggas
look
did.
at her sideways, like, how you going? That's your daughter. How you going? I didn't see her the same after that.
A couple niggas
She
agree with
ruined the lore.
Yeah,
of her.
yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, I'm out of here.
See, put that baby right in the floor.
I got a couple more.
Worst
Nah,
song.
What they
I got
talking
another
about?
one.
Alright, back.
I said you gotta fuck the Ludacris saying, move, bitch.
Get out the way.
Let me get the paper towel.
Toss her ass over around.
Let me get the paper towel.
Paper towel over there.
Describe what sex with you was like in
Thank
one
you.
word.
Wait, hold on. What is it?
Describe what sex with you was like in one word.
The card says, describe what sex with you is like in one word. I go first. Consider it.
Consider it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I was gonna say something crazy.
Yeah, I did.
Me and my ex used to talk about like, I used to tell her, talk to me when we have after sex. Did you come? Did you not come? What did you like? What didn't you like?
Right.
I don't know unless you tell me. I'm not gonna sit here and assume like I'm
True.
like I got it all figured out.
That's true.
What you like ain't what the last girl I dealt with like.
Right.
We used to have like grown conversations about like
That's
she should be
good,
like,
though.
yo,
That's
you
good,
remember
though.
when you did that? Keep doing that, but that other thing, don't do that again. That's the only way I would know. Don't do that again. Guess
That's-
what?
A lot of niggas
The
don't
last
ask
two
that.
bitches, they like that other thing.
Mhm.
You don't. You get what I'm saying?
You know what's
I'm
crazy? A lot of
considerate.
niggas don't ask that because
I'm
they worry about
considerate.
their know-it-all.
No, I'm considerate. I'm
That's a
considerate.
good word. That's a good word.
Considerate.
Anybody else?
Tyrant.
Damn.
Kitty said rememberable. I believe you for some reason. I just know that's true.
Remember.
I remember that.
Nah, and we only saying the
I
right
remember
thing.
that.
With consent.
Oh shit, cadence for the right person. Waterfall.
Wow.
Or like succulent.
Who said succulent?
You got a succulent girl? Wow.
Remember, we said creamy cadence last time.
Why you so
She had that exquisite? Ooh.
She said succulent.
Right.
You know what that word
Give me the
means?
tissue back. Right. Give me the paper towel back.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
The fucking head.
Cadence, do you stream asking for a brother?
Yeah.
Who beat your ass with another?
Yeah.
What's your answer?
Good question.
You stream? Mm-hmm. No way. What did you like to do?
I don't know. Pat, come back to me.
Indeed.
I be forgetting y'all married sometimes.
Yeah.
Y'all remembering each other. I can give y'all a skip on this one.
Yeah.
Some stuff y'all get. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Describe what sex is like with you.
I said tyrant.
You what?
Tyrant. Like, it just gets too tyrant after a while.
Yeah, nigga, you need to stop.
So yo, dig this, right? Can I tell another story?
Mm-hmm.
A while ago, I was tearing something up, right? And I was in the squat position. Boy, getting old.
Oh shit.
Boy, getting
Oh,
old.
you doing the baby boy.
Yeah, I was doing the baby boy.
Oh.
Cause she done got down and arched that ass up.
Oh,
Oh
shit.
Lord, your boy done
this
got
guy.
on it. Hut. 222. Your boy like that right there. Holding on to the waist, and I was digging. I was like, I gotta stop skipping leg day, nigga. Them thighs was firing up, nigga.
Jesus Christ.
Catch a cradle, but I got a cramp. I got a cramp.
Listen,
This
this is crazy. She said, what does you like to know? Hey, y'all, what y'all doing right now?
That was what I said,
That's what
though.
I'm saying. What y'all doing right now?
I was like,
I'm over here trying to get my leg game up, man.
Because a minute ago we was talking about Kitty with the knees. He just was like, yo, she stream?
Did y'all?
She stream, yeah.
He about to subscribe forever.
I said she streamed
my
today.
shit's fire ever.
I'm just picturing him like, okay, cool.
She'll be like, bro, what you doing? Kitty streaming, don't disturb.
She
me.
streamed? Okay, cool. Since she streamed.
Kitty got a new #1 fan right here. Yeah, right here.
Take my money.
Take my
Take my money. Yep.
I got another one for y'all. You got to describe your first interaction with porn. The funniest story it is.
You don't want that
First
story.
time.
Mm-mm.
What? You had to answer.
I didn't even know what porn was until I figured it out until one day.
I don't remember my first interaction.
What was
Oh,
my
I'm
interaction
lying.
with
My
it?
mom used to have the tapes.
What? What was the question?
Describe your first interaction with porn.
Oh, man.
Right.
Old school back then,
My man acid
VHS.
orgasmic. Oh, origamist.
Origamis. Oh, he folded it up.
Yeah, oh yeah, origami. What else?
He gonna fold you the fuck up. Your ass gonna be like this.
Nigga say you about to look like Oni Ann's pretzel. Damn.
These 5'3" niggas is crazy. Yeah.
I'm dead.
Orgasmic is
I'm
crazy.
dead.
For me, back then, back then, I don't remember how old I was, but it was VHS tape time.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And it was a tape called Boogie in the Bush.
Boogie in the Bush.
Boogie in the Bush, and Ron Jeremy was on there.
Why you know his name? That's not irritating.
Everybody know Ron Jeremy with the mustache.
Ron Jeremy
Ron Jeremy
was tearing somebody's ass apart.
Yo, Ron
He
Jeremy
was just like,
I don't know who that.
Damn, not him tearing.
Ron Jeremy was tearing her ass up. I always make the joke about it because I'm like, I don't know who the girl was, but I knew Ron Jeremy was
Kitty.
Oh, y'all wild in these comments.
Yo, Kitty said, I mean, fold me.
Oh,
What's going on here? What kind of folding are we doing?
Like an origami?
We folding clothes? What we doing? It's crazy.
Damn.
Like a pretzel? Damn.
So that's what I said. You know, said origamist. I knew that. I was like, fold your ass up like this. It's your legs.
That's the folding master
it's
right
here. You wonder what the fuck going on.
Nah, a person that do origami. She said, wait.
See, Ash trying to back out of freakiness now.
He
got
said,
too freaky for him.
She said,
yeah.
He said, yeah, I'm an origamist. I'm about that time. Kidding. I'm about that time. KK said me too. He's just like, wait a minute. I'm talking about paper. Paper.
And
Paper. I'm folding paper. I'm folding paper. Okay, just folding paper.
Told you too? Oh, damn.
See, I made a fan.
KK said, I'm just a nigga. I'm just saying, a nigga love doing some yoga.
Kitty said it's been a long time. I'm letting you live. Yes, girl.
These niggas is limber.
Yeah.
Damn.
Y'all
like being folded like lawn chairs.
Listen to what I'm saying now.
Damn.
CC92 said, where Kitty, where you going
we're not
with
gonna
this?
stop, are we?
No. CC92, that's it. CC92. You might as well just change his name, CC92.
Yeah. What was the question again?
Yeah, I still get it.
What the fuck was it?
Oh, I don't flip these around.
Describe what sex with you is like in one word. That was the last one.
Damn, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
The boy good. The boy good.
I folded these shits up and everything and got it back to
a question.
the top card.
Before we get to that, let me ask a question. We all know that dating. No. It's okay for a guy to date several women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay for a woman to date several guys?
Absolutely.
Sex included?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Nah.
Why not?
So you dating 5 niggas, you fucking all 5 of them.
Right.
Yes.
Nope.
I'm single. I can do what I want.
It's a single hoe.
So what? So was a man.
We gonna opt out of this conversation.
We testing out the situation.
But why is it a problem for a woman
Because,
to do it and not a man?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why right now. See if you don't agree.
Okay.
A guy could be talking to 3 women and tell 3 women that he's talking to 3 women because he's not attached to 3 women. And even let them know that he's sexually involved with 3 women. Now, until you choose one, some women will go along with that. Right? Have a woman tell a guy she's fucking 3 other guys. We're all even.
But that's your insecurity.
That's not insecurity. I'm not sharing pussy with you.
No. But you're sharing a dick I'm fucking. That's weird.
What?
If I'm not
sharing
female,
no dick
you
fucking.
are.
Hold on, wait a minute
3 women you will fucking. So
wait, hold on, wait. I want to get something clear. I'm not sharing no dick.
How? If you just say you have sex with
I'm
3
giving
women?
the dick to 3 women.
That's sharing it amongst the 3 women.
Nah, don't go tell nobody that me and some other woman
it's the
is
lock
sharing
theory.
dicks.
Yeah.
Because it has lock
It's the
theory.
lock theory.
No, fuck that.
What do you mean fuck
Fuck
that?
that lock shit.
What you mean fuck
Yeah,
that lock shit?
the key lock
Yeah, no,
theory.
I know what you mean.
No.
A key that can open many locks is praised.
It's a useful key,
It's
but
a
if
useful
the
key.
lock is
That can
unlocked
be
by
opened
many
by
keys,
any
it's a
lock
useless
is
lock.
useless.
No.
What's the point of the lock if everybody has access to the lock?
Thank you, Kitty. A hole is a hole, no matter the gender.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Where we going? Wait a minute.
All you want.
Wait a minute. Where were you going with this, Kitty?
A hole is a hole, no matter the gender, like she said.
The fuck?
I don't agree.
See, an Ash said, I don't care if she talking multiple. Thank you, Ash. You wouldn't care if she.
I don't want a girl who, if today Sunday right now, she's gonna say today's the day we was official. Yesterday you fucked Teddy. Get the fuck out of my face.
But yesterday you fuck Keisha and tomorrow you fucking
Now
Tanya.
we worry about who I fuck.
See, no, absolutely not. That's the shit I be talking about with men. Why y'all always do that? That's so irritating. But let's say you get 2 or the 3 bitches pregnant, but I ain't get pregnant by none of these 5
I
niggas.
wouldn't get 2, 3 bitches pregnant.
How you know that?
Because I never done it.
It can happen.
Kenny said, "Ask Kit."
He got 2 girls.
But
I
they,
seen that.
Right.
Exactly.
He's
But
crazy.
that's what I'm saying. If they know about each other. Now,
No,
let
I
them-
seen a woman that's in a relationship with 2 men, and they are
that's,
okay
everybody
with
know that's weird.
that. How is that weird?
Them 2 niggas is bitches.
No, it's not.
They pussies.
She fucked one night, and the other one is cool.
No,
with
they
that.
all sleep in the
Low
same
vibrational
bed.
niggas.
There's low vibrational
So
niggas.
so the bitches.
I
got
know
low
that
vibration
my
bitches
wife
then?
is sucking
Some
this
bullshit.
nigga dick at any given night.
So
And then when you see me tomorrow, I'm like, hey, boo.
so what? You did it with the bitches. Last night you licked this
No,
bitch
whoa,
ass,
whoa,
and then the
whoa,
next
whoa,
day.
Whoa, who told you I was licking
What
ass?
happened to the ass part?
What's going on
She
with that?
always go right back there,
We're going to have to back that up. We're gonna
all
have
the way
to
back
back
there
it
to
on
that.
up like a
Oh my
U-Haul
God.
truck. I ain't eating
Why?
nobody ass.
Right, just say you hate women, right? Because it gives that men hate women.
Well, how does that mean we hate women?
Because why can't she do the same shit you could do?
Because I don't want my girl to be a hoe. What's not understandable
but you
about that?
being a hoe by fucking with
No,
3
because
bitches.
a man, I'm not cheating because they know.
But if a woman tell a man, look, I'm
Don't no
I'm
woman
talking
want
to
no
3
man
niggas.
who can't get no bitches. Argue with me.
No.
You don't want to be. I'm the only girl who's looking. Don't no woman want no weak ass, punk ass, bitch ass nigga.
No, they
Stop
don't.
that bullshit.
They don't.
No.
But
Stop
if
that
a girl
bullshit.
say, listen,
Stop
we're
that
just
bullshit.
dating.
You're the only one I've ever been with. You don't want that
Right,
nigga.
thank you, KK. You see, this
Get
is
outta
why I
here.
need another woman on the panel because I'm sick
Get
of
outta
this
here.
bullshit.
Don't
here.
no woman.
What if
But
a-
guess what? But guess what? A nigga will take a bitch that ain't been with any other nigga. There's a difference in that.
No.
Stop trying to argue with the facts.
Nah.
Stop trying to argue with the facts.
Nope.
Don't no
That's not a
woman.
fact. That's an
fuck
opinion.
that. Don't no woman
Nope.
want no nigga that no other bitch want.
Nope.
Y'all can go to hell.
No.
I'ma argue with y'all
No,
all day. You know
no.
why? Because GK been that nigga. I get more bitches when I'm being an asshole.
That's
I
the
live that example,
See,
nigga.
that's stupid bitches. See, that's
No,
stupid
it's
bitches.
all bitches.
Nope.
It's all bitches. I don't care what none of y'all want to say.
Nope.
I live that shit. And when I finally decide to be nice to one of y'all, that's the one that do me dirty. When I finally decide to change for you. But when I was fucking you, Keisha, Tamisha, and your friend that you knew about, y'all was all running me down. I'm not trying to hear none of y'all bullshit. Don't
Right,
none of y'all
she
want
right.
that nigga who can't pull no other bitch. No, nobody want that shit.
Well, so let me get the chat in there. KK said, listen, if you want monogamy, then be monogamous.
I didn't say monogamy.
But you can't be having sex with multiple women and not expect the same treatment.
That's okay if you want to do that, but I wouldn't wife that hoe.
You see what Kitty said? Not because you fucking the wrong one.
Nah, ain't got nothing to do with
son,
fucking
you
wrong
good
one.
ass
Fuck
wrong.
out of here. I'm arguing with all y'all tonight.
Nope.
Bring the heat.
Nope.
Bring on the heat. Fuck y'all. Bring on the heat.
Nope.
Bring on the heat.
Nope.
All y'all ain't shit.
So if a girl comes to you and be like, I'm talking to you and 2 other niggas.
If I meet you and we dating
And she tell you that?
and you talking about you talking to Tommy, Bobby, and Joe and me, and everybody's fucking you, I'm Gucci.
Why?
I don't want to fuck you, used up pussy bitch.
So your dick ain't used up? So you're not used up stinky dick
Nah.
nigga?
Well, to your
You had that stinky dick nigga?
Nah.
That's crazy.
You over here spreading for several niggas.
But you in there
Well,
sticking
to
your
your-
dick
to your-
into
it's a
mad
hoe.
holes.
You're a hoe.
well, to your
You're
theory.
unvaluable.
That's crazy.
You're unvaluable. Anybody with a key is cracking that.
No.
Well,
Fuck out of here.
So wait.
For men, we gotta go pick and choose, and we gotta find a way to make y'all choose us and be desirable.
But wait,
All
wait.
you gotta do is have a pussy.
I got a question for
Yeah,
you.
ask the question, please.
So
Dap me up, twin.
with that theory or with that mindset, it would imply that you only date women that are virgins or one sex partner.
Who, me?
Yeah.
No. What if I'm dating you? You're only dating me now.
But you said use the pussy. So
Yeah, whatever I decide to choose, what you've been before me,
right.
that's for the conversation for you and me to have. But while you're talking to me, you're talking to several other niggas, and they all fucking you right now? Absolutely not.
So what's the difference between used currently or used before?
What you did before me is what I choose to accept. That's on me to choose to accept what you did before me.
So you say that if you tell a girl that you fucking 3 bitches at the same time, you can do that because you a man.
It's more acceptable that way. I don't care what
That's
y'all want to say. It's not crazy. It's just more acceptable
word.
that way. I don't give a shit what y'all want to tell me. It's more acceptable that way. And that nigga is desirable. Fuck y'all.
Well, for me, no, I wouldn't deal with a nigga that's fucking 3
Yeah, alright,
bitches.
whatever. Everybody
I'm
else.
not doing that.
Whatever.
That's some stinky dick shit.
While you in a relationship, you be faithful. But a single woman, fucking Trevor, Noah, Tyrone, it's 4 niggas and they're 7 days a week.
Yeah.
You getting fucked 5 days a week by 5 different niggas. You can get the hell out of my face with that used up
That's
pussy.
nasty. I mean, that is used
Get
up.
the fuck out of here
But
with
your dick
that.
is used
I'm
up
Gucci
too.
on that.
It's gonna fall off in your sleep.
Nah.
Kaden said, "I'm sorry, but if a man tells me, hey, I want you, let's start talking, but I'm also fucking other women, I'm gonna walk away and laugh in your face because that's whore activities. If you want to be with me, it's only gotta be me." Kaden said, "No, that's not
I can
true.
agree that.
There's a dude I wanted. I gave him attention and everything, and I'm the end. And in the end,
I'm the one he ghosted, and he ghosted me.
Right.
So let me ask you a question. Out of the 3 men you fucking, do you see a relationship with them, or you just see sex?
What
Like,
did
you don't see nothing moving
the
forward?
3 what?
The 3 women that
Oh.
you say you fucking, do you see a relationship with one of them, or you just only see sex
I
with
mean,
them?
one, you don't have to fuck me.
But do you see them as?
It
okay,
depends on the vibration, who I like the most.
Not who got the best pussy.
That counts too.
So which one? So do you see a relationship?
I've had a relationship with women who had bad pussy, and I stayed with them.
Oh
damn. Bad pussy.
Like bad pussy
What
meaning
you mean
like
bad? Right.
like-
Like she don't put in work on her
I don't think he means it stank.
No, I mean
not
like
not
smell,
smell, but it ain't gushing like the other bitch.
Oh.
The head game ain't like the other bitch.
So her technique was bad.
But the other bitch I don't want to date.
Why not?
I don't want. But she's
don't get that
not
material.
she's not wife material.
Yeah,
So she's just for you to fuck then.
Right.
Right.
You I could take home to mom, but that pussy trash though.
So which one would you choose? The
I'm
one that pussy
hey,
trash
listen,
or
man,
the one
pussy
that...
trash. We can work on that. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
we can get it
But
together.
I'm not about to bring her home to mom talking about,
Yeah,
hey
that's
mom,
true.
look at Keisha.
Right.
And then 2 days later she's sucking Tom dick.
No, your brother right there.
Yeah, right there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like-
at the dinner table, and she just happened to drop
Yeah,
her
nah,
cup,
we're
and she
not
go
doing
under
that.
there and go,
At this age, I would
go,
choose a good woman over a good hoe.
Okay, I got another question for you. So would you have a threesome?
Yes, did it, done it.
No.
What about 2 niggas?
What are you doing?
Hell no.
I'm asking a question.
We was just talking about
I'm
this.
asking a question.
You talking about running a
I'm
train?
asking yes, and is that gay to you? I feel like it's
Running a
gay.
train?
Yeah.
I've never been in a train situation.
I feel like it's
I've been
gay.
in a situation where it was 2 niggas, 1 hoe, but I popped it first and did.
Okay, as long as you did, because you don't. I
I
feel like the
Why
second
am I in the
person waiting
room?
for the.
Why am I in the room?
Thank you.
My nigga was in the living room. Shorty came to check him, but she liked me.
Okay.
So in order for him to get some pussy, I got.
She said y'all ain't shit. Goddamn right. Hear these niggas,
Come on,
right?
twin. Come on, blood. You know what I'm saying? So in order for my man to get some pussy, I had to hit that. I was doing him a favor.
Right.
So would you go second? Would you ever go second?
No.
I agree.
Well, you want to know what's crazy though? I'm gonna keep it. Let me keep it a buck with chat. The reason why I can say no, I'm gonna keep it a buck. Not being cocky, I'll keep it 100. Cause I got options. Other niggas without options, I can't fault them for taking that second because niggas want some pussy. I'm gonna keep it a buck. Y'all don't have to agree, but I'm not a second place ass nigga because I can go somewhere. This nigga done drilled her out. She was shucking them off, and I'm going in next.
Right
Nah,
now.
right now. Like your dick is fresh on her lips, nigga.
Yeah, that's nasty.
I'm not cool with
that's
that.
not worth-
I'm not cool with
Would
that.
it be cool Would it be cool tomorrow?
That's dirty
I don't really
Right,
do
kid.
like my man's fucks you today, I'm gonna fuck you tomorrow. I don't coordinate like that. I don't coordinate like that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, we check.
Kitty said, Kaden said, y'all ain't shit, goddamn. Kitty said, let them think what they think. It's unfair to women to be held to a standard when men can do whatever they want.
No, but here's the funny thing.
Golden said, I don't got the energy for 2 women in my life permanently, but I can bring a second
So
girl
watch
in
this.
the
Let me
mix if I
answer
want.
Cadence.
Because my girl like girls too.
Let me answer Cadence. I do believe you can do whatever you want and I won't judge you. I just won't take you serious myself.
Right.
But I won't judge you.
Yeah, I get it.
You can do whatever you want. We all grown.
Yeah.
Do whatever the fuck you want. I do believe as an adult, you could. But me personally, nah. But remember, I got choices too.
Wow, Kitty, Jesus.
She
I
said, I
had
had
3 sons, 2 ways. 2 girls, 1 guy, and 2 guys, 1 girl.
Kitty?
Jesus.
Yeah, she took it in the ass.
He definitely sounded up now. He definitely.
And then she took it in
This
the
nigga
ass,
right
and
here.
then she was sucking for 3 hours. Oh.
He gonna do just like this.
Yup. How much your subscription is again?
So y'all won't
Telling
do 2
you.
guys. So you won't do a 2-guy threesome.
Why is me and another dick in the same room?
Because the girl wanted.
No.
And you
Just
can
like y'all
maintain
wanted.
yourself
That's
being
cool.
hard.
That's cool.
That's crazy.
But I just won't be one of the guys.
Because let's say your girl say, "Can we have a threesome?"
Wait,
she
first
agrees,
of all, pause right there.
She agrees to you to have another woman.
Pause right
to
there.
have another
Stop
man.
right there. I'm gonna tell you real quick.
Why?
Me and my girl ain't sharing nobody else. My girl come to me and say she want another dick in the room. I'm packing my bags and walking out.
What did she say? She wanted a female in the room.
No.
Okay, I'm so
No, I'm telling you right. I'm not sharing my personal girlfriend.
Selfish.
I get it. I get that.
Period.
Selfish.
I'm not
that.
sharing. If you my girlfriend,
You're
I'm
my
not.
girlfriend.
If you come to me with threesome talks, I got a problem with you.
Yeah,
now.
that means because you.
That's what you want to do.
You're not give. I'm not giving you enough.
Right. I got a problem with you. I don't share what's mine. Period.
Right. It's a difference if you met this girl
And
on
you
those
young
terms.
and y'all-
Right.
Right.
And this is what we do.
Right. If you met her
This
on
is our
those terms,
situation.
y'all was some single men and women. Y'all happen to be,
Right.
met in
Right.
a gathering situation,
You,
and her and her
Keisha
friend.
and Tamisha, yeah. As soon as you try
But
to put Bob
don't
in
be
the mix, I'm out.
15 years in a relationship
Yeah.
talking about some. Yeah, let's go get a girl.
Right. Yeah.
Let's go get a guy.
No.
No, I'm good. I'm cool over here.
But this generation.
No. Okay, they still putting this shit.
Yeah. KK said,
Yo,
I can say
Ashton,
the same.
Kitty, I'm signing up.
Look,
I am too. Same over here.
Damn.
Well, you got 3 subs.
Shit.
You got 3 subs without being online. She got 3 subs without being online.
They about to pay her mortgage. It's crazy.
Right now.
Wait, how much your rent?
Young cat.
How much your car insurance?
Young cat. Christmas is done. Finished.
Over. They got it planned out.
Scroll down. That's crazy. That's what ex-husband. That's different. It's an ex-husband. I asked the guys and they said they didn't give about the other dude. They just wanted me too. So
Wow.
Some niggas don't care.
I am
bisexual. But listen, do you? I ain't judging. Do you?
Yo, Kitty got a lot of tricks going on.
She bisexual, see?
Yep.
That's why. So it don't matter to her.
She swing both ways. She's like, yeah, I'm over here. Let me go
Ain't
over
no
here.
wrong with a girl being bisexual.
What about men being bisexual?
Stop it. That's just.
I gotta ask a female.
There ain't no such thing as bisexual, man.
It is. I follow one on
There
Facebook
is?
right now. He
Nah,
got a
there
wife and
isn't.
everything.
There ain't no such thing as bisexual.
It
Man.
really is. Though.
There
No,
is.
but there isn't.
Why you keep saying it?
He's saying there isn't because it's just guys who are gay for pay. That's
No,
how he
it's
feels.
not.
That's how he feels, you know. So
Let's not get into all.
I'm not gonna
Stop it.
He said, stop it.
Stop the bullshit.
I'm not gonna go
Stop it,
against what
Gigi.
you're saying.
Oh, no.
But it's
Yeah, I just
just-
keep on saying because he
You
passed
got
me.
anything else for us? Cause
Oh, no, wait.
Oh, she do got questions. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, my question was.
Question, chat. Question.
the queen got a
This
question
one,
for
this
us.
one, this one for now. How come
Ash
the
said I would
rules-
tip it to around
For the
that
fall-
shit.
Right.
For the parents in the room.
Yeah, of course.
I ain't no father.
How come the rules are different with young boys and girls? And why are they
That goes
raised
back to the
differently?
same thing, man.
Why?
Why y'all like to ask these
No,
dumbass questions?
no.
What's the question?
Like, if you have a daughter, why is her curfew? Let's say her curfew is 10, but your son is the same age and his curfew is 12.
First of all, how old are these kids when you got a curfew at 12? Let's be honest. What,
16.
for the son, you gotta be in the house before midnight, bro. I'm sorry, 12 is too late.
So would both your kids be
16.
the same curfew?
I'm a little different. 16. What you talking about? On a school day, you coming home from school? Why you coming 10 o'clock for?
Yeah.
No,
School.
I know. You
So
go
would
you go to
raise your-
school and you come
Would
home.
you raise your daughter and son the same, basically? Would you
Basically.
be more strict with your daughter?
I probably would because I don't want nobody fucking my daughter and get her pregnant.
It's not all about sex, though. What if you know you raised your daughter right? And she
Right.
ain't know that dumb
That's
shit?
absolutely facts.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the chances of harm
Yeah.
in all of the circle is higher with happening to a female.
Right. I was going with that narrative. The higher
It doesn't
the
mean
chances
your voice can't
of
get hurt either.
Absolutely not. That's why I'm saying at 16 you can't come at 12 o'clock either. That's pushing it too far.
right from coming from a father of 2 girls and soon be boy, and of course me having a younger brother who I'm 13 years apart from.
Mm-hmm.
I look at a level of when I'm training a male or teaching a male, it's a level of protection of yourself versus the female. I'm teaching protection. I gotta protect you.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
No,
So it's
I
more so
I
of,
get it.
like I gotta be there to safeguard you versus the male. I'm teaching you how to safeguard yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
And
it's a difference.
It's a big difference. And then there's more guys who will take advantage of a female in the world versus a female taking advantage of a guy.
Let's say how old
There's more. I'm not saying there's not no females who will take advantage of a guy, but there's more chances of a guy trying to take advantage of a female than a female take advantage of a guy.
You know, teen pregnancy is bad for both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
so
is.
I'm not gonna blame either side.
Right.
But you being the father of the daughter, that baby coming to your house.
That's true.
Yeah. That belly gotta get carried.
So what's a good dating age for your daughter and son? Would it be the same age?
35.
No, honestly, for real. Be for real. That's so realistic.
Let's be realistic. By the time kids get to high school, they start doing shit.
That's the thing.
You have to be a realistic parent.
Right.
Now, if my daughter is 16 and she say, "Hey, Pop, this is
movies.
fucking Johnny.
Right.
Seems like a decent kid. Do I have access to meet his parents?
Right.
How you guys doing?
Right.
Make sure you're decent people. All right, Johnny, I will allow you to take my daughter to the movies or whatever. Bring her back home safe.
Right.
Can I follow y'all around and see what y'all doing in that little 4, 5, 6 hours you going? No. But I need to.
I need to feel comfortable with you as a kid.
He's a decent person.
Right.
Because you know kids are gonna do what kids do.
Right.
You just have to try to contain and control in a reality kind of
and
way.
what you will get from them will be a facade, of course, because we all portrayed the facade too.
You know exactly what he's doing. I'm gonna be nice to your father. I'm gonna be nice to your mother. And this, that.
But I need to see
you come from a good home.
How much of the facade it is, because
you come from a good home.
cracks.
Are your parents good people?
Right.
This, that, and the third.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada.
It's only but so much of a facade you can put on.
Exactly.
It's only but so much.
So I would say, you get got them both the same way till they get older. But in certain situations, gotta be more protective of the girl than the boy. This is what it is.
Right.
Husbands are protective of wives.
Right.
Big brothers are protective of sisters.
Right.
This is what it is.
It's just a level of male dominance.
I know
alpha
big brothers.
mentality.
I know brothers who's just a few years off from their big sisters and they're the protector.
Mhm.
She's 27 and he's 22. He's twice his size already. He's the protector.
Right.
Even though she's older. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
This is what it is. What's the question, Cadence?
They were talking more about the one guy agreed to have a relationship with the girl and then adding a second person in.
CC92 wrote something in there.
It said more than one guy agreed to having the same relationship with that one girl. Let's say more than two. Again, who's the dad? Who would want to take? Who would want to take mantle of fatherhood?
What do you mean? I don't understand.
So, he's saying basically like if you are in a relationship, like the girl is sleeping with both guys, I guess. Yeah, this is what I'm portraying from that. Who actually is the dad of that? Who's taking fatherhood of the child once she gets pregnant?
Biological father.
Well, biologically, yeah, you can find that stuff out. But if you are in a polygamous relationship,
I guess
you got two dads.
The clear way to say it is you get a DNA test, you can know who's the actual dad.
Yeah, you got two dads.
You got two. That's weird. Okay.
Right. So, Kaden says, speaking of protection, knowing what you know about how some men act, how would it keeps moving up. How would you react to a guy that is being inappropriate to a female stranger you don't know? Would you just let it happen, or would you be willing to step in?
All right. Let's hold on now. Let all the men step up now. I don't protest for no inappropriate touching, talking. Listen. Don't touch nobody. You see what I'm saying? How would I react to somebody? Bro, you gotta get knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, you gotta get knocked out, bro.
Right. It's the difference between like he's shooting his shot, he's taking some game.
Right. We're all men here. You have to understand that. Hey, it's like look. You and me not friends.
Yeah.
You got a beautiful wife.
Yeah.
I don't know she's married.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy walking. I said, man, hey.
Right.
Excuse me, Miss Chocolate, baby.
Right.
How you doing, man? I buy you a cup of chocolate. You gonna drive with me? No, I'm married. I apologize. I didn't know you were married. Okay, no problem. That's a compliment to the lady.
Right.
You want to be that? Or
So I've been in plenty. Listen, I've been in clubs, dancing ass right here, getting the ass shake on me. Pow. You think I got this? I go to shoot my shot. She's like, nah, no disrespect. I got a man. I'm just here to have a good time tonight.
Right.
And I'm like, I apologize.
Right.
That's a good one.
But we're going to keep dancing.
What if your man's being disrespectful to his spouse? Do you get into it or do you leave it alone?
My man's being disrespectful to his spouse. You mean like he punching her out?
Yeah.
That's my man. I would stop him because I know what's gonna happen to him.
I'm stepping
protecting
in.
my boy.
I'm stepping in to stop him from hurting her, but
You
it's
going
more
to jail.
protection to him.
You going to
my
jail.
nigga, you about to go down for mad shit.
You got kids, all of this. What I've been in a situation like what I told my man was, bro, fuck me. Right now, you got an opportunity to just stop because you ain't touched nobody yet.
Right.
You can roll with me, you can dip, or I could dip by myself. But I'm
Right.
telling you right now, my nigga, you're not thinking clear. Come with me. Come to the
Right.
crib, hang out, take a couple of shots, we'll roll up.
Right.
Whatever the fuck you got to do.
Right.
But right now, I don't give a fuck what y'all arguing about. But nigga, we got to go. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
The nigga said, you know what? We out.
Right.
We left, bought a couple of 6-packs, we rolled up. We didn't even really talk about it that much. Nigga just needed to breathe.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's it.
To Caden's point, though,
He said, I don't
it's
mean
two
that.
sides to that a little bit
She said,
because
he said, I don't mean that, but like consistently harassing when the girl doesn't have, want, whatever the guy's offering, would y'all help? Right?
What do you mean? I mean,
After
Right,
the
right.
girls say no, they keep on trying.
like every
being
day
a
they
creep,
see
yeah,
you.
being
This,
a creep,
well, you
right.
got to report him.
right. If it's work related, of course you're gonna be. It's
gotta
this
report
channel
it,
to
right.
report people.
Right.
If you're just random street strangers, you just happen to be staying on the train platform,
Right.
and
Officers.
it's only a one-time interaction that you're gonna see that. So
Right. I
when
would
that
know
happens,
it's a day-to-day
you be like,
thing.
hey, all right. You're like, all right, you sitting there and you hear him kicking game, and she's not even hearing it. He's just like, yo, you don't hear me talking to you? Like,
Right.
what the fuck? Like,
Right.
Yeah, that's
like,
too
hey,
much.
yo, my nigga, what
I
you
don't
doing?
like all that. I don't like all
Because
that.
niggas be pushy. They
Bro,
really
me and a co-worker was leaving
Right.
work the other day. Legend.
Okay.
And MO. Both.
Well, okay.
So we was in the spot getting some flowers.
Yeah, yeah.
And a black lady was coming down. This white dude was getting at her.
Mm-hmm.
And she came in the store, but she wasn't like backing down. She was like, "Fuck you, whatever." They was about to fight. 90cc.
Yeah.
Are you a
CC
streamer
92.
too? Well, we give you a follow back. We show love here.
Yes,
But long
indeed,
story
yes,
short,
indeed.
they was like he was trying to hit her and shit. And she came in the store. To me and Legendary, like, we kind of put our hand out and we pushed her behind us and we looked at homie like, bro, like,
You about to get folded up.
bro, you're not about to beat no woman right in the same store. Me and my man standing right here, and she looked just like me, bro. Like, we told him, we was like, yo, bro. Chill, bro. Not even on some gangster shit. We was like, bro, it ain't worth it, bro. Just back up. Just leave it alone. Keep going. You know what I'm saying? Like on some real nigga shit. Keep
Take
going.
off.
He looked at me, that, and realized it was 3, and he realized it ain't gonna
Yeah,
happen.
I don't want
So
no parts of that.
to answer your question, I ain't really about just standing there and letting a nigga beat on a bitch. But I
Nah.
also ain't Hercules either.
Yeah.
Let's keep that shit for real though. You
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
me? But all that harassing, I feel like that's the corniest niggas on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You the corniest nigga on earth if you shoot. I've actually made friends with females
Mm-hmm.
that I've shot my shot with, and they was like, nah, I'm not feeling you like that. But I respected it.
Right.
We became cool as fuck.
Yeah, 'cause you ain't
I
got
could
force.
I couldn't go the rest of my life and never bring that day up again because you cool as fuck.
Right.
You told me no, okay, all right, it's all right.
Right,
That's
right,
it. But
right.
you still
But
cool
you know
as
what,
fuck.
A lot of niggas probably heard. Then she come, you an ugly ass bitch anyway. And then
Yeah,
like,
see, that's you a corny nigga.
Yeah,
Cornball ass,
That's
and that's why I was going.
I
Like, it's
can't with all
cornball niggas
that.
that be on that type of
I
shit.
can't
But
with all that.
to Caden's point as well, though, you want to be careful. This is piggybacking off of you saying you ain't, you're not Hercules or shit jumping in. You don't want to jump into a scenario where this is a normal toxicity day for them.
Right.
This is an ongoing relationship.
Yeah, they
for
gonna
them.
turn on you.
Right. He arguing with her. Fuck you, bitch. Fuck you, nigga. Bitch ass, blah, blah, blah. All that good shit. Then turn around. You like, hey, chill, my nigga. Like, you wilding too much. And then you and him get to scuffle. When she's bust you side your head with
But
the
in the
scuffle.
same breath, though, you would just have to stop being friends with
Bro,
him.
living in
altogether.
New York, I seen that shit too.
Stop being friends with him. Why do you have to keep being friends with this nigga?
I seen a nigga on the train years ago arguing with this chick, this girl, and she pregnant. And he was about to slap her up. And he was like shaking her and shit. Like it was to a point where me and a couple of niggas stuff like, yo, my man, she pregnant. Like, look, you might want to chill. Like, relax, bro. Like, again, I ain't Hercules, but like, yo, bro, like, she pregnant, bro. Like, cool out. Like, there's like 50 niggas on this car that's about to bust your ass right now.
Right.
You know what ended up happening?
She turned on him.
She turned on us.
Yeah.
She was just, Shorty dead ass said,
Mind your fucking business.
you know what, Shorty, basically that, you know what she said? He gonna beat me now or he gonna beat me when we get home anyway. She was like, all y'all doing is making it worse for me. Niggas was just like,
that's sad.
bro, I wanted to cry. Real shit. I wanted to cry.
Yeah,
Because
she's
she's pregnant.
And she used to.
You can see the belly.
She probably preferred to get ass
And
beat in
this
front of
nigga
y'all,
is
so he won't take it
clearly
too far.
about to fuck her up.
And she probably felt safer getting beat on the train amongst y'all than going
She
home
told
and
us
nobody
basically,
there.
like, he hit me now, you're gonna beat me when we get home anyway. So y'all just chill.
So bad.
It's so bad.
Drop a bomb for Kitty for giving CC.
Oh, that was
92.
Kitty?
Yep.
Oh, CC.
Yeah, CC 92.
Yo, just go ahead and change your name, man. Just go ahead and change your name. Let's just go ahead and change your name.
Appreciate you, Kitty.
Appreciate you so much, Kitty. Just go ahead and change your name, family. It's
Cole just
CC.
said something I want to just tap in with because it's about the subject we're talking about. Is that I'm going to step in physically if it's physical.
Right.
I'm going to step in with words if it's verbal. But at the end of the day, you can't be a babysitter and make other people's business your own.
That's a fact. I agree.
CC92 is not a streamer, by the way.
Not a streamer?
No, he said nope.
Appreciate the follow, though. Listen. Just for anybody that's lurking, CC92. We do this every Sunday at 6 p.m. It's called the Game Lounge. Every other day I do stream. I stream at least 6 days out of the week, so I do play games and everything like that. But every Sunday, I'm the host, co-host, queen of the show.
Yes.
And our two YNs that I pulled up today. We here every Sunday. And every Sunday we got something going on. 6 p.m. Make sure you pull up.
Eastern Standard Time, because I know you're in Malaysia. So
Eastern Standard Time.
Right.
Yes.
Make sure we tap in and look at some of our previous videos, as well as go to our website,
TikTok,
GameLounge.live.
What day is it for you?
Yeah, TikTok, YouTube.
What day is it for you?
Instagram.
She said it's not Sunday for her.
She maybe is a few hours ahead.
Yeah.
She's probably already Monday.
Right.
So
Probably consider.
It's Monday for me.
Oh, wow.
Monday for you.
So, well, how long we been on? 6?
Yeah.
So that's 3 hours earlier is when we start. Whatever it is, time you at now, 3 hours ago is when we start every Sunday.
Yes.
Basically, right?
It says Monday, 10 p.m.
God damn.
Right.
So 3 hours ago was 6, 7.
What time would it be?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. Monday for her.
7 p.m.
So 7 p.m. Monday for you is Game Lounge time for us. So whenever you get time, tap in with us. So we always here. We're doing all kind of subject matter. Mr. Worldwide.
That's crazy.
Don Ivy gave me that name, and it's
crazy.
sticking.
Yeah.
Mr. Worldwide.
Let's
hey,
go.
Shout
Let's
out.
go. Shout out to Don Ivy. Drop a bomb for Don Ivy.
BT Gamer.
BT Gamer said, I got a question for everyone. What anime character would be your bodyguard?
Meliodas.
Anime? It can't be Superman.
Meliodas.
Goku.
If you say anime character, I'm going Goku. Like, what the fuck is wrong with y'all?
I'm going with the cheesy.
Matter of fact, I would even go
anime
above the Goku.
character ever, bro.
Give me Lord Zeno if we get a choice.
Yeah, if we got a choice, give me Zeno.
Give me Zeno.
Because Zeno's like, okay,
Meliodas.
I don't like you.
Yeah, like give me Zeno.
Meliodas.
Give me Sanji.
Zeno
Give me
has
Sanji
nothing
for
on
One
Mally.
Piece. He's gonna kick the shit out of me.
Meliodas to Zeno.
No.
I'm going Meliodas.
He's gonna say, "Oh, your name is Meliodas. I
honestly think Meliodas would have a problem with Krillin. And I'm being dead ass serious.
I don't think Zeno can take it.
What?
That's just my fault.
The nigga wipes out timelines.
Timeline.
He don't even have to fight you. He can wipe out your timeline.
Because he don't like you. Because he don't like what you got on.
I'm not even trying to hear him right now.
I understand
I'm
that,
not
but
trying to hear you.
No.
Full counter? Yes. Everything that exists in that realm of
the
timeline.
whole timeline.
God,
the whole
you
thing.
never existed to time itself. Period.
You see the Tournament of Power and everybody was like,
bro,
okay,
erased.
Universe 8, bye.
Gone. Not
Press
even
the button.
Universe
Everybody
8
was
when they
gone.
was fighting in Trunks' time.
Right.
Bro took out the whole timeline.
Done.
They said, okay.
He just was like, oh, he's really a bad meanie up there.
Yeah,
bye.
Yo, I'm going Zeno.
I'm going Sanji.
24 hours of pure. Yeah, every time Bigfoot is Bigfoot.
Bigfoot always. Bigfoot.
He's our. We love him.
Yeah, he's our community troll.
Yeah, we love him. We love this guy.
For Bigfoot.
Fucking Bigfoot ass nigga. That's my boy though. He from Memphis or shit. Some shit up there.
Kaden said Tanjiro Kamado and his demon sister too.
We ain't getting these pictures.
Have y'all seen them too?
We went for Zeno.
What
We
y'all
ain't
mean?
getting
Y'all survived and defeated some upper ranked demons with y'all first year of being Demon Slayer?
They are mad teams.
Zeno gonna say, Demon Slayer, bye.
Bro, Demon Slayer?
Bye. It's over.
Who said Demon Slayer?
Cadence.
Cadence.
Yeah.
Nah,
Cadence.
They're nasty. Duo. They're nasty. Duo.
Mind you, with Zeno,
Demon Slayer gets one piece.
mind you, with Zeno, Zeno, comes maybe you can travel parallel universes, timeline. You will live forever.
He's the god of gods.
He's God in Dragon Ball. He's
Right.
God. He's God. Yeah, I don't know.
That's he's God, but I'm saying he's
Kitty,
the
we know
god
you go
of
with
gods.
Jinwoo. Kitty, that's not a bad option though. Because Jinwoo can heal, can resurrect. Not a bad option. I'm gonna be honest. No,
That's
no
it.
Zeno.
It's
But for
over.
ground
I
level,
can't remember
that's
that,
a pretty solid option. I would actually probably rather Jinwoo over Goku because of the no.
Fuck no. Fuck no. No.
The reason why I say that is not fighting of power or strength, healing, things like that. He has perks that's pretty quirky.
I hear you.
Now Goku's a way better option. Let's just not get twisted. Not talk about all that, but I'm
You would pick.
I'm
just
always
said.
lenient to people that can heal you and make you live longer.
I hear you.
That's the first.
I hear you. Boy, no way.
Not
happening.
I feel you.
Yes. Yes.
No, I'm asking him. I'm just saying, are God characters included in this question? Because if not, y'all can't use.
I'm going with Zeno. I'm already locked in.
Can't choose. No, I'm just saying. That's why I was asking. Is God characters?
After Zeno, if we talking about power, we going Goku. Like, stop the bullshit.
As an anime character?
Not even. If you want to go tier,
One Punch Man is the only one that can really stand toe to toe with Goku as an anime character.
You got Zeno, then you got like the Angels and shit.
Yeah.
Give me one of them.
The Grand Priest.
Grand Priest, yeah. One of them motherfuckers or some shit.
That nigga's a Dragon Ball character. Fuck that shit.
No, but what they can do, Rose, it's unmatched in most of the anime verse.
If that was on regular,
She said, "Did you show me the Goku cat? What Goku cat?"
I will show you too. Yes.
If that was doing the regular anime character,
Okay.
Damn it, Kitty, put it in the chat
Sanji,
again.
Sanji.
Put it in the chat again.
Fuck,
I didn't
Sanji
show
or
you because I was
fucking
gonna surprise you with it.
Oh shit, my bad.
Put it in the chat though, Kitty. Put it in the chat.
BTA said Luffy for me. I got Sanji. We on teams. Fuck that
No.
shit. We on teams.
Luffy and Sanji. It's
Again,
over.
if we're talking like a world where there's like other threats that may come and get you, Luffy and Sanji's not enough, man.
Not enough.
They're not enough.
Give Fabi for
And I love
Ultra
Luffy.
Instinct, bro.
Dirty
They
Dan,
have
my
to.
guy. What's
Dirty
up with
Dan,
you?
drop my ball, but
Dirty Dan
Dan.
showed up late to the party,
I'm Dirty
motherfucker.
Dan.
My man Dirty Dizzle. What's going on with you, bro?
We were just talking about Dirty Dan earlier about that's the one you don't want to fuck
Yeah, that's
with.
he's the Street Fighter player, the Zangief. You don't want no parts of that.
I don't fuck with Zangief.
Nah, you don't want no parts of his
You know,
Uncle Geef.
you won't fuck with Zangief after he slam you all over the place. He be busting ass with that damn Z.
He will slam you on your neck, and as soon as you get up and try to jump, he in the air with you, taking you up for a ride, bring you back down. It's over for that, bro.
Y'all want to do one more?
We can close it out. Yeah.
Close out and do one more.
Do your best
Huh?
Trump impression.
Yeah, more. Right, we can close it out then.
Yeah, I did all mine.
Do your best Trump impression.
My bad.
What about a pussy?
Because you know,
There you go.
the guy's over China.
China.
We don't
You
like
gotta do
them
this right here, yeah.
because you know America. We have everything, and that's all. Yeah.
You know,
All right.
You know,
Usual fashion. This is why.
This is why we got the bendy straws.
It don't even look like his wife likes touching him. It's crazy.
Kaden said, "Listen, if I can't pick my damn Demon Slayer, then I would pick Zoro from One Piece. Zoro is
Everybody moving in One Piece. I like
Why?
y'all. I fucks with
I
y'all.
would rather go to
They gonna
Naruto
say,
before I go to One Piece.
bye.
Nah, it's good. I love One Piece. It's
He
good.
likes Ace. He likes Ace from One Piece.
But if you're talking about as a protector, give me like God,
Not
God
saying that I fuck up.
fucking
Not saying that I
Naruto and
fuck with
shit.
him.
Them niggas can
Shut
heal
up.
you too. Like,
Shut up.
Choose him. The fuck?
Don't matter. Shut up. Fuck you. Fuck you too.
all right, chat.
Oh, yeah,
It's about that time where we end our show.
Yep.
And as you know,
I had
we go
something
around the
very
panel,
interesting fun fact.
starting with my co-hosts,
Mm-hmm.
and do what you do.
Yes, I'll
Bring it
pass it
around.
around the room for everybody. Start with Clean Up Show, yeah? You want to start first? Or shoot?
Yes, it was a W stream. Nice combos, good games.
Uh-huh.
I had a good time. Thanks for tuning in. Until next Sunday, it's Monet to Monet.
Uh-huh. Yes, indeed. Clap for her. Clap for her. Why number one?
Funny stream, very funny, especially with Leone's belt.
Oh,
Yeah.
That-
He bring the pussy back up.
Yeah, yeah, just bring it right back. It's great.
It's crazy I didn't know Leone, but okay, anyway, yeah, very fun stream, definitely.
Come on,
Right,
birthday
right.
twin. Appreciate you.
Yes, indeed. Volume number two.
In this case, y'all didn't know, me and my man got the same birthday.
Right.
April 17th.
Mm-hmm.
What year were you born?
Oh, 03.
We were both born April 17, 2003.
Word?
Yeah,
Yep.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you YN for now?
I'm Hawaiian for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
For the rest of the show.
Cool.
Why
Oh,
number
today's
2?
Dirty Dan's birthday. Oh shit.
I got
Wait a
Happy
minute.
birthday!
Happy birthday, Dirty Dan birthday.
birthday.
Happy birthday, Dirty Dan.
Come on for goddamn
Come on,
Dirty
now,
Dan on his
let's
birthday.
give him a Superman. Let's give him a
Yeah.
Superman.
1, 2, 3. For Dirty Dan.
Yo, real talk though. Happy birthday to Dirty Dan from here in the Game Lounge family. More blessings for you, my brother. I
Right
appreciate
indeed.
you popping in on your birthday.
Yes,
now,
sir.
now we're blessed with your birthday. Thank
Right.
you very much, bro.
We appreciate that, bro.
Why number 2?
It's a good stream, funny ass stream. I did pull up, so I did have to come support. You know, show some love, show some support. So
Do appreciate you for popping up, Freddy Fox. You know you my man, dog.
Yes, indeed, man.
So,
CC92 said he's a leap year baby. So, so he's like really 8 years old, 6 to 8 years old right now.
Yeah, leap year baby. Crazy.
Yeah.
CC. That name is so ingrained.
It's ingrained. It's over.
ingrained. Like
Every time pop in, you see the long name up, CC92.
CC92, yeah. CJ.
Got another question here.
Mm-hmm.
You guys didn't answer my question from earlier.
What was the question?
What was the question?
What was the
BT
question?
Gamer?
You asked who was
Oh,
our,
I think Kitty put the plushie too right there. I think that's it.
That's the plushie?
You
Yeah.
asked us
Okay,
who
let me-
would our anime bodyguard be. We did
Yeah, that
answer
was the question.
That was
Yeah,
the
we just
question.
had a whole conversation about it.
Right.
Oh,
Fire.
That is nice.
That's
Wow.
fire.
Yeah,
I was gonna try and get one for you to put something representation of CJ on the couch, but
yes.
it's already up there. So
Yes. Real quick, y'all. I just want to show y'all real quick what
no,
it
that's
looks
just
like.
fire. That's just fire.
Oh my god.
I'm personally impressed with it. It's just hot.
Oh my god. Hold on, chat. I want y'all to see what I see. I want y'all to see what I see. God damn it.
That shit's hot. That shit's hot.
The Goku meow. The Goku meow meow.
That's just hot.
The Kamehame meow.
It's a low stock. Y'all ain't reading the low stock.
Oh yeah, it's low stock for sure. Yeah.
But BT, we did talk about your question. You was asking about our anime.
We did.
He's the one that asked about the
Oh,
anime
you
bodyguard,
guys-
right?
No, he said, do you guys do a Christmas special every year?
Okay, well, that's a good question. It's a good question. This is our first 12 months around.
Right.
The Thanksgiving was our first
First
Thanksgiving, first
yeah.
annual. So this Christmas will be our first annual
Christmas
episode.
Right,
and
right.
hey, well, look, listen, since you tapped in, we should be having a special guest that day.
Yeah.
On the 21st
Yeah.
is our Thanksgiving episode.
Uh-huh.
We should be having a special guest that day and an interview.
Right.
But keep watching.
Yeah.
Keep you posted. And since we're talking about it, January, we got some performances coming up again.
Yes,
So we're
yes,
going to
yes.
start the new year off with a serious bang. We got January's already filled up with 2 performances. We got the YN takeover coming. And we got White Boy Showdown.
Yes, yes.
That's between January and February. And I have to get a tattoo.
For the
And
500.
for the 500 followers. And if I miss the deadline for the tattoo, then I wear a costume
on
for
stream.
And then if it comes to that, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But don't come with no, listen, just don't come with
Not doing no Sailor Moon skirts
Wonder
and
Woman,
dresses,
like,
Wonder
let's not be
Woman
weird.
boobs out. Like,
Because I don't want to give y'all an option to tell me to do something. I'm going to tell y'all no.
yeah, it'd be dope for him to be sitting here in the orange gi with the little hair, the Goku hair.
It's not the golden
No,
boy.
no, it's not the
Because I
golden
know
boy.
they're not going to give me him.
Right, right,
That's
right,
two.
right. Yeah,
I
it's
wouldn't
too
mind doing, or even a Mario, whatever your Sonic, whatever.
yeah.
We can have a good time with it. You know what I'm saying? Or like some
Not
crazy
Sailor Moon,
character
Chun-Li and shit.
that y'all would never see me do. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, whatever. We goofy or some dumb shit. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But we can work that out. So
Jeff
yes.
said his birthday is birthday month is January, and
He's
Kitty
a
got
Capricorn?
the metal Sonic.
Okay,
meow.
first of all,
Wait,
Brooke and Jeff owes us a goddamn interview.
Yeah, wait. That's the
wait.
whole fact. God damn it, drop a bomb.
You owe us a
Jeff,
motherfucking
goddamn
interview,
it.
goddamn Jeff. Jeff.
I can't raise my voice too much because we play arc rated together. But we still want our Laugh to Death with BK Jeff episode. Can we get that? Can we get that,
Your
Jeff?
birthday's coming up. We can work something
My
out.
birthday's coming
Yeah.
up too.
When is your birthday?
December 22nd.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
That's the goddamn put up on that show.
Yeah.
Put up on that show.
Right. Pretty much.
Jeff, we got a lot of shit planned. YN Takeover, Tekken Tournament,
Right.
White Boy versus. We got 2 performances in January.
Yes.
We're keeping the entertainment coming for y'all. And on our Christmas show, the 21st.
Yes.
With a special guest that day. And
of course,
in the month of December, we will also be visiting another streamer's stream.
Yeah.
So the same person coming on the 21st, we're gonna go over to his place and we're gonna participate in his fun, activity.
How they do their thing over there. We're bringing the Game Lounge energy and style to his platform.
So we'll let y'all know, and then y'all pull up.
He said he waiting for the word from y'all.
Pull up on stream and watch that.
Okay, cool. So we gonna link, Jeff. We're gonna link and get it together.
All right, Jeff, we're gonna talk.
Okay, gotta run. I promised my cousin to go pick up. She's
right,
pick up hers Honda. Yeah, thank you. Of course.
Thank you for tuning in.
Drop a bomb for CC92.
CC92.
Yes, indeed. Every time we see that name, CC92, guys. CC92. Yeah. So kicking it over to me, as every episode we do, I always say it. It's an understatement to call this a podcast. It's an understatement to call this just a Twitch stream. It is a show, guys, and we've obviously made a full year, and it's such a great time with y'all, such a great time with all of us here, and I can't stress it enough. Make sure you tune in every Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
That's why he's the co-host. I would have forgot all that shit.
Right.
I would a Sunday 6 Eastern Standard. I would have forgot all that shit. I don't know what else to say, man. I had a great episode. This episode was a little different.
Yeah.
We just kind of kicked it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's holiday season.
Yeah.
This is just like the family getting together and we kicking it. You know what I'm saying?
It's fun time. We stuck to programming with our trailers, our games, our style. But then it was just like, let's run on the tangent a little bit.
Right. Exactly. And let chat take over and see what they want to talk about.
Yeah. And we got a couple. We got a new follower. We got
new members to the family and all that.
So why not?
But seriously though, I had a great time. We passed 12 months doing this, and it's been growing and getting better and better and better and better and better. And I want to thank everybody here, my co-hosts and Miss Wife.
Yep. Caden's birthday's in May. I see that.
In May. Okay. Hey, Cadence, keep us tapped in. We could give you a shout out on the lounge, or talk about it, or celebrate with you.
Right. Interviews in Brooklyn or New York, we can get it.
Hey,
yeah.
Cadence, we don't know where you at, but pull up to the game lounge if you close. Come on now.
If you're in New York, come on through.
But like I said, man, we were just kicking it with family, and you guys are family. You know what I'm saying? But we about to sign out. Come catch me tomorrow. I think my boy Legendary might put up tomorrow. Cozy got time. We'll do some more Zelda.
Yeah.
And y'all definitely know me and Aloy gonna be out there kicking ass.
Yeah.
And all y'all know, we stay on that Street Fighter.
Yep, for sure.
So y'all already know what time it is. It's your boy, Golden Crush 200, aka Mr. 200. We out.